In an old diary kept by an elderly resident of a village, the following was recorded. One day, a foreigner arrived in the village. He didn't make much of an impression, but he seemed to have gone through something terrible, as there was a sense of danger in his eyes. He carried a sword with him, and the man writing the diary honestly preferred that he would leave. However, the kind village chief decided to take him in. As for the diary author, he simply set it aside and continued tending to his own affairs. 4 days passed since the foreigner's arrival. He trained in the courtyard of the house where he was staying, and lived so quietly that it almost felt like he wasn't there at all. Still, some of the more curious villagers showed interest in him. The diary author, however, did not. 10 days after the man's arrival, he finally discovered what the foreigner was doing. Some boys who peeked over the fence said that he wielded his sword every day and trained non-stop until nightfall. It seemed there was some story behind it, but that was all they knew. Even so, the diarist didn't care at all. Another month passed, and the man was still swinging his sword in the yard. The diary author had never seen him in person, only heard comments from others. Another month went by, and the villagers kept talking about the man. He thought it was all nonsense and continued his routine as usual, until curiosity finally got the better of him. So he decided that, the next day, he would go see the man himself. He wanted to find out whether he was really as impressive as people said. He wanted to see how strong he was, how fast he was, and how refined his swordsmanship was. But when he finally went to see him, the experience was disappointing. For villagers who knew nothing about swordsmanship, it might have seemed impressive. However, for someone who had once served in the army, there was nothing special about it. In truth, the man's technique was merely mediocre. Even so, he immediately sensed that something must have been weighing on that swordsman's heart. There was something burning inside him. The diary author felt pity for the man, but decided he should stop caring about it. Then he left. Sometime later, he recorded in his diary the arrival of a new family in the village. It was a retired mercenary accompanied by his 2 children. The eldest daughter was named Rema, a pure-hearted young girl. To him, there was nothing more angelic than her smile. Over time, he found ways to talk with her, but that wasn't very important for the records. What he did note was that the swordsman continued swinging his blade. It had already been 3 years since that training began. After a long time, he picked up his pen again and wrote that, after 2 years of courtship, Rema had become his wife. There was nothing more he could possibly wish for. His days were filled with joy and happiness. And yet, the swordsman continued swinging his sword. Somehow, that man never left his mind. 5 years was a very long time. While countless people experienced moments of happiness and sorrow, that man remained alone in his garden, repeating the same movements with his sword. From that point on, the diary author began observing him every day. 5 years and 1 month. 5 years and 4 months. 6 years and 2 months. In the 6th year, on the 9th month and 3rd day, a heavy snowstorm fell over the village, but the swordsman trained anyway. During that same period, the diary author had a child with his beloved Rema, a girl named Laura. The villagers gathered to congratulate the family, and the man continued training. The 7th year came, then the 8th, then 15 years. The author continued recording everything. There were days when he didn't even check whether the swordsman was training or not, but he was certain that he was. Just as the sun rises every morning and the moon appears every night, that training had become something natural. The swordsman was surely still there. Much later, the man was awakened by his daughter Laura and his grandson. Laura asked her son not to disturb his grandfather, but since he was already awake, she explained that she would take the children to a fair in another village. Her father replied that it was fine and they could go ahead. Then he decided to take a walk through the village. By this time, he had already become the new village chief. As he walked through the streets and greeted the villagers, he thought about how time was truly a curious thing. The village had changed a lot over the years, but that courtyard hadn't. The same broken gate, the same garden, the same place where a swordsman trained every day. Nearly 37 years had passed. However, that day, the village chief saw something he had never imagined witnessing. When he opened the gate, he found the swordsman leaning against his sword as if it were a crutch. His body was cold and motionless. He was dead. Even so, his eyes still carried the same fury from decades ago. And even at the end of his life, he had never let go of his sword. The village chief gently laid the body down, closed his eyes, and arranged for his burial. As he performed that final act of respect, he sincerely wished that man had found a better place. Then, suddenly, a blonde boy awoke from that terrible dream. Meanwhile, in the Ferrera spiritual district, located south of the kingdom of Hale, a knight was explaining to a novice that few names were more famous than the district itself. Among them were the children of Baron Ferrera, in particular, Princess Khalil, who had received the title of sorceress at only 11 years old. She was considered a true prodigy. The novice knight was impressed by this, but another knight commented that she wasn't even the family's eldest child. His superior immediately reprimanded him, telling him not to say such things in front of the novice. The knight simply thought he already knew the true story, but chose to pretend otherwise. Without a doubt, Khalil was extremely famous, but there was someone even more well-known. Irene Ferrera. The young man was known by the nickname the Idle Noble. He lost his mother very early, and since then, he had done absolutely nothing for 15 years. He spent every day locked in his room, sleeping and avoiding any responsibility. That was how he earned that nickname. And honestly, losing one's mother right before one's eyes was something that would awaken anyone's compassion. It was a traumatic and terrible experience. At that moment, 2 people approached the knights. They were Amelia, the Baron's second wife, and Khalil, the prodigy princess. As soon as they arrived, Amelia asked who had given them permission to to be so insolent during duty. All the knights bowed and apologized, promising they would never do it again. The little girl asked if it was really true and wanted to know what they had just been doing, questioning whether it would truly never happen again. However, Amelia told her daughter that that was enough. The knights had probably already recognized their mistakes, hadn't they? They immediately replied that they had. Amelia then commented that she didn't even know what they were talking about, but instead of gossiping, they should focus on their work. The knights quickly dispersed, and once the two women left, everyone sighed in relief. They commented that the princess was truly impressive, while Amelia could be quite intimidating. Still, they agreed that the two were very different from those other two. Meanwhile, Aaron couldn't sleep in his room. At that hour, he should have been resting. It was true that sometimes he went a whole day without sleeping, but that dream had been too strange. Since then, something had changed. The sweet taste he felt when he was exhausted seemed real, as did the screams coming from his muscles. Above all, his body seemed to desire something. He couldn't stay still or calm. Because of that, he called one of the servants and asked for his sword. The servant was confused and asked if he really intended to exercise. Later, at the Ferreira family training ground, both knights and nobles were impressed. After all, the lazy young master had appeared at the training field. It was already rare to see him anywhere, so seeing him there was even more surprising. Many wondered if he truly intended to practice swordsmanship. Aaron approached the wooden swords, and the servant explained that although they were all made of wood, each had different characteristics depending on shape, size, and length. Furthermore, the young master had no familiarity with swords at all. If he waited a little longer, they could find a proper master to teach him. But Aaron simply replied that he didn't need it. Then he picked up a two-handed sword, exactly the same one that had appeared in his dream. One of the knights even wondered if he was dreaming. Another pinched his own cheek to check, but apparently it was real. Then Aaron raised the sword and began swinging it with great effort and difficulty. The weapon was far too heavy for him. Some nobles commented that it was truly pathetic. It was exactly what one would expect from someone who had spent his entire life doing nothing but sleeping. Others believed it had something to do with the heir of the Garun territory. After all, the son of the neighboring lord had recently humiliated the young master, and he had been unable to respond at the time. Perhaps he had been holding on to that resentment ever since. After a few comments, everyone returned to their duties. Still, they made bets on how long he would last. Most believed it would not exceed 30 minutes. The servant overheard all of this and, worried, explained that swordsmanship was a fundamental and very important art. Training alone would be extremely difficult. If he wished, they could find a worthy master to guide him, but Aaron did not respond. He was completely immersed in the training. Every time he swung the sword, it wasn't only his arms that screamed in pain. Every muscle in his body seemed to protest at once. Even stumbling and nearly falling due to the weight of the weapon, he did not want to give up. It was calming his body, his anxiety, and even the trembling in his hands. The more he tried to reproduce the movements he had seen in the dream, the more the weight in his heart slowly faded away. With each strike, his bad memories and worries seemed to be pushed further and further away. Because of that, he simply could not stop. He kept striking repeatedly until the servant finally asked him to end the training for the day. The sun was already setting. Only then did Aaron realize it was truly getting dark. Exhausted, he almost collapsed into the servant's arms. The servant commented that he had pushed himself too hard. In truth, Aaron hadn't even noticed how many hours had passed. He then asked if the servant had been waiting for him all that time. The man replied that, of course, he would not abandon him there. He had been calling him for quite a while, but the young master simply did not respond. The others would take care of cleaning the area. Now he needed to go inside and rest. Aaron agreed. Still, he wasn't sure if he would train again. That night, his entire body was sore. He concluded that he must have gone mad to do something like that. There was no way he would be able to sleep in that condition. But 5 minutes later, he was completely out cold. In the following days, his appetite increased significantly. During breakfast, the servant watched this without being able to hide his surprise. Then he asked if he would also go to the training field that day. Aaron replied yes, while continuing to eat voraciously. From that first day onward, he kept having the same dream every night. And in order to satisfy that strange need he felt within himself, he began training with the sword daily, even if reluctantly. However, one thing was undeniable. Every time he lifted the sword, any useless thoughts vanished immediately. Moreover, he was making progress. His physique improved every day. Because of that, he concluded that everything was fine. He just needed to eat well now so he could lift the sword again later. So Aaron asked for another serving of breakfast and ate a heavy meal. Meanwhile, at the training field, the knights were talking and placing bets on who would win the ongoing competition. It was then that an old man approached them and asked how to reach the training field. He introduced himself as a wandering knight and explained that he would like to visit the place while in that territory. He also mentioned that he had already received permission and began looking for the document that proved it. One of the knights replied that there was no need to worry. Their shift was almost over anyway, and they could guide him there. Upon arriving at the Ferreira family training field, the knights immediately noticed that Aaron was training once again. It was already the 4th consecutive day he had shown up there. One of the knights immediately celebrated, saying he had won the bet. The veteran, with no choice, handed over the money while complaining about his bad luck. Still, everyone was impressed. Who would have imagined that the young master would actually show up at the training field for 4 days in a row? When the old man asked the reason for that sudden change, one of the knights explained that the son of the Lord of Garen had recently humiliated the boy. In their opinion, that resentment would probably keep him training for at least a week. While listening to the conversation, the old man watched Eren swinging the sword. From what he could see, it didn't look like the boy was there just to pass the time. His swordsmanship was extremely poor. That was true. He barely had the strength to support the weight of the sword. His breathing was awkward, and his stamina was practically non-existent. Even so, he kept pushing forward. Perhaps he had started because of the humiliation he suffered. To the old man, practicing swordsmanship for such petty reasons was problematic. Still, there was something interesting about that boy. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind hit the training field. Everyone looked up at the sky and saw a huge griffin descending onto the area. Riding on it was Princess Khalil. The creature had the body of a tiger and the head of an eagle. Its skin looked as tough as steel, resembling the legendary beasts that were almost never seen in the world. When it landed, it destroyed part of the training ground's floor. However, it was not a real griffin. Giving movement to her own creations and filling them with energy as if they were alive was one of the specialties of the sorceress Khalil. As soon as she got off, she pointed at several knights and demanded explanations. Her gaze quickly fell on the old visitor. They said he was just a wandering knight, but she didn't seem very interested in the explanation. Then she asked why everyone was just standing there doing nothing. The knights quickly replied that they had just finished their shift. The veteran explained that they were simply carrying out a shift change with the workers and assured her they were not causing any problems. But Khalil asked if he was interrupting what she was saying. In her view, everyone was just chatting in the training field. At that moment, Eren stopped his own training and asked his sister what was going on. Without even looking directly at him, Khalil ordered him to stop immediately. She said he shouldn't be doing something so stupid, but Eren simply ignored her. He gripped the sword again and returned to his training movements. Irritated, Khalil asked if he really believed swordsmanship was something so simple. After spending his entire life sleeping and doing nothing, he wasn't going to change anything just by lifting a wooden sword. His skill was terrible. Even a rookie guard was better than him. And to make matters worse, he seemed to be doing it for such a petty reason. Before she could continue, Emilia called her daughter and asked her to stop bothering her brother. After that, she praised the knight's work and also asked Eren not to overdo his training. He politely replied that he would. Shortly afterward, Emilia and Khalil left. Only the griffin remained for a few more moments, frightening the knights. The old man watched everything in silence. Then he thought that this was indeed the famous Khalil Ferreira. She had appeared like a storm, caused enormous chaos, and disappeared just as quickly. Even with all that commotion around him, Eren continued training as if nothing had happened. His focus didn't waver for even a moment. That aroused even more curiosity in the old man. Perhaps it would be worth observing him for a few more days. Later that night, Khalil tried to sneak up to her brother's room. However, she was immediately intercepted by Eren's servant, who informed her that the young master was already asleep and suggested she return in the morning. Khalil replied that she needed to settle some matters with him. The servant then said he could deliver the message when Eren woke up. In response, Khalil released part of her magical pressure and asked if he was trying to defy her. Faced with that display of power, the man simply lowered his head. Satisfied, Khalil warned him not to tell anyone about what had happened that night. The next morning, Eren woke up to the sound of a small flute-playing cat doll playing a melody beside his bed. Near him was a letter. It was a message from Khalil, apologizing for what she had said at the training field. After hearing that he was putting in so much effort, and at least eating properly, she had ended up worrying about him. Because of that, she had left that magical doll to help him. At the end of the letter, she also asked him not to tell their mother that she had entered his room, but there was a message written on the back. It was from Emilia. She said she had already seen the letter and that, if Khalil bothered him again, he should let her know. Until then, she would pretend she knew nothing. Reading that, Eren realized that his family truly cared about him. Even though he had spent so much time just sleeping and wasting his days, they were still worried about him. Shortly after, he was called to have a meal with his family. It was the first time that had happened in a long while. Seeing the scene, Eren's servant could not hide his excitement. To him, it was obvious. The young master was truly changing. Later, Khalil kept placing more food on Eren's plate, while Emilia asked the reason for all of it. That was when Eren thanked his entire family. He explained that he had always wanted to say it, because they had taken care of him all this time, even when he did nothing but sleep. He had never been able to express his feelings before, but he loved them all. His father replied that he loved him as well, and that he did not need to apologize for anything. He said they could simply finish the meal in peace. However, he took the opportunity to mention that he had heard his son had been dedicating himself to swordsmanship recently. Training was good, but he should not overdo it. Eren replied that he was not overworking himself, and that everything was truly fine. In his mind, compared to the training he endured in his dreams, this was nothing. Later, at the training field, people were already commenting that it was Eren's 15th consecutive day of training. Many said he would soon reach his limit. However, what was even stranger was the presence of an old man who had settled there just to observe him. The man thought that it had already been about 10 days since he began watching the young master Ferreira train. At first, he believed the boy had started training out of pride or some inferiority inferiority complex, and so he expected him to give up quickly, but he had been completely wrong. The boy known as the idle noble, famous for having lived an extremely lazy life, continued training without showing any sign of reluctance. For someone who had practically never exercised, it was impressive. It was as if Eren lived each day with the mentality of a blacksmith hammering steel non-stop, as if he had lived that way for decades. Even so, the old man believed there were things that could only be gained through many years of maturity. One of them was an iron will, and at that moment, he was seeing exactly that in a 15-year-old boy. Because of this, he became curious about how far the boy could go. While Eren continued swinging his sword repeatedly, more and more people gathered to watch him. At one point, the old man asked one of the servants whether the young noble had ever received formal sword training. The servant replied that he had not. He said the boy had never had a teacher and had been practicing on his own like that from the beginning. The old man then asked who his future instructor would be. The servant answered that it had never really been a secret. As far as he knew, it would be a knight named Orne, or something like that. The old man immediately rejected the idea. In his opinion, that man spent the nights before training sessions drunk and distracted. He could not allow a rare gem like that boy to fall into the hands of someone like him. To him, Eren deserved far better than a man who only knew how to shout at soldiers, so he decided to act. It made no sense to find such a promising child and simply keep watching from the sidelines. Shortly afterward, he went to Lord Ferreira's office and told him everything he had observed during those days. The Lord became extremely excited upon hearing it. The possibility that his son truly had talent filled him with joy. The old man then suggested that a recommendation letter be prepared for the Kronos Academy, the best school of swordsmen on the entire continent. The academy accepted only talented children, regardless of nationality, gender, or social status. Simply being a student there guaranteed treatment comparable to that of nobility. Its reputation was even higher than that of the Royal Academy. Even so, Eren's father knew that entering that institution was extremely difficult. Staying there was even more challenging. He wasn't sure whether his son would be able to endure such intense competition. When he spoke with Eren, he explained all of this and made it clear that he would not force him down that path. If he didn't want to go, he could simply say no. His only goal was to make sure Eren understood the difficulties he would face. Eren asked for some time to think. He didn't know if he could adapt so quickly, especially after spending 10 years doing practically nothing. However, he also didn't want to continue living like that. For himself and for his family, he decided that he needed to change. After much reflection, he returned to his father's office and said that he wanted to leave. And so, he said goodbye to his entire family and began a long carriage journey with his servant, heading toward the academy. It was the first time the young master had ever left home alone. Before departure, the servant also gave him a gift sent by Lady Khalil. It was a necklace with a sword-shaped pendant, given as a symbol of good luck. When they finally arrived at the impressive academy, the servant said he would accompany him to the entrance. However, Eren replied that this was enough. From that moment on, he would just be another student and needed to learn to do things on his own. The servant became emotional upon hearing that. Then Eren asked him to wait for his return. The man replied that he would, and said he would await the young master's return with excellent results. At that same moment, another candidate arrived at the location. It was young Master Bart Lloyd of the Lloyd family, introduced by his knights in an extremely formal and pompous manner. A long sequence of titles, praises, and recommendations was announced, including the fact that he possessed a letter signed by the prestigious knight Colesway. While everyone seemed impressed by the presentation, no one truly cared much about it. The knights allowed him to enter without issue. Shortly after, Eren appeared alone and presented his own recommendation letter. It had been written by Bran Somerville, a wandering knight. Upon reading the name, the guards immediately showed respect. They said it was an honor to receive a young master of the Ferreira family, and also recognized Bran Somerville as the honored knight who had led battles during the conquest of the mines decades ago. Wishing him good luck, they allowed him to enter. After he passed, one of the older knights commented in surprise that Bran Somerville had never written a recommendation letter for anyone before. The younger knight replied that the boy must be the famous idle noble of the Ferreira family. At first glance, he seemed physically weak, so he couldn't understand what the old man had seen in him. The older knight simply replied that they would find out soon enough. When Eren opened the huge wooden doors of the academy auditorium, he realized that everyone was looking at him. For a moment, he felt nervous, but quickly calmed down after realizing it was only because he had just entered. Soon after, a veteran knight stepped onto the stage to welcome the 400 preliminary apprentices. He introduced himself as one of the instructors responsible for evaluating them. According to him, there were some very promising candidates that year. Among them, the most outstanding was Ilia Lindsay, the second genius of the Lindsay family. Her talent was considered even greater than that of her own brother. Upon hearing this, Bart Lloyd was not pleased at all. In his opinion, no one else had any real potential simply because she was there. He believed Ilia would trample over all the other candidates. The instructor then explained that they were not yet true apprentices. They were only preliminary apprentices. As everyone should already know, the path of a swordsman was extremely harsh. If they managed to pass the next 2 evaluation tests, they could remain at Kronos Academy for 1 year, keeping the title of preliminaries. Even so, many more tests awaited them in the future. Before starting, everyone had to leave their belongings aside and proceed to the outer courtyard, where the first stage of the evaluation would take place. Later, in front of a massive running track, the instructor explained that the area was used to develop fundamental physical physical abilities such as muscle endurance and respiratory capacity. The course had several curves, but it was still just a running track. Finally, he announced that it was time for the first physical aptitude test, and then he ran ahead of everyone else. The children were barely managing to keep up, and the instructor commented that their pace was still too slow, so he accelerated even further. By that point, everyone was already on the verge of collapsing just trying to follow, including Aaron. Bart even felt happy when he saw Aaron drop to his knees, so that nickname wasn't for nothing. Meanwhile, Aaron felt as if his heart might explode at any moment. He couldn't run anymore. The instructor noticed that everyone was falling behind that boy, and Aaron could no longer take even another step. Even so, he forced himself to stand up. That was nothing compared to the man who appeared in his dreams. He wanted to be like that man. He wanted to stand on equal footing with him, and for that, he needed to keep running. It was time to stop being lazy. The other instructor watched everything with great surprise. He was certain Aaron would give up immediately, but he realized the boy was in terrible condition. There came a moment when he collapsed on the ground, almost fainting. The second instructor had to act quickly to stop the first from running right over him. The knight thought he would definitely black out. He was completely exhausted and had pushed his body beyond its limits. Even so, it was interesting. Later, Aaron woke up in a bed in the infirmary. A man approached and told him not to worry. He introduced himself as Tarhal, the running instructor and head of the recovery room. Aaron thanked him for the care, and Tarhal replied that he really should be grateful. After all, if it weren't for him, things could have been much worse. He then commented that he would probably see Aaron Ferreira quite often from now on. He then handed the boy the test results, but he told him not to worry, because this was different from the midterm and final evaluations. Aaron had placed last, since he couldn't finish the race. Tarhal explained that he would not be eliminated because of that. It only served to give an idea of what needed improvement. It was also a way to motivate those at the bottom of the ranking. In a year's time, everything would be completely different, so he didn't need to worry too much. Even while trying to motivate him, Tarhal noticed that the boy didn't seem exactly sad. He was more thoughtful than discouraged. Then the instructor said it was time to get up. After all, it was the first day of classes. That morning, another instructor received all the students in a gigantic room. He introduced himself as Karaka, one of those responsible for the classes going forward. He explained that the daily routine would follow a fixed schedule. The students would wake up, have breakfast, do morning training, have lunch, attend afternoon training, have dinner, and then have mental training and liberal arts classes. Free time would only come after the full daily routine. From that moment on, the training hall, the indoor academy, and other areas would be open to the apprentices. Those who wanted to train on their own could use those spaces whenever they wished. Hearing that, Aaron became excited. Maybe he could finally use his sword. But the excitement didn't last long, because Karaka warned that any kind of weapons training was forbidden. The poor boy was completely devastated. At night, Bart Lloyd's group walked together through the corridors. They commented that liberal arts classes were always very boring. One of the boys said he almost fell asleep during class, while another replied that it happened because he was too stupid to understand the teacher's language. Soon after, they arrived at the academy. There, the apprentices were doing push-ups, pull-ups, bench presses, dumbbell exercises, and all kinds of general physical training. Everyone was working hard on that first day. Still, Bart's group believed they would soon get tired of that routine. Then Bart spotted Ilya Lindsay. The girl was doing squats with a bar loaded with absurd weights. It looked heavy enough to crush a cart. Right away, Bart thought the rumors were true. She was practically a monster. She didn't look like a preliminary apprentice at all. It was as if she was on a completely different level from the others. The group was impressed, but to relieve a bit of their envy, they decided to pick on poor Aaron, who was training nearby using only an unweighted bar. They said that effort was ridiculous and would lead nowhere. They also mocked him for fainting during the run, telling him to be careful not to pass out again. Meanwhile, Ilya Lindsay continued watching Aaron. When Bart looked away, he noticed another girl. It was Judith, who had placed second in the test and defeated him. Being a commoner, he assumed she must be very strong to have gone that far. Still, he kept staring at her, thinking he would not lose to her again. Noticing this, Judith asked if he had a problem with the way he was staring. Bart's group tried to defend him, but the boy himself wasn't too offended. Deep down, he knew he deserved it. After all, he was already starting to form a rivalry with her. Impatient, Judith told everyone to shut up and stop talking non-stop. That was when something caught the attention of the entire academy. Not only Judith, but practically everyone present looked in the same direction. Ilya Lindsay had approached Aaron to help him with his training. While he was doing bench presses, she corrected his movements and explained how to perform the exercise properly. Everyone watched the scene in disbelief. After helping him, she simply left. When Aaron noticed he was being watched, he turned his head toward the others. In an instant, everyone pretended to be looking elsewhere. Both Judith and Bart were frustrated that they hadn't managed to hear the conversation. Without wasting any time, Judith dropped the weights and left the others behind. She went straight to talk to Aaron. She said she wasn't interested in chatting with him, so she wanted quick answers. Her first question was about what Ilya Lindsay had said. When Aaron explained that she had simply corrected his posture and taught him how to properly use the equipment, Judith clearly showed she didn't fully believe him. Then she asked what their relationship was, whether they already knew each other, or even if they were dating. Aaron replied that it had been their first conversation. After that, Judith said fine, but advised him to stop making that idiot face, otherwise he would end up getting bullied. Without paying much attention, Aaron completely ignored her presence and went back to training. But soon, another person showed up to interrupt him. This time, it was Bart, who wanted to know what he had been talking about with the two girls. A month later, Bart was training with his group as usual. Meanwhile, Ilya Lindsay personally helped Aaron during his exercises, especially with squats. She corrected his breathing, posture, and movements, guiding him closely. Seeing that, Bart tried to focus on his own training. There was no point in thinking about the two of them all the time. Still, he couldn't accept the situation. After all, Ilya Lindsay was considered extraordinary, while Aaron Ferreira was the complete opposite of her. In his mind, it was impossible to believe that the boy had entered the academy by merit. Sooner or later, he would fall back into his old habits. To Bart, he was still a joke. After that, he went to the running track with his group. There, Judith was training alone. She was extremely dedicated when it came to running. Seeing her, one of the boys commented that a commoner like her really needed to work that hard. Bart Lloyd got furious at that and decided there was no more room for discussion. He said they would start running immediately and warned his group that if this already felt like too much for them, then they wouldn't be able to keep up with him. 2 months after the start of training, the instructors went to check on their students, the preliminary apprentices, in Klish and Karaka. As expected, the unrivaled trio was still training on their own. Karaka was referring to Judith, Bart Lloyd, and Ilya Lindsay. He commented that the lazy one, well, it was no longer accurate to call that boy lazy. He definitely no longer seemed idle. Later, one of the instructors announced that the semester evaluation had finally arrived. All students would take part, and the only requirement was to complete the course within the time limit. In practice, it would be a race against time. Some students complained that it seemed too difficult, but the instructor said it was nothing special. The test simply combined everything they had learned over the past 4 months, including running and swimming. Ranking didn't matter. What mattered was who could pass and who couldn't. However, there was an extra incentive. The swordmaster would personally reward the top 5 preliminary apprentices. The news excited many people. The evaluation would take place in 10 days, at 9 in the morning. There would also be no classes during this period, so everyone should use the time to train and improve their chances of passing. After that, the instructor wished everyone good luck. Bart Lloyd's group became worried about the difficulty of the exam, but Bart himself was thinking about other people. He was assessing Ilya Lindsay, Judith, and the other competitors. Even with conservative estimates, he saw no possibility of himself falling out of the top 5. Still, that boy, the former lazy one, kept bothering his thoughts. Later, Judith was breaking her personal record when she noticed that Aaron was nearly vomiting from exhaustion. It became clear to her that that crazy boy was pushing himself to the limit once again. His physical abilities had improved greatly, but she couldn't understand how he kept advancing like that. Thinking about it, she ended up wondering how she could have less perseverance than him. She would not accept that at all, so she continued training with even greater determination. On the first day of the instructor's evaluation, they concluded that about 30 people would be seriously competing that year. The sword master of the academy, Ian, appeared upon hearing this and commented that 30 was a considerable number. He said it was better to see it with his own eyes than rely on reports, so he had decided to come personally. Upon arriving, he greeted the new assistant and asked how old he appeared to be. Karaka replied that he looked about 52 years old. Ian laughed and said he was quite an amusing figure, although he didn't particularly like flattery. Even so, he stated that he would double his salary. After all, Ian was already 90 years old. Next, he commented that those students were very different from previous classes and attributed part of that to the instructor's hard work. Karaka, however, replied that he was greatly underestimating the students. He pointed to Ilya Lindsay as a true genius, someone who had never lost first place in any test and who fully deserved her reputation. Ian observed the girl and said he considered her a pity. She had the right to choose her own path, but he didn't understand why she was so obsessed with following exactly the same route as others. He hoped she would be able to overcome the feelings she had carried for so long. After that, he analyzed Judith and asked if anyone had ever tried to stop her. In his view, she was clearly pushing herself beyond her limits. He approached the girl to talk to her, and when he returned, she simply resumed training as if nothing had happened. Ian just shook his head and commented that she was truly stubborn. According to him, she would only stop if she had a truly convincing reason. Then he asked where Aaron Ferreira was. When they reached the boy, Ian spent nearly 30 minutes simply observing him. After that time, he left and told everyone to leave the boy alone and not worry about him. He explained that Aaron knew exactly when to stop and had perfect control over his mind and body. Later, Aaron Ferreira lay down to rest, completely exhausted. While recovering his strength, he began thinking about the strange things happening around him. The people who once mocked or ignored him now seemed more attentive to his presence. In addition, Ilya Lindsay had been helping him quite a lot. She didn't seem like the type of person who would help someone out of pity, so he couldn't understand her motives. In the end, he decided to stop thinking about it and simply rest. When he fell asleep, he once again saw that dream. It was precisely because of it that he spent so much time lying in bed. The feeling of that place reminded him of his mother's warm embrace, which he had lost. Because of that, part of him just wanted to stay there, lying down and sleeping forever, until a shining sword cut through the illusion. Aaron Ferreira felt that comfort trying to pull him back, but he chose to break free from it. He simply thanked everything he had received so far. Now, however, he needed to follow his own path. Once again motivated by the dream of that man who never gave up raising his sword, he got up and went to train for another day. When the evaluation day finally arrived, Aaron Ferreira appeared in silence. He was completely disheveled disheveled, as if he had trained all night. Bart Lloyd's group commented that he was an idiot. If the evaluation involved facing opponents directly, he would lose immediately in that condition. However, Bart Lloyd also noticed that Judith had been training hard in recent days. It was obvious she was in her worst physical condition. Even so, he believed he could secure his own position. Ilya Lindsay, meanwhile, found it strange that Aaron Ferreira wasn't even lifting his head. At that moment, the instructor announced that it was 8:55 and explained the rules of the intermediate evaluation once again. The course would be divided into 4 stages, each supervised by an instructor. Once participants reached the required score in a stage, they could move on to the next. It was an absolute evaluation, so they should not be influenced by their surroundings. The important thing was to stay focused and show their best performance. When the test began, everyone gave it their all. In the first stage, weightlifting, Ilya Lindsay surged ahead. Bart Lloyd was impressed by her speed, but he also managed to complete the test quickly. That's when he noticed that Aaron Ferreira seemed completely furious. The boy advanced like an out-of-control bulldozer. Bart Lloyd even wondered what had happened to that damn guy. He became so distracted watching him that, when he realized it, Ilya Lindsay had already finished the first stage. Shortly after, Aaron Ferreira also passed. Some participants told Bart Lloyd not to pay attention to him. After all, the boy seemed to be at his absolute limit. Meanwhile, Aaron thought they could laugh at him all they wanted. Upon reaching the second stage, box jumping, he also noticed he was surprised by himself. His body felt different, warm and full of energy. He didn't feel like he was overdoing it or pushing beyond his limits. On the contrary, he felt faster and stronger. The result was surprising. Aaron Ferreira completed the second stage before everyone else. This made Judith extremely irritated, causing her to speed up even more in weightlifting. Master Ian watched everything with pride. Meanwhile, Aaron had already reached the long-distance run, the third stage, but Ilya Lindsay was still ahead of him. For some reason, an intense sense of competitiveness rose within him. He wanted to overtake her at any cost, so he accelerated, but there was someone even faster than both of them. Judith shot forward like a rocket and dove straight into the next stage. She didn't want to give up after everything she had gone through to reach that point. As a mere commoner, all her life, she had faced prejudice from arrogant people, been told she would never succeed, and constantly judged. Even so, she kept giving her best every single day to reach that place. She advanced to the fourth stage, long-distance swimming. However, midway through the course, she felt a strong cramp. She had overexerted herself during the run. Shortly after, Ilya Lindsay overtook her. As she slowly sank, Judith thought she wouldn't make it. Even if she kept forcing herself, it wouldn't change the outcome. It was too frustrating. She had let herself get carried away and no longer had the strength to keep swimming. At that moment, Aaron Ferreira appeared. He was giving everything he had to complete the test, but still stopped to help her. He grabbed Judith and pulled her along with him. When she partially regained consciousness, she asked what he was doing. It was irritating. However, Aaron simply told her not to worry. The two reached the shore safely, and instructor Karaka immediately checked to see if Judith was alright. What surprised everyone most was that Aaron Ferreira had gone back to save her, and, after that, returned alone to complete the fourth stage. He kept swimming without stopping. He swam and swam until he finally reached the finish line. At the end of the day, many participants were late, and some even cried for failing to pass. However, Karaka said it was still too early to be discouraged. There would be a second evaluation round. According to him, the averages in the second round were usually much lower than in the first, but it was still perfectly possible to pass. This encouraged the students, who moved forward with renewed hope. Later, another instructor commented that, as expected, there were more successful candidates than the previous year. Karaka agreed, saying it was almost as if something, or someone, was motivating those children. Then he revealed something interesting. The hero of the day, who had saved Judith, finished in only 34th place out of the 35 who passed. It was Aaron Ferreira. Upon hearing this, Lance, one of the students, thought he only managed 5th place because that idiot Aaron Ferreira decided to play the hero. Even Bart Lloyd went to congratulate him on his placement. However, as he did so, he couldn't stop thinking about something. Throughout the entire evaluation, Aaron Ferreira's performance had been far beyond anything he himself could achieve. The boy had been practically a monster. If he hadn't stopped to help Judith, Aaron would certainly have finished ahead of him. Deep down, Bart Lloyd knew that. And he also knew he had completely lost. The next morning, early at dawn, Aaron Ferreira was already running again. That's when Ilya Lindsay approached him and asked why he had done it. He had lost his ranking just to help Judith. Aaron replied that he simply felt he had to do it. Ilya Lindsay countered that it made no sense. There were instructors ready throughout the evaluation. Any of them could have saved Judith without issue. On top of that, he had given up a reward offered by the greatest swordsman on the continent. And it wasn't just that. The same people who had mocked him before now had even more reason to despise him. But Aaron just smiled. He explained that he had once been known as the idle noble. In truth, many people still called him that. For a long time, he felt as if he were trapped in a swamp, not without reason, but also without making any effort to escape it. Even so, that pathetic Aaron Ferreira ended up being pulled out of that swamp. He was saved by his loving family. He was able to stand up again, thanks to the help of many people. Because of that, he believed it was also right to help someone when he had the chance. That was exactly why he saved Judith the day before. Hearing this, Ilya Lindsay fell silent for a few seconds. Then she turned to him and asked if it was true that he had never held a sword before last year. Aaron Ferreira confirmed without hesitation. Yes, that was exactly it. Ilya Lindsay explained that physical training and swordsmanship were very different things. Both required a great deal of hard work and skill, but to her, skill was the most important part. She commented that Aaron Ferreira had probably lost the opportunity to receive personal guidance from a master swordsman and that she would not offer her help again. She hoped he wouldn't regret that decision. Even so, Aaron asked why she had helped him in the first place. Ilya replied that even she wasn't sure. Maybe it was because she hated when people talked about others without truly knowing them. At the end of the evaluations, it was announced that 35 candidates had passed the first stage and 78 had passed the second, totaling 113 successful applicants. It was also stated that the top 5 preliminary apprentices from the first evaluation would receive a reward after a private meeting with the master swordsman. At that moment, Ian asked if they weren't forgetting someone. Then the instructor called Aaron Ferreira up to the stage. Everyone was shocked, but the master swordsman began to explain that competition was something very enjoyable. The desire not to be surpassed by those who pursued you could lead a person to achieve incredible feats. However, if someone became too consumed by that and stopped paying attention to what was happening around them, they might lose important things. According to him, Aaron Ferreira had not made that mistake. During the evaluation, he had put himself at risk in a situation where he could have fallen into an abyss, and because of that, he was able to save a companion. Some people might think differently, but both the master swordsman and all the instructors agreed that his actions deserved praise. For that reason, Aaron would also receive a reward. Later, in the master swordsman's office, a private meeting was held with the awarded students. During their conversation, Bart Lloyd said that he had finally understood a few things and admitted that his mindset had been too narrow. Ian replied that he didn't need to put himself down like that, since a truly narrow-minded person would not admit their mistakes as he had done. Still, Bart acknowledged that he had stubbornly insisted on his own methods until then. Now, following Ian's advice, if there was something he could learn from others, he would learn it. After Bart Lloyd left the room, Ian thought he was a very talented young man. He had understood the situation and shown determination to overcome his own weaknesses. He had the stubbornness and pride typical of a high-ranking noble, but nothing excessive. At that moment, Ian once again realized that this year was full of promising young people. Next to enter was Ilya Lindsay. As a reward, she asked for direct guidance from him. Ian responded with sincere advice. He told her she should not live guided by others and needed to follow her own path. He also said she could not remain trapped in that obsession and should return to her family to learn the sword style that belonged to them. However, Ilya insisted that she wanted his help. In response, Ian said it had been a mistake to think she would listen to advice. Then he asked if she would mind training in his office, since the space was large enough for it. After quite some time, it was finally the last person's turn, Aaron Ferreira. Ian asked what reward he wanted and said he didn't need to limit himself to something material. He could ask for anything freely. He was quite curious to hear the boy's answer, but Aaron surprised the master by asking how one made peace with another person. He admitted it sounded like a ridiculous request, but he genuinely didn't know how to handle the situation. Ian replied that he didn't need to apologize, and even thanked him for his honesty. At that moment, he thought the boy had spent 15 years locked in his room, and that this was essentially his first real experience interacting with people his age. It was natural that he would be confused about how to behave. Still, it seemed someone had extended a hand to that child. Before answering, Ian asked Aaron Ferreira to explain everything that had happened. After hearing the full story involving Ilya Lindsay, he gave the boy some advice and felt glad to be able to help him. It had been quite a while since he had given guidance unrelated to swordsmanship. In fact, he had never expected Ilya Lindsay and Aaron Ferreira to become friends. After that, they returned to the main topic. Ian's conscience would not allow him to reward Aaron with mere words. He wanted to teach the boy something about swordsmanship, since his advice in that area carried great value. For that reason, he asked him to ask any question related to the sword. However, Aaron Ferreira didn't know what to ask. He explained that he had only started using a sword a month before entering the school. Because of that, he didn't even know what questions he should be asking. Nervous, he began apologizing and said he might end up asking something absurd. Then Ian lightly tapped the table in front of him to get his attention and asked why he was apologizing so much. He said it was a habit he needed to break. As a swordsman, he should keep his chest high and move forward with confidence. That was another piece of advice he gave him. Finally, Ian decided to postpone Aaron's reward for another time. He said that Aaron could come back when he felt he was good enough, or even when he felt he was still not good enough. The decision would be his. When the right time came, Ian would teach him. Aaron Ferreira left the office deeply thanking Mr. Ian. After the boy was gone, the swordsman master fell into thought. He was a very special child. Still, there was something different about him that Ian couldn't explain. Even though he knew so little about swordsmanship, Aaron didn't seem nervous or insecure. On the contrary, he gave the impression of having a very clear goal. It was as if he were receiving guidance from someone invisible. Watching him, Ian remembered another special child he had met years ago, someone with extraordinary talent, unwavering confidence, and an unpredictable personality. Indeed, Aaron Ferreira carried a very different aura. Later, when he returned to the academy to continue training, Judith noticed that he was practicing again and asked if he wasn't going to rest. After all, the official sword training would begin the next day. Still, she had approached him because she wanted to tell him something important. Judith thanked him for saving her life and promised that one day she would repay that that debt. After that, she told him they should start walking together from then on. Aaron Ferreira was confused by that, and she quickly asked what was wrong. She explained that they always ate alone in the dining hall, so they could simply eat together. Besides that, they could also train swordsmanship side by side. But Aaron remained silent, completely unresponsive. Judith then complained that it was humiliating, and told him to say something. A little awkward, he agreed and said it sounded like a good idea. Satisfied, she began to leave, saying she would no longer interfere in his training. She also joked that the big sister was leaving now. The funny thing was that she was 3 years younger than him. Still, Aaron Ferreira realized that feeling wasn't bad. For the first time in a long while, he had someone to keep him company. Even before official sword training had begun, the two could already be seen walking together around the academy. Bart Lloyd's group found this very strange. Judith had never been so polite and gentle with anyone like that before. They assumed it was because Aaron had saved her life. However, for Bart Lloyd, something else was stranger. Up to that point, Ilya Lindsay had not spoken to Aaron Ferreira even once. To him, something must have happened between the two. Shortly after, the instructors, together with Ian, announced the start of swordsmanship classes. They explained that the students were free to use everything they had gained over the past 4 months of training. During the next 2 hours, they could freely practice with any wooden sword available. Judith chose a long and heavy sword. Some instructors noticed this and assumed it had been intentional. Keeping the enthusiasm of those young students was important. Bart Lloyd, on the other hand, picked his rapier, the weapon he felt most comfortable with. Light, thin, and extremely agile. Meanwhile, everyone watched Aaron Ferreira slowly walk up to a massive two-handed sword. As soon as he gripped it, he began repeating the same strike he had seen the man from his dreams perform countless times. It was a simple movement, but heavy and precise. The other students weren't very impressed. Many thought he didn't seem that skilled. The instructors, however, had a different view. His movements were not yet refined, but his posture was surprisingly solid. With proper training, it could be refined. Bart Lloyd's group continued treating Aaron as just a novice who had never practiced swordsmanship before. Then, suddenly, Bart Lloyd approached and challenged him to a duel. Aaron Ferreira looked at Ian, seeking approval. The master simply nodded. With that, he accepted the challenge. One of the veteran instructors looked confused and asked what was going on. Duels normally only happened after formal sword classes. Another instructor also didn't understand why Bart Lloyd specifically wanted to fight Aaron Ferreira. Despite the instructor's concerns, Ian remained calm. He decided to make an exception that day and offered to serve as the judge for the duel. Before it began, he explained that if either of them felt the situation was becoming dangerous, they should speak up immediately. The two agreed, and the duel began. As expected, Bart Lloyd was much faster than Aaron Ferreira. Even so, by pure instinct, Aaron managed to block several attacks using the side of his massive sword. Still, he was grazed multiple times by the rapier. Bart's classmates even grew worried. They thought Aaron would be defeated immediately, but he was resisting better than they had expected. That was when Judith realized what was happening. That damn Bart Lloyd wasn't trying to win. He was testing Aaron Ferreira. After stepping back a few paces, Bart analyzed his opponent mentally. Aaron's reflexes weren't bad. However, he couldn't maintain proper balance while using that gigantic sword. His stance and movements were inefficient. On top of that, he didn't seem truly interested in swordsmanship. In fact, he was far worse than Bart had expected. Still, Bart Lloyd decided to test his strength. When he advanced again, Aaron Ferreira responded with the only move he knew, a powerful vertical strike from top to bottom. If that attack landed cleanly, it would likely knock any student unconscious for a long time. But Bart dodged it easily. Then he seized the opening to disarm Aaron and pointed his rapier at him, ending the duel. Later, Karaka gathered all the students and explained that the final activity of the day would be the official division of the swordsmanship classes. From the next day onward, training would be conducted separately. First, he announced the members of Class A. Among them were Ilya Lindsay, Bart Lloyd, and Judith. Then came the names for Class B, followed by Class 100. Hearing her name in Class A, Judith joked with Aaron Ferreira, saying that the big sister from Class A would take care of him. But as the names continued to be called, Aaron did not appear in Class 100, not in Class 500, not in Class E. When Karaka finished the list, everyone discovered that Aaron Ferreira had been placed alone in Class F. Later, while training alongside Judith, she remained furious at Bart Lloyd. She said that idiot had probably challenged Aaron just to feed his own ego and feel superior. To her, that behavior had nothing noble about it. Even while angry, she tried to cheer him up. She said he shouldn't be discouraged by the ranking and that they could still defeat Bart Lloyd in the final evaluation. But despite her words, Aaron Ferreira seemed bothered. However, the reason wasn't the defeat or being placed in Class F. Something else was occupying his thoughts. Aaron asked Judith not to be angry. He was truly grateful that she cared about him, but if she was upset because of him, it made him uncomfortable. Judith replied that she wasn't angry with him. In fact, she simply hated Bart Lloyd. Meanwhile, Bart Lloyd himself was deep in thought about what had happened. He had indeed wanted to test Aaron Ferreira's strength. At that moment, when he received the frontal strike, he had instinctively dodged it without even realizing it. But it wasn't just about Aaron's sword. His expression, his eyes, and his posture all seemed completely unshakable. That made Bart wonder what his own expression looked like when he wielded a sword. Later, Tarhal approached Aaron Ferreira and asked if he only knew vertical and horizontal strikes. Aaron said yes and apologized for it. However, Tarhal said there was no need to apologize, since he was there precisely to learn. Then he asked what Aaron thought thought he needed to reach the other students. Aaron replied that it might be hard work. Quickly, Tarhal drew a slash between them, cutting a crack into the ground. Then he explained that what Aaron needed was talent. Hard work was important, and depending on effort, a person could reach or even surpass those ahead of them. However, that didn't apply to Aaron, who was years behind the others. He had only 1 week to master the basic sword skills. If he succeeded, he would be promoted immediately to class 100. If not, he would remain in class F. And if he didn't even show talent for that, it might be better for him to leave the academy. Aaron said he would do his best. Tarhal simply told him to continue in his own way. From that day on, Aaron began training new movements daily with his heavy sword under Tarhal's supervision. On the second day, he started putting more strength into his shoulders. On the third, he could already perform spinning movements. On the fifth, his mobility with the sword had improved significantly. On the sixth day, even under the rain, he continued training without stopping. Watching all of this, Tarhal realized that the boy's rate of improvement was impressive. Aaron's effort was something beyond the ordinary. The more he observed him, the more he understood that he was very different from what he appeared to be. In the end, he truly did have talent for the sword. Later, Aaron Ferreira decided to show his skills to Judith. He asked her to evaluate him, since the test would take place the next day. Judith replied that if it was ridiculous, she would kick him. However, when Aaron demonstrated his movements, she was surprised. In the end, she simply gave him a thumbs up. He had passed. On the day of the evaluation, Tarhal returned to the infirmary. When asked if that meant the boy had succeeded, he replied that yes, Aaron Ferreira was ready. He had been promoted to class 100. Later, in the dining hall, Judith was devouring about 50 plates of food. While eating, she told Aaron to fill his stomach as well. She didn't understand how someone who moved much more than her could eat so little. At that moment, Lance passed by and commented that there was a hippo there. Judith immediately asked if he liked her, since he seemed frustrated about never receiving her attention. Lance called her crazy in response, but Bart Lloyd quickly interrupted the argument. He told his companion to move on and stop speaking badly about others, since it brought nothing good. Without arguing, they walked away. After they left, Judith commented that Bart Lloyd seemed much more relaxed lately. While they were talking, Aaron Ferreira noticed Ilya Lindsay sitting alone in the dining hall. Judith then asked if the two of them were avoiding each other and if they had fought. Aaron replied that he didn't know. Maybe it could be considered a fight. He then asked Judith if she and Ilya had become friends, since they were both in class A and must see each other often. Judith said no. In fact, nothing had changed. Ilya Lindsay was still the top student in class A. The instructors constantly praised her absurd talent, but the gap between her and the others was so large that everyone felt inferior. Because of that, no one tried to approach her. She also mentioned she had heard that Ilya often went alone to the Soyan arsenal in the late afternoon to practice the Lindsay family techniques. In any case, Judith said Aaron needed to be promoted quickly so he could train alongside her. He told her to stop joking. Later, the two of them were sparring while Bart Lloyd watched from a distance. Judith was much faster, and not just because of her weapon. She fought fiercely, almost like a beast. Her attacks were brutal and came in constant succession, leaving no room to breathe. Still, when he managed to create distance, Aaron Ferreira prepared his famous vertical strike. However, it was only a feint. At the last moment, he changed the trajectory and executed a horizontal slash that struck Judith's sword, nearly throwing her off balance. She admitted she liked that move, but she didn't take long to react. Judith rushed in, pressed her chest against his, and knocked him to the ground, pinning him immediately. She admitted that Aaron had improved a lot, but he was still far from defeating the big sister. Before leaving, she also commented that if he went to the Soyan arsenal, he would probably find Ilya Lindsay there alone. Aaron thought for a moment and concluded that it might be a good opportunity. Later, Ilya Lindsay was training in full concentration when she noticed someone approaching. It was Aaron Ferreira. He handed her a small pouch containing a gift and a letter. Confused, Ilya asked why he was doing that. Aaron explained that he had a younger sister who wasn't very good at dealing with people or expressing her feelings. Because of that, she often argued with him and said horrible things. However, the next day, she would always leave an apology letter, along with a gift. He said he was also bad with words. Organizing his feelings was difficult, so he decided to write a letter. Now he understood better why his sister used to do that. When Ilya asked if he believed this would make her help him again, Aaron replied that it didn't matter to him. In the end, he just wanted to apologize for interrupting her once again. Later, in the dormitory, Ilya Lindsay read the letter. She thought Aaron was quite childish. However, when she opened the gift, she was completely surprised. It was an Amur Adonis bracelet. Looking at it, she thought she might have been too focused on her training. The next morning, several students gathered to watch the duel between Judith and Aaron Ferreira. Judith warned that she would increase the intensity that day. However, before the fight could begin, Bart Lloyd approached. Judith had already assumed he was looking for trouble, but that wasn't the case. Bart said he needed to talk to Aaron Ferreira. He explained that he wanted to start training regularly with him and Judith. After what he had seen in the intermediate assessment and also in the recent fight, he realized that Aaron possessed a level of focus that even he himself did not have. Because of that, he wanted Aaron to teach him how to develop that concentration. In return, he would teach everything he knew about swordsmanship. The proposal was simple: to compensate for each other's weaknesses and grow stronger together through training. Here is the adjusted passage in the style you requested. Judith asked what Bart Lloyd was plotting. After testing Aaron Ferreira like that during their duel, it looked like he was trying to take advantage of him in some way. Bart Lloyd replied that she was right. In fact, he did intend to benefit from it, but he saw nothing wrong with that. He explained that he could grow on his own if he wanted to, but that method would be inefficient within the academy. Besides, he wouldn't be the only one benefiting. Both of them could use each other to become stronger. According to him, it was necessary to gain experience by training with different people. They needed to see the bigger picture. This was an academy. If they didn't take advantage of the relationships and opportunities there, everything would be meaningless. He was there to learn and to compete fiercely. The people who heard that were shocked, but also motivated. After all, an A-class student was speaking like that to someone from C-class. Aaron Ferreira agreed with Bart Lloyd, but asked if it was really okay. He was still much weaker than him. Bart was far stronger, and might not even learn anything by training alongside him. But Bart Lloyd replied that Aaron had something he didn't. Ever since the intermediate assessment, he had been thinking about it. Aaron's focus and concentration were different. Everyone had the same amount of time in a day, but the density of that time seemed different for him. It was as if Aaron Ferreira didn't waste a single second of concentration, using 100% of his available time. Because of that, he asked how he managed to maintain that level of focus. Aaron replied that he didn't really know. Bart Lloyd said he had expected that answer. That was exactly why they needed to train together. In his opinion, all geniuses gave similar answers. Aaron Ferreira immediately replied that he was not a genius, but Bart thought otherwise. To him, every genius had their own specialty, and that was Aaron's. Before leaving, Bart Lloyd told Judith that he needed to attend his personal training that day, and asked if they could train together the next day. Judith replied that she had never agreed to train with him. Still, before leaving, Bart gave Aaron Ferreira a piece of advice. He said that he needed to stop putting himself down like that. He was a member of the Ferreira family, carried noble blood, and should take pride in it. He needed to lift his head and straighten his posture. Hearing that, Judith almost vomited. She swore she had just heard a compliment coming out of Bart Lloyd's mouth. The next morning, Bart Lloyd and Aaron Ferreira were already training together. During practice, Bart observed that Aaron's hand was fast, but explained that he needed to use his entire body during attacks. His footwork had to follow the movement, aligning with the rest of the body to allow proper extension of the strike. With a heavy sword, it wasn't just the arm that moved, but the entire body. To demonstrate, he performed a perfect thrust in front of him. At that moment, Judith walked by and said she didn't want to train with them. Bart Lloyd asked how long that would last. Aaron Ferreira replied that she wasn't even insulting anyone. If she kept this up, in a week she would probably be training alongside them. A few days later, during a meal in the dining hall, Ilya Lindsay passed by Aaron and commented that she had read his letter. Before he could respond, Judith appeared and asked what was going on. She teased Aaron, saying he had confessed his feelings to the bombshell. Aaron Ferreira immediately denied it, saying it wasn't anything like that. That night, however, he couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, he kept thinking about Bart Lloyd's words about concentration. Then he remembered how he had improved his focus in the past. Through that mysterious dream, he wondered if he would ever be able to become like that man. When he finally fell asleep, he returned to the same dream, but this time, everything felt different. Now he could feel something in his hands. He was no longer just an observer. Since he had already held a real sword, he recognized that sensation perfectly. For the first time, he managed to feel the strikes executed by the man in the dream. He woke up in the middle of the night with his heart racing. He felt he needed to pick up a sword immediately before that sensation disappeared. So he went out to train. For several nights in a row, he repeated the same process. He would dream, wake up, and rush to practice. As a result, his mornings became a disaster. He was constantly exhausted. During that period, Judith finally agreed to train with Bart Lloyd. But at that exact moment, while the two of them were training, Aaron Ferreira was asleep. Suddenly, he woke up, performed a sword movement in the air, and immediately went back to sleep. Bart Lloyd was completely confused when he saw that. Judith explained that he had been acting strange for a few days. Curious, Bart interrupted Aaron's rest and asked what he was doing. Aaron Ferreira replied that he was trying to improve his concentration. He admitted it wasn't working very well, but he also never believed it would work right away. Hearing that, Bart Lloyd asked if it was some kind of meditation. He had heard about that method before, so he decided to try it himself. First, he lay down to sleep, but ended up drooling and achieving nothing. Then he changed his strategy. He sat on the ground, crossed his legs, and assumed a meditation posture, saying that this was how people usually did it. Judith said it wouldn't work. Aaron Ferreira was a special case, but Bart Lloyd replied that he would never know unless he tried. Meanwhile, Ian was talking with Karaka and asked if anything important had happened recently. Karaka replied replied that no serious problems had occurred, but revealed an important update. Aaron Ferreira had been promoted to Class B. Apparently, the help he had received from Bart Lloyd and Judith had significantly accelerated his growth. Furthermore, Ian had been right about one thing. Ever since Bart Lloyd started acting differently, changes had begun to spread throughout the class. Bart Lloyd had unintentionally influenced everyone. Once he started meditating frequently, the other students soon began doing the same. Later, during an official duel class, he faced Judith and managed to defeat her. She complained that it had been a foul, but the instructor interrupted before she could continue. Judith stayed sulking, but said they would settle it in another duel after class. The instructor watched both of them with great interest. In his view, they were incredible students. Both were improving at an abnormal rate, especially Bart Lloyd. The gap between him and Judith was small, and the two were directly competing for second place in the class. Meanwhile, Bart thought that if he kept up that pace, he might even be able to defeat Ilya Lindsay. Meanwhile, Aaron Ferreira trained alone, away from the others, just like the man from his dreams. He liked that kind of training. Thanks to meditation, he had improved significantly over the past few months, but he still felt it wasn't enough. He still hadn't reached the level he was searching for. It was then that Bart Lloyd approached and commented that he was using vertical strikes too often. Shortly after, he announced that the master had summoned everyone to the martial arts arena. With all classes gathered, Ian took the floor. He reminded them that it had already been 9 months since they had entered the academy. During that time, they had undergone difficult evaluations and rigorous training, and many of them had improved tremendously. Without delay, he revealed the main topic, the final assessment. Unlike the intermediate assessment, they would not be evaluated based on time, score, or number of rounds. This time, the goal would be to analyze each student's potential. According to Ian, the concept might sound a bit abstract, but it wouldn't be hard to understand. Each student would need to demonstrate what they believe to be their greatest strength. They could present a finishing move, a special technique, or any skill that represented their best self. The important thing was to show their maximum potential. He said he was certain everyone would be able to do it, and asked them to make the most of the remaining 90 days of training. Then Ian revealed that he had also prepared a gift for the students. He removed his cloak, drew his sword, and said he would demonstrate only the simple sword dance of an old man. Even so, he hoped they would learn something by watching. Then he began. His first strike was radiant and beautiful. All eyes were fixed on his movements. The attacks were fast, fluid, and elegant. It truly looked like a dance. His arms, waist, and feet moved in perfect harmony. Aaron Ferreira was completely fascinated. In truth, that was exactly what Ian wanted. He wanted that boy to observe every movement closely. When he reached the final strike, everything felt like the final step of a grand waltz. After completing the demonstration, Ian sheathed his sword and declared that his dance ended there. Then he wished everyone good luck. The demonstration left the students deep in thought. Many began to reflect on their own sword styles and what path they should follow. Sometime later, after several duels against Judith, Bart Lloyd was resting beside her and commented that the master's sword dance had been incredible. She didn't respond. Bart insisted, asking if she was talking to a wall. Judith, without looking at him, simply asked him to be quiet for a moment. Noticing her behavior, Bart asked if she was worried about Aaron Ferreira. She admitted she was. She said he was still focusing almost exclusively on meditation, even with the final assessment approaching. Because of that, she wasn't sure he would perform well. But Bart Lloyd immediately disagreed. In his view, Aaron would definitely pass. To him, the boy was a true genius. Since the assessment would be based on potential, he couldn't imagine anyone with more potential than Aaron. After all, no one had grown as much over the past 9 months as he had. Hearing that, Judith finally relaxed. She realized she had been worrying too much. Then she stood up, drew her sword, and declared she would take first place. Bart Lloyd shook his head and replied that first place would still belong to Ilya Lindsay. After all, she came from the most prestigious family on the continent and mastered a legendary sword style that placed the Lindsay family among the greatest in the world. In his opinion, no one but her could occupy that position. Judith asked if he truly believed it was impossible to surpass that. Bart replied that he wasn't saying that. He simply believed the strength of the Lindsay family's sword style couldn't be ignored. She countered him. If that was the case, what was the point of the academy? What was so special about that family? Even her own brother had once been considered the greatest genius on the continent, yet he was defeated by a mere orphan. Hearing that, Bart Lloyd suddenly interrupted the conversation. The reason was simple. Ilya Lindsay was standing nearby, listening to everything. The atmosphere immediately grew heavy. Some students noticed the situation and thought it would end badly. However, Ilya remained calm. She said she didn't care if people spoke ill of her or looked down on her family. She also didn't care about comments made behind her back. None of it could affect her. Still, Judith challenged her to a duel. Before the situation could escalate, Bart Lloyd tried to stop it, saying it wasn't necessary. But Ilya Lindsay simply stated that she would take first place again, and she would continue doing so in the future. She declared that she didn't need to rely on her family's sword style to prove her worth. Everything she had learned on her own inside the academy was already more than enough to show she was far ahead of the other students. At that moment, Bart Lloyd stepped forward and commented on the legendary Heaven Sword style, the secret technique of the Lindsay family, a martial art associated with the demon race that once ruled the skies 400 years ago, and with the legendary Demon Dragon King. He admitted he had always wanted to see just how powerful that technique truly was. But Ilya Lindsay replied simply and directly, that would not happen. Bart Lloyd said that if she didn't want to to show that style, then he would take her first place from her. Meanwhile, Aaron Ferreira was exhausted. He kept training, but still felt disappointed. He hadn't achieved the result he wanted. For a while, he thought he was getting close, but recently it felt like he was drifting further and further away from the image of the man in his dreams. Trying to focus again, he began to meditate. That was when he had an idea. Maybe it would be better to meditate while holding his sword, and that was exactly what he did. He wanted to feel the movements of the sword more deeply and better understand the path he was trying to follow. Meanwhile, Bart Lloyd's group was also putting in a lot of effort. They constantly dueled each other and improved little by little. Lance had much more stamina than before. When they commented on it, he explained that it was mainly because of Bart Lloyd's words, which had been motivating everyone. Not understanding what he was talking about, Bart Lloyd asked what those words were. Lance replied that they were the words he had said to Ilya Lindsay that day that had really impacted all of them. Bart Lloyd simply said it didn't matter. Right after that, Judith told him to stop making that face because it was making her want to vomit. Then she told him to pick up his sword. The duel between the two was intense. Judith fought in a much more aggressive and brute force style, but Bart Lloyd's strikes were dangerous. He was extremely fast. Her technique still had many openings, and she had to block several attacks, while he hardly needed to defend at all, since he simply evaded them. During the fight, Judith thought that it might actually be possible for him to surpass Ilya Lindsay. It was hard to admit, but she couldn't defeat him using only the skills she currently had. Still, both he and Aaron Ferreira had taught her something important: to want more. Because of that, she decided she would no longer be so impulsive or so concerned. After becoming an official apprentice, she would defeat him. When the training ended, Bart Lloyd told everyone to stop for the day. They shouldn't overdo it before the evaluation. Judith agreed and said she would take the opportunity to handle something. Watching her walk away, Bart Lloyd noticed she was different, stronger, and thinking about it, he concluded that surpassing Ilya Lindsay might not be impossible after all. Now, he wanted to try facing Aaron Ferreira's sword head-on. Meanwhile, Aaron Ferreira continued practicing vertical strikes, trying to imitate the man from his dreams. The problem was that he still had no idea what he needed to do to advance beyond that point. Then Judith appeared and asked if it wasn't too stuffy in there. She said he needed some fresh air. Later, Ilya Lindsay herself, while passing through the courtyard, spotted the two of them. Judith and Aaron Ferreira were simply lying in the open field, looking at the sky. She asked if he felt ready for the evaluation. Less than 15 days remained. Aaron Ferreira replied that he would continue doing what he had been doing so far and would do his best. Ilya Lindsay said that was a very weak answer. She, on the other hand, was confident and would do the best she could. In any case, she commented that he should ask that annoying brat Judith if she was also confident about winning. But in the end, she apologized. It had been a long time since she had trained with him. At the beginning, the two had dueled a lot, and she had even managed to teach him a few different moves. Aaron Ferreira replied that it was fine. There was no need to apologize. This was an academy, and everyone needed to follow their own path. Then Judith began to talk a bit about herself. She said she was an orphan. She wasn't saying it to gain pity. She just wanted to explain something. When she was a child, she did whatever she could to survive. She stole and shoplifted whenever she needed to. And looking around at that time, she realized that practically everyone lived the same miserable way. Because of that life, she never had the chance to feel gratitude toward anyone, nor did she ever receive something that made her feel grateful. That was why, on the day Aaron Ferreira saved her from drowning, she became angry instead of thankful. She admitted that it might sound cheesy, but she wanted to repay what he had done. Because of that, she asked him to pass the evaluation. He needed to perform well. He needed to become an official apprentice. And until then, she would do everything she could to help him even more. Aaron Ferreira replied that he would do his best. Judith felt a little embarrassed. Not knowing what else to say, she simply agreed with herself several times and left. Watching her go, Aaron Ferreira thought that the one who hadn't been around was him, not her. At that moment, he realized how much he had changed. Before, he spent his days lying in bed. Now he was sitting there, looking at the sky. The year he had spent at the academy had not been bad. In fact, he felt he understood a bit more about the world, his own thoughts and his feelings as well. He was grateful for everything he had experienced, and now he intended to repay it. After resting his mind with that conversation and feeling the fresh wind, he returned to his meditation. Meditation was training the mind. He needed to bring what was inside him out. 2 weeks later, the day of the final evaluation finally arrived. One of the first boys to step forward demonstrated his speed by cutting through leaves falling through the air. Ian watched and asked if they were really sure that student was from Class B. The instructor replied that there were several apprentices evolving much faster than expected. Right after that, Lance demonstrated his precision. With a perfect crosscut, he cleanly split a stone in half. The master watched everything in silence. It was true that the students were exceeding expectations, but even so, it was still somewhat disappointing. The next to present was Judith, and she was ready to impress. Before the evaluation began, she asked the evaluators if it would be possible to conduct paired assessments. In her opinion, it would be a better way to demonstrate their abilities, as long as they were truly fighting. Another apprentice agreed with the idea, and Ian said it sounded interesting. Then he asked who the other participant would be. At that moment, Bart Lloyd stepped toward the arena. The two would truly duel. He asked if she was ready, and Judith replied that she intended to fight calmly and maintain composure. However, when facing Bart Lloyd, that was simply impossible. That day, she intended to surpass him. Bart Bart Lloyd replied that that sounded just like her. Judith's first movement was to crouch and leap forward like a beast. The clash of their swords was aggressive from the very beginning. She attacked with force, but Bart Lloyd displayed his full speed. Thanks to his light blade, he was able to evade practically all of her strikes. When Judith advanced again, he responded with a sequence of clean, rapid cuts. She then jumped in to deliver another brutal strike so heavy it even scratched the ground when Bart Lloyd blocked it. Even Tarhal was impressed. Without slowing down, Judith unleashed a true storm of spinning attacks. The instructor watched her ruthless strikes with excitement. But even so, Bart Lloyd continued to show absurd speed and fluidity. He didn't just block her attacks, he also altered the direction and rhythm of Judith's strikes, completely breaking her offensive flow. In one of those openings, he counterattacked and scratched her face, drawing blood. Bart Lloyd said she wouldn't defeat him with just that. In response, Judith began attacking even harder, while he grew even faster. After a long duel, Judith's sword was already practically destroyed. Bart Lloyd's sword had also completely lost its edge. In the end, Judith admitted she couldn't beat him like that, especially with her sword in that condition. The evaluators praised the match and said it had been an excellent fight. Still, Bart Lloyd won, as many had expected. Ian commented that it had been magnificent, and praised both of them for their performance. Proud of their own showing, they both bowed to the masters. Then Ian asked Ahmed who the next participant would be. He replied that it would be Ilya Lindsay. As she walked into the arena, Bart Lloyd thought that maybe he could surpass her this time. Ian asked what she intended to demonstrate, and Ilya Lindsay replied that she would show her family's swordsmanship, the same technique that had defeated the Demon Dragon King. As she drew her sword, she began something like a dance. However, every movement was powerful and forceful. Her strikes gathered wind and released gusts in every direction. As the technique progressed, the pressure around the blade kept increasing. At a certain moment, she accumulated so much energy that a radiant tornado formed around her blade. It was practically a real tornado. Mist covered the arena, dust rose, and smoke filled the environment. Everyone was impressed by that celestial swordsmanship. Watching the demonstration, Bart Lloyd realized that it truly existed. That girl was still an impossible wall to overcome. But Judith called his attention and told him to watch carefully. Now it was Aaron Ferreira's turn. She encouraged him, telling him to show what he was capable of. Even so, Bart Lloyd felt a strange sense of foreboding. He remembered a conversation he had with Aaron Ferreira during training. At the time, Aaron had said that Bart Lloyd was a good person. He said he had a bright and comforting aura, and that he always felt calm when he was around him. Maybe that was why he had so many friends and followers. Awkwardly, Bart Lloyd asked how someone could say something like that without feeling embarrassed. Then he asked if he had made another communication mistake. After that, he said that Aaron was mistaken. He wasn't as good a person as he imagined. Even so, Bart Lloyd still had hope. For some reason, he believed it had to be Aaron Ferreira. Out of everyone, it had to be him. When Aaron Ferreira entered the arena, the old master immediately became excited and asked what he intended to demonstrate. Everyone became tense, waiting for his answer. Then Aaron replied that he would perform only a vertical cut. The answer surprised everyone. Lance asked if he was an idiot since this was the final evaluation. Instructor Ahmed told him to be quiet, warning that it would be his only warning. Lance fell silent, but even the instructor understood his reaction. As he had said, this was the final evaluation, and a simple vertical cut seemed to have no practical use at such an important moment. He truly didn't understand what that boy was thinking. Aaron Ferreira took a deep breath and focused. Meanwhile, Ian watched in silence. He thought this was the moment to show everything he had learned. Maybe he didn't deserve the teachings he had received, but he still needed to demonstrate their results. People noticed that Aaron remained still. He was meditating with the sword in his hands. First, he stabilized his breathing. Then he tensed every muscle in his body. After that, he completely focused his mind. He plunged into his subconscious. He still didn't know who the man in his visions was, nor what he was trying to cut while training endlessly throughout his life. However, after enduring so much suffering and swinging his sword countless times, Aaron Ferreira came to a conclusion. That man had never stopped moving forward, so he would do the same, with a will as firm as steel. That alone was enough. His strike was perfect, exactly like that man's. The cut carried the weight of an entire lifetime of training. When the sword descended, the entire arena trembled. The impact was so powerful that it opened a gigantic fissure in the ground, splitting the arena in two. No one could believe what they were seeing. Mouths remained open as the shockwave spread through the area. A massive crack appeared before everyone's eyes. After the strike, Aaron was out of breath. Judith asked what had just happened. Then she noticed that Bart Lloyd wasn't doing well either. In fact, he had clenched his fists so tightly that his hands were bleeding. The swordmaster simply continued watching in silence. Later, he apologized for the delay and announced that he would finally reveal the results. He explained that the final evaluation was important, but not the only factor considered for official admission. There would still be a final interview. In any case, he would begin by announcing the ranking from last place to first. The names were called one by one. Fourth place was Judith. Third place, Bart Lloyd. Second place, Aaron Ferreira. And first place, Ilya Lindsay. The master congratulated everyone for their effort during the evaluation and informed them that details about the final interview would be given later. For now, they were ordered to rest. Later, Ilya Lindsay went to find Aaron Ferreira in private. She already knew exactly where to find him. As always, he was alone in the training hall. As she approached, she commented that he had become quite strong. She said Bart Lloyd and Judith had been formidable opponents, but it had been a long time since she had found someone capable of keeping up with her. She admitted that she had almost lost first place. Normally, that would make her angry, but this time it had been fun. Erin's sword had been truly intimidating. Erin Ferreira replied that her swordsmanship had also been incredible. Hearing that, Ilya Lindsay realized he was still terrible at giving or receiving compliments. Then she revealed something unexpected. She said she would not remain at Chronos Sword Academy. Surprised, Erin asked why. Ilya found his reaction amusing and explained that she had never intended to become an official apprentice. From the beginning, her plan had been to return to her family after securing first place in both the intermediate and final evaluations. The reason for this was linked to her older brother Carl Lindsay, known as the greatest genius on the continent. When Ilya Lindsay was only 7 years old, there was practically no one on the continent who didn't know Carl Lindsay's name. He defeated experienced knights and, thanks to his extraordinary talent, reached an absurd level for his age. He was recognized by countless important figures and quickly became known as the great genius of the continent. But then another person appeared, a commoner who had taken first place at the Chronos Swordsmanship Academy and refused the opportunity to become an official apprentice. Her name was Ignet, the person known as the second genius of the continent. At 14, she had already gathered her own mercenary group. As soon as she met Carl Lindsay, Ignet requested a duel. Since no one from the Lindsay family would ever refuse a challenge, Carl accepted immediately. However, the result was devastating. After just 3 moves, he was completely defeated. After the victory, Ignet declared that it had been disappointing. In that instant, the perfect image Ilya Lindsay had of her brother collapsed before her eyes. She ran to him, hugged him, and began to cry. Carl tried to comfort her, saying it was no big deal. She believed him. She believed he would overcome that defeat and come back stronger than before. But that never happened. From that day on, Carl Lindsay began to receive cold stares from those around him. Expectations turned into criticism, and criticism into contempt. Little by little, he fell into a despair he could not escape. Ilya witnessed everything up close. She saw her brother withdraw more and more, and realized it had not been the defeat that destroyed him. It was the way people looked at him. It was at that moment that she made a promise to herself. She would never allow her life to be controlled by the expectations of others, but without realizing it, she ended up doing exactly that. She noticed she had been shaping her entire life based on Ignet's achievements. She entered the academy at 12 because Ignet had entered at 13. She wanted to become an official knight at 14 because Ignet had received an honorary title at 15. Without realizing it, she spent years chasing the shadow of someone else, and she was tired of it. After observing Erin Ferreira, someone who never seemed to care what others thought and never let his life be guided by external expectations, she finally decided to follow a new path. Now she would do what her heart desired. She believed she could still reach the level of a swordmaster, even by following her own path. After hearing all of this, Erin Ferreira said she was amazing. He commented that she had gone through countless difficulties and still was already looking at a world far beyond the academy. He admitted that he still did not have a goal as clear as hers. But Ilya Lindsay replied that he should stop talking nonsense. She said he needed to keep working hard, or she would end up leaving him behind. As he watched her leave, Erin began to think that maybe everything really was fine. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if he could accept things as they were at that moment. Meanwhile, Bart Lloyd stood in front of the massive chasm created by Erin Ferreira's vertical slash. That was when Judith appeared. She asked what he was doing there and said that the area would be renovated soon. She also suggested that they leave and settle everything with another duel. But Bart Lloyd refused. He said he was leaving. He could not stop thinking about what had happened. Someone who had picked up a sword only a year ago had reached that level of power. Meanwhile, he had spent years training and still did not know how long it would take to reach that same level. In truth, he did not even know if he ever would. Perhaps he simply wasn't one of the chosen ones. Before he could leave, however, Judith grabbed his arm and punched him square in the face. Confused and irritated, Bart Lloyd asked what that was for, but Judith replied by asking the exact same thing. She pointed out that he hadn't even managed to dodge that punch, despite the absurd speed he had shown during their duels. She asked if his body had turned stiff and if his brain had turned to stone. Without giving him space to respond, she continued hitting him. Then she asked what he thought of her, what he thought of someone who couldn't defeat a coward like him. She also asked what he thought of all the other students there, training in swordsmanship. Did he think he was the only special one? Did he think he was the only one who suffered? Judith told him to take pride in himself, pride in having faced and defeated the greatest swordsman on the continent when he was still young. She said that achievement was something he would carry for the rest of his life. And she ended by stating that it was ridiculous to see him running away over something so trivial. A few days later, the time for the final interviews arrived. Ilya Lindsay went to Ian's office. In fact, all the students would pass through that room individually. Upon entering, she said she had achieved what she wanted and was satisfied, not just because she had placed first. Ian replied that he could see that. He commented that she seemed much brighter now than during the evaluation itself. Then he asked Ahmed to call the next apprentice. The next to enter was Bart Lloyd. Ian asked if he was sure about that decision. His results were flawless, and he wasn't talking only about test scores. His swordsmanship was good enough to serve as an example for the other apprentices. He had set aside his stubbornness, corrected his flaws, and improved his strengths. Because of that, Ian had high expectations for him. But Bart Lloyd apologized. He said he didn't have confidence in himself. Hearing that, Ian noticed that his eyes looked like candles already burned down by fire. There was no way to ignore those words, so he simply told him to do whatever he wanted, but hoped that this opportunity would change how he felt. The next to be called was Aaron Ferreira. Ian commented that his final evaluation had been memorable. Honestly, it had been the most surprising of his entire time as a master. Then he asked if Aaron remembered what they had discussed after the evaluation interview. He said he had a proposal for him, but first he wanted to ask a question. He asked apprentice Aaron Ferreira what the reason was for swinging his sword. The first thing that came to Aaron's mind was the man from his dreams. However, he didn't know how to put that into words, and remained silent. Seeing his hesitation, Ahmed said there was no need to overthink it. A grand reason wasn't necessary. It could be something simple, like money or honor. Any reason would do, as long as it didn't go against his moral principles. Still, Aaron did not answer. Then Ian said he understood. He commented that Aaron hadn't followed the path of swordsmanship by his own will. Had he? Aaron confirmed it. From the beginning, Ian had found him strange. He was more dedicated and disciplined than any other apprentice, yet he never showed emotion. Something natural for swordsmen at that level was missing in him. Bart Lloyd, for example, became happier than anyone when he felt his skills improving. Judith, on the other hand, became furious when she was surpassed by Bart, and turned that frustration into motivation. According to Ian, every apprentice felt joy or sadness when training swordsmanship. However, Aaron Ferreira never showed any of it. In the end, Ian realized that Aaron was simply imitating someone, as he had suspected. It was surprising that he had come so far just by following someone else's footsteps. Still, if he intended to continue on the path of the sword, he would need to think seriously about it from then on. If he could not find a reason to wield his sword, he could not remain at the academy. That was not a place for simply swinging a sword without purpose. It was a place to find one's role in the world. Aaron Ferreira then bowed respectfully and thanked him deeply. He said he would never forget that final advice, but Ian replied that he shouldn't say something so sad. It wasn't a final piece of advice. Then, he asked him to come a little closer, and whether he could use a bit of his blood. Aaron had his finger pricked, and a drop fell onto a golden plate. It was the plate that symbolized his promotion to an official apprentice. Ian explained that he had 1 year to find his own path of the sword. Aaron replied, "Yes, sir." He promised that he would return within a year after finding that path. As he left, Aaron Ferreira met Ilya Lindsay, who handed him the Lindsay family insignia. She said he should visit her whenever he could. If he showed that insignia to the gatekeeper, he would not be mistreated. In addition, she would give him flowers as a gift if he came to see her. Aaron didn't quite understand, so Ilya explained that she was referring to the flower on the bracelet he had given her. Aaron did not know that such a plant existed in her home. Ilya replied that she had planted it when she was 7 years old and intended to plant it again. Since the flowers usually bloomed between April and May, she asked him to visit during that time. Aaron replied that he definitely would. At that moment, Judith suddenly appeared and asked what that shiny object in his hand was. She said she wanted one too. Well, not like she was forcing anyone. Then Ilya Lindsay handed her an insignia as well. Judith was impressed and commented that now she understood why nobles valued such things so much. Taking the opportunity, she apologized to Ilya for having mocked her and her family in the past. She explained that back then, she didn't have anything she could call a family, and ended up taking it out in harsh words. Ilya replied that it was fine. Shortly after, Judith noticed Aaron Ferreira watching everything with a smile, and asked why he was looking like that. Aaron replied that he just liked seeing peace and friendship, or something like that. It was then that Bart Lloyd approached. Aaron went to him and asked if he really intended to leave the academy. He wanted to know if something had happened. Bart replied that it was hard to explain. Then he asked if Aaron was also leaving. Aaron replied yes, but said he would return after harsh training. Hearing that, Bart thought that Aaron was still trying to improve himself, unlike him who was giving up. But soon after, he heard Aaron thanking him. Aaron said that it was thanks to Bart that he finally felt alive while wielding his sword. He didn't know how to explain it exactly, but something had changed inside him a year ago. Because of that change, he started practicing swordsmanship, and eventually reached the academy. However, the reason he was able to look into his own past and learn more about himself and the sword was because he had met all of them. So he sincerely thanked Bart Lloyd. Bart's carriage had already arrived. He simply said he would leave first. But Aaron Ferreira shouted that they would become stronger and meet again. Wasn't that right? The carriage left without a response. Judith watched the scene and asked if they were lovers or something. Aaron replied that she was imagining things. He just had the feeling that he might never see him again. Shortly after, Aaron's servant finally arrived to take him back. Aaron introduced his friends, and the servant was surprised. He asked if he heard correctly. Friends? The young master had made friends? Then he bowed respectfully, introduced himself, and thanked the two of them for taking care of Aaron Ferreira. After that, Aaron said goodbye to them. The two of them remained silent for a few moments. After all, despite everything, they still weren't exactly close. Once all the students had already left, Ahmed commented that Ian must be feeling quite sad watching his best apprentices leave. Ian replied that he couldn't deny it. Then Ahmed asked about Aaron Ferreira. He wanted to know whether it was really alright to let him follow that path alone. After all, finding one's own path of the sword was no simple task. But Ian replied that that boy was the fourth genius of the continent. Unlike the others, he wasn't a genius of natural talent. He was a genius of effort. In the end, Judith found herself alone once again. However, as she was walking, her path was blocked by Bart Lloyd. He asked asked if she had dropped something on the ground, since she was walking with her head down. Judith asked what he was doing there. Bart replied that he had thought a lot about it. As a member of the Lloyd family, giving up didn't suit him. Besides, now that Aaron Ferreira was gone, there was no one left to deal with her explosive temper. Then he asked if she wasn't happy that he had come back. Judith replied that he was a huge asshole. That's what. Bart laughed and commented that Aaron always said that when she stuttered, it was because she was telling the truth. She told him to shut up and asked if he really thought the Swordmaster would accept someone who had left on their own. Bart replied that yes, of course, and if necessary, he would even beg on his knees and lick the master's shoes. He had no problem with that at all. Judith shook her head and said he was completely insane, and so, together, the two of them returned to Kronos Academy. While they were returning home by carriage, Marcus noticed that Aaron Ferreira was staring out the window. It was understandable, since he had failed to become an official apprentice. However, he soon noticed the object the boy was holding in his hand, and asked what it was. Upon taking a closer look, he recognized the Lindsay family's platinum insignia. Aaron Ferreira explained that he had received it from a friend, and asked if he remembered the girl with white hair. It was Ilya Lindsay. Marcus was completely shocked. Noticing his reaction, Aaron Ferreira concluded that the Lindsay family must be far more important than he had imagined. After that, he said he wanted to take a nap, but in reality, he used the time to meditate. Midway through the trip, they had to stop at an inn. As soon as he reached the room, Aaron Ferreira resumed meditating. Outside, Marcus grew worried because he couldn't hear a single sound coming from the room. He began to imagine that the young master might have fallen into despair after the academy's disappointment. Thinking of cheering him up, he decided to take a walk around the town. That was when he encountered an orc different from the others. He wore a pendant around his neck and had several tattoos across his body. He was a divining orc. Without wasting time, Marcus took Aaron Ferreira to him, explaining that divining orcs were considered the most skilled among all fortune tellers. The orc welcomed them with a smile and asked which of the two wanted their fortune told. Aaron Ferreira stepped forward, while Marcus remained confident. After all, divining orcs were famous for always saying positive things. The orc asked whether he wanted to know his daily fortune, yearly fortune, wealth, health, or relationships. However, before continuing, he noticed something strange about the boy and asked his age. Not understanding the reason for the question, Aaron Ferreira replied that he was 16 years old. The orc frowned and said he had a baby face, but that he couldn't give an accurate reading if he was lying. Aaron Ferreira assured him he was telling the truth. After observing him for a few more seconds, the orc stated that he would be accepted into any knight order he wished. If he continued walking the path of the sword, he would advance quickly. Hearing that, Marcus muttered that the man must be a charlatan and told Aaron Ferreira to stop wasting time there. The orc looked slightly disappointed, but before they left, he handed the boy a small folded paper. He said that when things weren't going well, he should simply look at the note and it would help him. Aaron Ferreira thanked him and left. Watching the boy walk away, the orc once again saw that sinister aura surrounding him. It was a powerful, overwhelming energy, far beyond normal. To him, it was impossible for someone only 16 years old to possess something like that. It made no sense. That boy was a true monster. People around began to wonder if he was really a charlatan. The orc simply clicked his tongue and realized he would probably no longer be able to do business in that town. The next morning, they resumed their journey back to Ferreira territory. Along the way, Marcus apologized for what had happened the day before, saying he didn't know the oracle was a fraud. However, Aaron Ferreira replied that the orc hadn't said anything bad. Moreover, he was still thinking about the note he had received. It was then that the coachman announced that a carriage was approaching. Hearing this, Marcus immediately became worried. It was the Garum family's carriage. The Garum family was known for their hostility toward the Ferreiras. Whenever they had the opportunity, they ignored or humiliated the young master. And, from what it seemed, the second son of the family was also present. The carriages had already stopped for formal greetings when Marcus asked why they didn't simply continue on their way. Aaron Ferreira replied that it would be disrespectful, so he got down to greet them. Marcus bowed before Aaron Garum and Sir Jack Stewart. Seeing Aaron Ferreira, Aaron Garum commented that he had grown quite a bit. He was more robust than before. He asked if he was returning from Kronos Academy and explained that he had come to deliver a message from his father. He also said it had been a while since they last met and that he had almost not recognized him. After that, he asked if he still intended to practice swordsmanship. Aaron Ferreira replied that yes, he would probably continue. Aaron Garum then asked if he would be learning only within his own family. After all, since he had started so late, it would be difficult to study elsewhere. Hearing that, Marcus immediately recognized the provocation. Once again, that boy was trying to humiliate the young master. However, Aaron Ferreira simply agreed, saying it would indeed be very difficult for him, and asked if there was anything else he wanted to say. Unable to get the reaction he wanted, Aaron Garum replied that there wasn't. Then Aaron Ferreira said he would take his leave, since the journey had been long and he wanted to rest. Even Sir Jack Stewart was impressed by the maturity of the noble who had once been known only for his laziness. But before he left, Aaron Garum asked him to wait. He suggested they shake hands before parting. He said that swordsmen could sense each other's strength through a handshake. Aaron Ferreira replied that it was the first time he had heard that. Then Aaron Garum stated that it was a quote from the famous swordsman Louis Saugat. According to him, there was nothing more important for a swordsman than the strength conveyed through a handshake. Jack Stewart immediately agreed. Then Aaron Garum extended his hand and said that, as a veteran who had begun sword training 6 years earlier, he wanted to assess his skills. The servants around them watched everything closely. Without showing any resistance, Aaron Ferreira shook his hand. Inside, Aaron Garam smiled. He thought the other had fallen into his trap. He planned to squeeze his hand with all his strength to embarrass him in front of everyone. But nothing happened. Aaron Ferreira remained motionless, like a wall. His expression showed no discomfort at all. On the contrary, it was Aaron Garam who began to feel the pressure. Then Aaron Ferreira calmly asked if he should also squeeze. The moment he applied force, Aaron Garam immediately let go. If he had continued, he felt his hand would be crushed. Trying to maintain his composure, he apologized and said it was the first time he had done something like that, so he hadn't controlled his strength very well. Inside, however, he was furious. He had been the first to let go. To him, it was extremely humiliating. Even so, he forced a smile and said that Aaron Ferreira could now leave. It was then that Ruru, who was sitting on top of the carriage, asked if it was already over. According to her, Aaron Ferreira could have given that guy a good beating. Confused, Marcus asked if she was a magic cat. It is often said that things that are impossible to explain, phenomena that defy logic and absurd events that make one doubt their own eyes, are called magic. However, that definition is not entirely correct. Mana is invisible to the naked eye. Magic, in fact, is a field of study that follows logic and reason. It is knowledge developed through the understanding of mana. Observing Ruru, Marcus realized that she used mystical arts, since she did things that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Because of this, he began to wonder whether she was a mystical cat from birth, or whether some mystical being had transformed into a cat. Jack Stewart knew it was never a good idea to get too involved with a mystical cat, but he still apologized to Ruru, saying they were already leaving. He also added that, if she wasn't offended, she would be welcome to visit the Garam territory sometime. But Ruru seemed disappointed. She asked if they really weren't going to fight and were just leaving. How boring. At least they could have a quick duel. Then she opened her magic pouch, took out a miniature sword, and began demonstrating movements in the air, saying that just going chum 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 with swords would already make her happy. Not knowing how to react, Jack Stewart explained that she had misunderstood. They weren't dueling because they were friends. They were just saying goodbye normally. Hearing this, Ruru sighed and said she had really thought something fun would happen. How dull. After more farewells, Jack Stewart and the others left. Once they were gone, Marcus urged Aaron Ferreira to leave as well. He didn't want to stay near Ruru any longer than necessary. During the journey, Aaron Ferreira asked if she was a human transformed into a cat. Marcus replied that he wasn't sure. Perhaps it had something to do with young lady Khalil Ferreira, since she was also a mystic. Either way, they would find out when they returned to the castle. Later, upon arriving at the Ferreira territory, Aaron Ferreira was warmly welcomed by his family. His father greeted him with a smile, saying he had worked hard and should first eat well before resting. While recounting everything that had happened during his journey, Aaron Ferreira noticed how proud his father seemed. That surprised him. He had never imagined hearing such words from him. His father also mentioned that Marcus had already reported the encounter with Ruru during the trip. Then he explained that she really was a mystic. Confused, Aaron Ferreira asked if she wasn't a human who had been transformed into a cat. His father replied that no, she was truly a cat, but one with intelligence equivalent to that of a human being. At that moment, Khalil Ferreira joined the conversation and added that that wasn't all. Just by looking at Ruru, one could tell how strong she was. In her opinion, she was probably more powerful than any mystic in the kingdom's capital. Amelia then explained that about 10 days earlier, Ruru had appeared at the mansion asking to become Khalil Ferreira's teacher. They even sent people to investigate her past through the Mystic Association, but found almost no relevant information. Because of that, she believed the most important thing was how Khalil Ferreira felt about all of it. The girl then turned her gaze toward her brother and asked what he thought. Aaron Ferreira replied that he also believed Ruru's intentions were important. He admitted he didn't understand much about mystics, but before he could finish, Khalil Ferreira interrupted, reminding him that he had seen Ruru in person. She didn't want a generic answer. She wanted to know what he truly thought of her. Emilia asked her daughter not to pressure her brother so much. After all, it was a difficult question to answer. Watching the scene, Aaron Ferreira thought that his sister's endless stubbornness had appeared again. Something must have happened for her to be this irritated. Then he remembered something still in his pocket. It was the gift he had bought for her. When he handed her the wrapped present, his parents were extremely proud. Their son had even bought a gift for his sister. Khalil Ferreira, on the other hand, turned completely red. She quickly thanked him but insisted she wasn't embarrassed or anything like that. However, Aaron Ferreira knew it was all thanks to Marcus. If Marcus hadn't insisted that he buy a gift, he probably would never have thought of it. Soon after, Aaron Ferreira said he had also brought gifts for his parents. It was then that Ruru appeared on top of the table without anyone noticing her arrival. She observed Aaron Ferreira for a few seconds and commented that he really was Khalil Ferreira's older brother. It wasn't surprising, since they had similar sense. Still, they were completely different from each other. Annoyed, Khalil Ferreira asked what that damn cat was doing there. Ruru replied that she didn't intend to scare anyone. She had just appeared because she wanted to try to convince her brother of something. Then she realized she had spoken that part out loud by accident, so she began explaining that Aaron Ferreira seemed much easier to deal with than Khalil Ferreira. Besides, the girl loved her brother very much, didn't she? If so, if she won over the brother first, she would naturally win over the sister afterward. Hearing that, Khalil Ferreira turned completely red. Ruru simply laughed laughed and asked if she wasn't allowed to say that. Unable to bear the embarrassment, Khalil Ferreira ran out of the room. Ruru, amused, chased after her. Watching the whole situation, the children's father admitted he honestly had no idea how to deal with this. Amelia replied that they could worry about that problem later. For now, she wanted to hear more stories about the academy. Later, already resting in his room, Aaron Ferreira reflected on everything that had happened. His parents had been extremely happy just to receive simple gifts. He had imagined they would be far more emotional about his conditional acceptance into the academy. Perhaps that was something common for normal families. Still, he was happy. At the same time, he felt a little guilty for not realizing sooner how small things could make them so happy. Determined not to waste time like he used to, he got up from bed and called a maid. He said he would go to the training field as soon as dawn broke. The maid was surprised and asked if that was really a good idea. After all, he had spent almost half a month traveling back from the academy. He should still be tired. But Aaron Ferreira replied that he felt fine. In fact, he was restless from having spent nearly 15 days without touching a sword. Meanwhile, in Garum territory, Aaron Garum finally returned home. Noticing the strange expression on his son's face, Viscount Phil Garum asked Jack Stewart what had happened during the journey. Then Jack Stewart explained that they had encountered Aaron Ferreira on the way back and recounted the entire situation in detail. As he listened, Phil Garum's face grew increasingly dark. When the explanation ended, he asked how any of it made sense. Enraged, he hurled his cup at Jack Stewart and demanded an explanation. How could someone say something like that? What exactly had he done in that situation? Jack Stewart apologized to his lord, but Phil Garum replied that there was no need. To him, Jack must have had a reason not to interfere. Then, irritated, he commented that the bastard was saying the child had changed. Jack Stewart confirmed it. Yes, my lord. According to him, Aaron Ferreira seemed like a completely different person and must have grown considerably at the Kronos Academy. Phil Garum replied that a sword academy was not a school of mystical arts. While reflecting on this, he thought that from the very beginning he had never liked that man. He had a strong lineage, an enviable appearance, a beautiful wife, and even a mystical daughter. On top of that, his territory kept becoming more prosperous. So he wondered why his own son should remain stuck there while the other trained freely in swordsmanship at Kronos. At that moment, his other son, Ryan Garum, who had been listening to everything, asked his father to calm down. He said they only needed to follow the path of growth. After all, an important expedition was approaching. When the 6 southern families gathered, they could bring down that lazy noble once again. Phil Garum agreed and said that would be excellent. Then he ordered Jack Stewart to leave, stating that Ryan Garum was truly the pride of the family. As he walked away, Jack Stewart thought the old man was completely insane. If things truly reached that point, it would not only be Aaron Ferreira who would be in trouble. The most brilliant, most capable, and 1,000 times more unpleasant person than the Viscount was actually the Elder Lord involved in the matter, Ryan Garum himself. The next morning, the knights complained about having to train so early. However, when they arrived at the training grounds, they found the young master already exercising. One of the older knights asked why he was training at that hour. Aaron Ferreira realized he had even forgotten that soldiers usually trained at dawn, and replied that he was simply doing his personal training and would not disturb anyone. The knights were impressed. Some even thought that, if he had returned, he might not have been accepted into the academy. However, it was impossible to deny that his physique had improved greatly. They tried to lift one of the pieces of equipment he was using, but one of the knights could not even move it. Then the knight Orun Zukrin appeared and asked what those guards were doing. One of them replied that they were watching the young lord train. After analyzing the scene, Orun Zukrin was impressed. Aaron was doing pull-ups with weight strapped to his waist and maintaining excellent posture during the exercise. Even so, he commented that it still wasn't anything extraordinary for a knight. But when Aaron moved on to another calisthenics exercise, the soldiers became completely astonished. One of the guards asked if Orun Zukrin himself could do it. The knight simply replied that it was already 6:10 in the morning and it was time to begin training, ending the subject. Later, Aaron Ferreira continued training, but this time he focused on sword movements. Ruru approached to watch. For a moment he thought she might be there to try to persuade him of something, but he decided to ignore her and keep practicing. While training, he thought that if he truly wanted to find his own swordsmanship, he could not keep swinging the sword like that man. He needed to develop a style based on what he had learned at the academy. A week passed, and Aaron continued training with the same intensity. Not even the guards could keep up with his running pace. One of them commented that the young master's stamina had improved greatly, but that this training would soon come to an end. Even as the sun set and the day ended, Aaron Ferreira decided to stay a little longer to keep training. He thought about the incredible people he had met at the academy and how they all insisted on training hard every day. He also realized that if he had never had that dream, he would never have come this far. Meanwhile, Ruru spent her days living peacefully like a cat. It had already been a full week since she had been watching his training. One day, a knight warned the young lord to be careful with her. There were rumors that mystical cats brought bad luck to those around them, as if they carried a curse. The soldiers truly seemed afraid of her. Still, Aaron Ferreira approached to talk. Marcus, curious, showed up to see what was happening and ended up witnessing the entire conversation. Aaron asked if she hadn't come to try to persuade him and wanted to know why she hadn't said anything during the entire week. Ruru replied that Khalil Ferreira was fun to tease, but he was boring. She said he was as dull as stones at the bottom of a valley. Aaron replied that that was a bit cruel. Then Ruru said she would give him a gift. In fact, she had intended to give it to him anyway. According to her, humans called it a bribe. Then she revealed an extremely brilliant jewel. Seeing the object, Marcus immediately recognized what it was. It was a cat's eye. Not understanding its value, Aaron Ferreira asked what that stone was and whether it was really so precious. Marcus replied that a cat's eye of that size could buy an entire quarter of the Ferreira territory. Upon hearing that, Ruru thanked him. She said he didn't even need to explain it for her. She also commented that if that jewel was enough to convince the child, then she could also give something very valuable to that so-called Marcus. But Aaron Ferreira ignored the offer and asked another question. He wanted to know why she wanted his sister to become her apprentice so badly. Ruru replied that it was a complicated question, but her answer was simple. She wanted Kyle Ferreira as an apprentice simply because she liked her. To her, there didn't need to be any reason beyond that. Still, Marcus commented that such a bribe was too expensive, even for someone with good intentions. Ruru then asked what he was thinking. Did he think she didn't understand the value of money? Was he calling her stupid? She then commented that humans placed too much importance on gems and gold. To her, there were far more valuable things. As an example, she showed a simple wooden ball. She explained that she loved its scent, but there was no other like it. It was a treasure she would never trade, not even for dozens of cat's eyes. She then showed an old foxtail, full of memories from the time when she had not yet learned mystical arts. She also displayed a stuffed teddy bear she had received from a stray cat she considered a friend. All of those objects were treasures that could not be bought with money. Aaron Ferreira had not expected Ruru to be so emotionally attached to those things. He then realized that, apparently, Kyle Ferreira was also one of those things that could not be bought with gold or gems. For some reason, he started to like that version of Ruru more. She then told him to take whatever he wanted and simply speak well of her to Khalil Ferreira. However, Aaron Ferreira replied that he could not accept it. Ruru insisted, asking if he was sure, since it was extremely rare, but he answered that he had also learned that there were things more important than money. Instead of praising her because of a bribe, he preferred to say exactly what he truly thought. Ruru replied that she wasn't sure whether that would work on Kyle Ferreira, but it certainly wouldn't earn him any reward. Still, she stated that it didn't change the fact that he was much easier to deal with than her sister. Because of that, she would keep trying to convince him. The next day, Ruru appeared, saying she had a very serious problem that required his help. When Aaron Ferreira arrived, he discovered the emergency was only to keep her company while she ate. He ended up sitting beside her. The next day, another supposed emergency arose. A cat was occupying the place where she liked to sunbathe. Once again, the two simply ended up sitting together. Watching the situation, Aaron Ferreira found himself laughing quietly, but soon he remembered what he truly needed to do. He had to find his own path of the sword. As if waking from a trance, he immediately stood up and returned to training. Even when heavy rain fell, he kept practicing. He had no time to waste. He needed to find his path as quickly as possible. Ever since leaving the Sword Academy, he felt as if he had lost his direction. He no longer knew where to go or how to find the path he sought. During one of his strikes, Ruru was visibly impressed. She then asked whether he had awakened mystical arts by any chance. While speaking, she summoned a sphere of light above them. Once again, she asked him to become her apprentice. That light was not only meant to illuminate the area, it absorbed all the water accumulated in the rain-soaked courtyard. Aaron Ferreira immediately realized something was different. The air felt heavier. This was not the same carefree Ruru as always. She asked if he had heard what she had just said. She explained that she could teach him those techniques, and that the two of them could explore the fascinating world of mystical arts together. Even so, Aaron Ferreira refused. He said he was a swordsman, not a mystic. Ruru replied that that was not a problem, since he could still learn. However, Aaron Ferreira insisted that not everything could be learned simply by wanting it. She then stated that he understood nothing about the subject. According to her, there was no one more suitable for mystical arts than a swordsman with a will as strong as his. From what she could see, there was a high chance he could awaken an ability capable of directly aiding his swordsmanship. She then decided to explain the difference between swordsmen, mages, and mystics. According to Ruru, martial artists like swordsmen focused on the self. Through constant training and refinement of the body, they awakened the mysterious power known as aura. As for mages, they followed the opposite path. Instead of looking inward, they observed the world around them. They studied the mana present in nature and sought to understand the laws, principles, and mechanisms that governed reality. Mystics, however, were completely different. Many described them as people who made absurd demands of the world itself. They were individuals who insisted that the impossible should happen. They ignored precedents, laws, and even common sense. Through the force of their will, they turned what they sincerely desired into reality. That was what it meant to be a mystic. Ruru continued explaining that there was one more important thing. A mystic needed to possess a will so strong that it could change the entire world on its own. They needed an extraordinary heart, something ordinary people could not even imagine. Moreover, a mystic's power was directly proportional to the strength of that heart. Then she commented on the strike Aaron Ferreira had performed moments earlier. She said that in that vertical slash, she had felt an absolute unshakable will, a genuine determination to cut something. To her, that alone was already sufficient proof. According to Ruru, it would take only a small amount of help for him to awaken mystical arts, and they would certainly be useful for his swordsmanship. Even after hearing all of that, Aaron Ferreira replied that he still could not accept. It It wasn't because he didn't want to learn mystical arts. The real problem was something else. He tried to explain, but hesitated several times. Then Ruru told him to just say it already. Finally, Aaron Ferreira revealed that the swordsmanship he had shown was not truly his own. As he said this, he thought that perhaps Ruru was the only person capable of understanding the secret behind his dreams. After hearing the story, Ruru became fascinated. She commented that it resembled a phenomenon known as possession. She had heard of cases where a person carried within them the soul or personality of an entirely different existence. Although she believed that wasn't exactly his case, she admitted there were certain similarities. Still, after hearing everything, she asked one final question. If that wasn't the real problem, then what exactly was preventing Aaron Ferreira from learning mystical arts? Aaron Ferreira thought that the swordsmanship of that man was truly attention-grabbing. Even Ruru had noticed it. Still, he said he could not accept her proposal. He did not intend to awaken mystical arts because of someone else's desire. Ruru insisted that they could at least try. However, Aaron Ferreira replied that he first wanted to find his own path of the sword. The problem was that he had no idea which path to follow. Little by little, he was starting to end up confined at home like before. Noticing that he was lost in thought, Ruru declared that it was time for the master to advise her disciple. Aaron Ferreira immediately replied that he was not her disciple. But Ruru ignored the complaint and said he was mistaken about one thing. According to her, everything he had done so far was not real effort. In practice, it had simply been a waste of time. Later, lying on his bed, Aaron Ferreira still had his mind full of doubts. Then Marcus suddenly entered his room. He first asked whether Ruru was nearby. Since she apparently wasn't, he said he had two important matters to discuss. The first was about the expedition that was approaching. In a few days, the family would hold the conference related to the Southern Union expedition. The head of the family also intended to speak with Aaron Ferreira about it. Because of that, he would need to decide in advance whether he would participate or not. The second matter was precisely about Ruru. Marcus explained that there were many unpleasant rumors involving the mystic. According to some stories, she had once passed through a guild called Oracle, located in the eastern part of the continent. Shortly after her departure, the guild was completely destroyed. There was also the case of Alphys, the second son of Jack Stewart. It was said that he became Ruru's disciple and later lost his life in an unfortunate accident. In addition, the once wealthy merchant group Balvenia was said to have suffered a major decline in sales after encountering her. Marcus made it clear that all of those events had indeed happened. What he did not know was whether Ruru had any involvement in them. Even so, he admitted it was difficult to believe so many coincidences occurring one after another. He said he understood the possibility that they were merely false rumors. He also knew that the superstition surrounding black cats might have influenced the stories. Perhaps Ruru had done absolutely nothing wrong. Still, he believed there was no reason to put Aaron Ferreira's potential at risk. After apologizing in case he had overstepped his boundaries, Marcus left the room. As soon as he was gone, Aaron Ferreira commented that he did not want anyone to think badly of Marcus. He was simply concerned. He also stated that he did not intend to hesitate when speaking with Khalil Ferreira. He would say exactly what he thought about Ruru. From what he had seen, she did not seem like someone who threatened or harmed others. In truth, compared to many humans, she was simply different and had her own qualities. Regardless of the rumors, that was what he intended to say. At that moment, a voice came from under the bed. Ruru, who had been hiding there the entire time, asked whether something bad would really happen just because she was nearby. Aaron Ferreira replied with another question, asking whether what Marcus had said was true. Ruru confirmed that it was. All of those events had indeed happened. Then Aaron Ferreira asked directly whether she had caused those tragedies. Ruru said no. She explained that she had simply been traveling around and doing as she pleased. In the case of Oracle, the tower had been destroyed because two disgusting old men decided to fight each other. As for the merchant's sons, they were constantly arguing among themselves. Regarding Jack Stewart's case, that also had not been her fault. While listening, Aaron Ferreira thought there were only two possibilities. Either all of it was an absurd chain of coincidences caused by bad luck, or Ruru was lying. Still, he simply replied that everything would be fine. He said there was no problem in staying by her side. Ruru asked whether he was not worried about the possibility of her truly carrying bad luck. But Aaron Ferreira replied that even so, everything would be fine. He himself also carried many bad rumors. In that sense, they were similar, although he admitted that part of his own problems had been his own fault. In the end, he explained that he preferred to judge people by what he saw and felt personally. If any misfortune truly came his way, he would decide what to do when the time came. Upon hearing that, Ruru became emotional. Aaron Ferreira continued by saying that he understood the concern of those around them, but he would try to reassure them. Suddenly, as if she had just made an important decision, Ruru opened her magic bag and took out a gigantic jewel. She declared that the stone was even better than the cat's eye she had shown before. It was a gift for him, not considering her a bad Ruru. After that, she simply left. Watching the enormous jewel now occupying much of the room, Aaron Ferreira remembered that the object was part of her personal treasure collection. It was something she truly valued. Still, he could not help but think that perhaps that treasure was too large to stay inside his room. 1 week later, the Ferreira family received the Garoon family at their residence. It was something Aaron Ferreira didn't particularly like, but there was nothing he could do. As soon as he arrived, Phil Garoon immediately started with one of his provocations. qualifications, commenting that Aaron looked much more masculine than the last time he had seen him. Meanwhile, Harun Ferreira, Aaron's father, simply thought it would be better to take him inside before he kept talking. Later, during dinner, the nobles were gathered around the table, and Aaron remembered what Marcus had told him. There was no one in that hall who was truly friendly toward his family. Although the Ferreira family had no direct conflicts with the Bauer and Freed families, that did not mean they were friends either. The Lester, Russell, and Guerin families, on the other hand, showed a certain hostility toward the Ferreira family. Marcus had specifically warned him about Phil Guerin, since the two families had maintained a rivalry spanning generations. At one point, Harun stood up with a glass in hand and thanked everyone for dedicating their precious time to the security of the southern trade route. Then he made a toast to peace. Aaron didn't know there was specific etiquette for such things, but he noticed that everyone drank right after the speech, so he did the same. However, the taste was terrible. The wine was extremely bitter to him. Shortly after, he noticed that everyone was looking in his direction. Confused, he began to wonder if he had made a mistake. That was when Phil Guerin lightly tapped his arm and explained that he was holding the glass incorrectly. According to him, white wine was sensitive to temperature, and holding the bowl of the glass would warm the drink. The correct way was to hold it by the stem. Aaron immediately apologized, but Phil replied that there was no need. He said these kinds of things happened and that Aaron should simply try to hold it properly next time. Then he continued his explanation, stating that a noble should also know that the little finger needed to be slightly extended when holding a glass. According to him, in the days when spices were rare and valuable, containers were held in a specific way to prevent waste caused by moisture from the hands. Aaron said he understood. At that moment, Harun remained silent, observing everything. Phil continued, saying that those times were long gone, but that a noble should still know such traditions. Baron Lester immediately agreed. He said that the difference between nobles and commoners often lay precisely in small details. The others also agreed, and the conversation continued in that direction. Then Phil told Harun not to take it too seriously, or worry about others' opinions. However, it was clear that he himself had started the whole situation just to embarrass Aaron. Soon after, Phil changed the subject and looked at his son Ryan Guerin, asking if he had listened to the symphony he had recommended. Ryan replied that he had, and said he especially liked the second piece. Baron Lester praised the boy's musical taste, and then turned his attention to Aaron, asking what kind of music he usually listened to. Without hesitation, Aaron replied that he didn't really listen to any music. Baron Lester commented that it made sense, since he had entered the Sword Academy, and probably didn't have much free time. Still, he added that having some cultural knowledge would be beneficial. He said it was embarrassing for both sides when someone couldn't keep up with certain topics, and conversations quickly died out. Then he immediately said he was just joking. While the adults talked, Ryan observed everything in silence. To him, the plan was working perfectly. He imagined how Aaron must be feeling, unable to respond even to knowledge considered basic among nobles. In his mind, it was the result of laziness and ignorance that had marked Aaron's life for years. He also thought that Harun was responsible, having allowed his son to remain negligent for so long. At that moment, Harun noticed that Aaron was trembling and asked if he was alright. The boy simply apologized and said he wanted to step out for a moment. Without insisting, Harun allowed him to leave. As soon as he left the hall, Aaron ran off. While walking, he felt disappointed in himself. He thought he had changed. He thought he had become more confident and would be able to face situations like that. However, once again he was running away. He also realized he had never understood how much his father, his mother, and Khalil had suffered because of him. At that moment, he felt like a terrible son. He went to the training field, picked up his sword, and began swinging it repeatedly to release his frustration. While training, he remembered a conversation he had with Ruru. She had said that much of his effort was wasted. Simply overworking the body and repeating movements was not real effort. True effort was putting the body, heart, and purpose into every action. She said it was necessary to use a sincere heart to sustain sincere actions. She also asked if he truly put his heart into what he did. Back then, Aaron had replied that even he didn't know the answer. Shortly after, the Lester twins appeared at the training field. One of them commented that Aaron's posture was quite impressive, and that, apparently, it wasn't a lie that he was studying at the Sword Academy. Caesar Lester said it was boring to wait for the adults to finish their conversations and suggested they have a duel. At the same time, Martin Russell, the eldest son of Baron Russell, asked why Aaron was there alone and silent. He then mocked him, saying that maybe he had run away simply because he didn't know how to hold a wine glass. Or perhaps he also didn't know how to hold a sword. After all, 1 year of training was too little time for someone to learn, especially for a lazy lord. Faced with the provocations, Aaron simply raised his sword. His attitude surprised the three young men. Without hesitation, he challenged them to fight. One of the twins laughed and commented that he was truly arrogant. Caesar then picked up a sword, thinking that it had been a long time since he had last trained seriously. Still, he was certain that someone who had trained for only 1 year could never defeat him. In his mind, this was the perfect opportunity to humiliate Aaron. Confidently, Caesar said he wanted to see what Aaron was really capable of, and that he would even allow him to make the first move. However, before he could even finish speaking, Aaron dashed forward. His massive sword sliced through the air in an explosive motion. The strike hit Caesar's arms directly, sending his sword flying away. In less than a second, he had been completely disarmed and defeated. The three of them were shocked by what they had just witnessed. Aaron Ferreira asked who would be next, but Caesar Lester complained that it didn't count because because he hadn't even said start, accusing Aaron of cheating. Aaron calmly replied that it was fine and that he could try again. Before the fight could continue, Martin Russell said he would take his place. One of the twins tried to brush it off, calling the situation exaggerated and saying the other was just arrogant. Still, Martin stated that Aaron had left his guard down and that he wouldn't back down because facing him was the only way to feel better after what had happened. The twins also reinforced that the previous fight didn't count since there had been no preparation, insisting it had been a cowardly attack. Even so, they claimed Martin would win for sure. Aaron simply confirmed again whether they could begin, and when the start was allowed, the two exchanged heavy blows. Aaron maintained a defensive stance, blocking firmly, while Martin advanced with constant pressure, believing it would wear his opponent down quickly. The twins commented that Aaron would lose like that, but over time Martin began to tire, while Aaron remained steady like a wall. Then Aaron changed the rhythm and delivered a heavy counterstrike with his sword, opening Martin's guard and forcing him to step back, his hands already aching from blisters and injuries. Aaron asked if he wouldn't attack anymore, and Martin, noticing the condition of his own hands, realized he couldn't keep going at that pace. He thought someone should stop the fight before it got worse. At that moment, Ryan Guerin appeared and questioned why they didn't just end it already, since there was clearly a winner. He also told Martin to stop before his hands got worse, then acknowledged that Aaron had improved significantly. Then Ryan surprised everyone by suggesting a duel with him, possibly with real swords. Aaron accepted the idea, which even shocked Aaron. Ryan liked Aaron's new attitude as he raised his now metal sword. Silently, Ryan realized that Aaron's vigor didn't seem like that of a beginner, especially after returning from the academy. He even considered the possibility of injuring him, but remembered that he was still a noble and decided to hold back, allowing Aaron to make the first move as a veteran. Aaron did not accept that condition. Ryan became irritated by the interruption, but kept his stance and commented that it would be strange to duel him, reminding him that in the past, Aaron had been nothing but a coward. That irritated Aaron, but he took a deep breath, calmed himself, and gripped his sword firmly, as he had learned at the academy. Then he closed his eyes and entered a deep state of concentration. The twins said he had gone crazy, but when Aaron opened his eyes, he was completely focused. His presence became so intense that Ryan instinctively stepped back, pressing against the stone wall, feeling an unexpected discomfort at being pressured by someone he considered inferior. Shortly after, something astonishing happened. Even without direct contact between the blades, Ryan's sword suddenly split in half, as if struck by an invisible attack from several meters away. Everyone was stunned, trying to understand what had happened. A short while later, Phil Garoon arrived at the training field with other nobles. Seeing the broken sword, he asked what had happened, and Ryan replied bluntly that he had lost a duel against Aaron Ferreira. Haroon Ferreira, surprised, asked if his son had truly won. Ryan tried to maintain his composure and explained that Aaron's attack had come from about 5 meters away and still managed to split his sword in half, which left everyone tense. Phil reacted coldly, saying that Aaron's swordsmanship must be excellent and reminding them that he trained at Kronos Academy, so it made sense that he had improved. Aaron Lester commented that this was a blessing for the Southern Union and that Aaron's growth was impressive. They even praised Haroon, saying he had a good son, and he simply thanked them. Later, when the meeting ended and everyone withdrew, Phil commented to Ryan that it seemed he had lost on purpose, just to please the boy, making it clear that the relationship with the Ferreira family was fragile. He said he would not accept further changes to the plans, which left Ryan deeply irritated, leading him to order the preparation of 5 apprentices upon returning to the duchy. Afterwards, in Haroon's office, he told Aaron that it was not necessary for him to get involved in the subjugation of the South, since it was an important event and his training at Kronos Academy was even more essential. But Aaron insisted that he still wanted to participate. He promised to overcome his own flaws in 3 weeks and do everything he could not to disappoint his father. He also said that if he failed to satisfy him, he would give up the sword. Haroon remained silent, sensing his son's determination. Later, in the bedroom, Aaron's mother and his sister Kalail showed concern. They asked if he would truly be alright, but his mother said he was making an effort and that they needed to trust him. The next morning, Aaron resumed training with full intensity. Now it was not just his body moving, but also his heart, as if he were pouring out the weight of his entire family. He no longer wanted them to be a source of ridicule. He felt that all that pain was his responsibility and turned it into strength to keep training. At the end of the day, he asked Ruru if his movements still seemed like wasted effort. She replied that they did not, that now it finally looked like real effort. Aaron then asked if he could learn mystical arts, and Ruru said yes, but asked for patience, saying she would teach him, just not at that moment. She told him to organize his thoughts and rest, and that after a good night's sleep he could continue. The next morning, Aaron met Ruru and immediately informed her that no one could enter the training room that day, since he had asked his father to restrict access, which would make training more focused and uninterrupted. Ruru said that was a great idea, but Aaron found her strange, as she was dressed like a teacher, with a tie, glasses, a wand, and even a book. She explained that it was an important day for teaching mystical arts, and that she had worn her special teacher outfit because the moment demanded seriousness. She then emphasized that in mystical arts, the heart was the most important part, because it was what transformed desire into real power. In Aaron's case, his desire was to protect his family. She then asked what he thought he should do to strengthen that desire, explaining that the most common and simplest path was superstition. While speaking, she threw several documents onto the floor and began arranging them like a classroom board, making everything more visual for him to understand. She explained that superstition was not exactly truth, but belief, and in mystical arts, belief mattered more than logic, because power depended directly on the strength of faith. Even baseless stories could generate power if believed strongly enough, just like in ancient times when people saw stones or the sun as gods, and performed rituals to fulfill their desires, using belief itself as a source of strength, considered one of the most powerful. She also mentioned that sacrifices could act as a price, but they were dangerous and could lead to negative consequences, closer to attracting something dark than truly awakening mystical arts. After that, Ruru said the method that suited Eren best was sword training tied to a strong desire, and told him to stop standing still and pick up his sword. Eren then resumed practicing his usual movements, but now trying to better understand what she had said. Before that, he had asked if he should train exactly as before, and she replied no, because now it was different. It involved something like a promise or contract, something with more weight than a simple routine. She explained that he should swing his sword sincerely thousands of times a day, putting his heart into each movement and thinking about how he should evolve, and that this resembled the superstition she had explained earlier, since it was not just repetition, but repetition connected directly to desire. Training without intention led nowhere, but when actions were tied to what one wanted, belief and the strength of the heart would grow stronger, and he would gradually improve each day by fulfilling this contract. In simpler terms, she summarized that for ordinary people outside this fantasy world, it was like setting daily goals and completing them, because it increased motivation and progress over time. She even casually mentioned that it was a good method for anything, since she used something similar herself, setting small goals and increasing them as she improved. Eren listened and thought this was different from normal training, because it was not just repetition, it required thought and feeling in every strike, which was difficult, but he still tried, using everything he felt, his desire to protect his family, anger at his former self, and his wish to become stronger all at once. Meanwhile, Ruru watched and thought that this was enough for now, and that if he continued his effort, he would eventually succeed, because mystical arts awakened through constant effort, even if it seemed baseless. For Eren at that moment, it was the only thing he could rely on. He kept training for days on end, 2 days, then 4, until the 10th day, when he was already extremely exhausted and began to wonder whether he was doing everything correctly or simply wasting his time again. It was at that moment that Ruru noticed he had stopped and began to explain that what truly weakened a strong heart was doubt, since even a burning heart could break once it started being eroded by uncertainty. She said it was natural for the heart not to remain the same forever, because initial passion can fade and the body begins to feel heavy, bringing useless thoughts such as doubt. Because of that, he shouldn't do it alone, but together with other people, because when someone doesn't believe only in themselves but also in others, it strengthens the bond, and when those people return that belief, the strength grows even more. She stated that with other people around him, his steps would become firmer and more courageous. Eren replied that he didn't think anyone truly believed in him like that, but Ruru asked why he thought so. He explained that he knew he had been a coward, someone who spent years running away from everything without doing anything, and because of that he felt no one would have a reason to trust him. However, Ruru said that she believed in him, and that when she had said before that he looked like a stone at the bottom of the river, she had been wrong, because he wasn't an ordinary stone but a pebble still in formation, something that could become strong and beautiful over time. She used that as a comparison, saying that he had potential and that many people around him already liked him, so he shouldn't jump to conclusions about himself so quickly. After that, she ended the lesson for the day and told him to think about it on his own. Later, in his room, Eren reflected on everything and wondered if there were really people who believed in him. He thought about his father, his mother, Kyle, and how everyone had waited 10 years for him to recover, and that if they didn't believe in him, he wouldn't have been able to hold a sword again on his own will. He also remembered his friends, the academy master, the instructors, and Ruru herself, realizing that there were many people around him. Slowly, he began to consider the possibility that maybe he could truly become someone worthy of others' trust. At that moment, while he was lying down, a mystical energy began to envelop his body, and Khalil, in the library, immediately felt that strong presence. She rushed to the room and found Eren trapped inside a kind of giant pearl formed by mystical arts. Ruru explained that he had awakened his mystical arts, and Khalil, confused, asked how that was possible, since she had never heard of an awakening of that kind, and demanded that they explain exactly what had happened to his brother. Ruru explained to Khalil that Eren had been taken inside his own heart, a space created by mystical arts where no one could enter or interfere, because it was a place fully connected to his desire and what he wished to achieve, being the most ideal environment to realize that desire. She said that within that space he would continue training until he reached a result he was satisfied with, without any outside interference. When Khalil asked when he could come out, Ruru replied that it would only happen when he achieved that satisfactory result, but that no one knew when that would be. It could be days, months, or even years. At that moment, she fell silent with concern, wondering if she had made the right choice in bringing a human into that kind of condition, and hoping he would return safely. Meanwhile, inside that space, Eren found himself facing a stone wall in an unknown place, but soon realized he was in the same setting connected to the man from his dream, the swordsman who always appeared to him practicing repetitive sword movements. This time, however, the man stopped, looked directly directly at Eren as if he could truly see him, and in that instant released a pressure of power that pulled Eren closer, as if calling him to his side and toward the path of the Swordmaster. Shortly after, Eren woke up alone in a training courtyard, wearing simple peasant clothes, in front of a wooden cabin and the enormous metal sword that man used. He realized this couldn't be explained normally, because it was mystical arts, a space created by his desire. He then understood that he had awakened, and was inside a world manifested by his own desire, a space made for training. Because of that, he picked up the sword and took a deep breath, realizing that no one could interrupt him there, and that it was a place just for him to grow. From then on, he resumed training without stopping, swinging the sword with force, understanding that this space was where he would find his goal and his path as a swordsman. As days passed, he trained intensely until nightfall, and at first he thought it was excellent, even wishing the environment would always remain bright. The moment he thought that, the world responded to his desire and became bright again, as if reality itself reacted to his will. Later, he imagined it would be nice if it were spring, and the environment changed once more, becoming a scene with warm wind, flowers, petals, a pleasant scent, and light air, creating a perfect space for him to focus solely on the sword. Inside the cabin, he could change clothes, eat whatever he wanted, and rest whenever he wished, making that world extremely comfortable, but also designed for constant training. He continued training for several days, until on the 5th day he realized that no matter how many times he slept, he always woke up in the same place, and then understood that he could not leave until he achieved his goal. During this period, he still remembered the man from his dream, and wondered what their connection was, since he appeared directly inside his mystical art space, but he quickly pushed those thoughts away so as not to get distracted, and returned to training. He increased the repetition of his strikes, starting with 2,000 movements in a day, then more than 5,000 the next, and on day 211 he reached 6,000 strikes, even though he felt something was off, but without doubting himself he continued. At another moment, on day 353, he noticed the number had dropped to 5,600 strikes, indicating he was overexerting himself, and decided to rest a bit. By day 417, during movement number 3,696, his right hand began to feel numb and injured, which could affect the next day's training, so he stopped again. Further along, on the 624th day since he had entered that world, Eren was lying on a large bed resting, but he noticed something troubling. It had already been 96 days since the last time he had touched a real sword. His body felt heavy and his eyes were tired, and he thought that this was inevitable, since he had spent much of his life being lazy, and his previous training had never been entirely by his own will, but rather influenced by the man from his dreams. Now he was there to find his own path of the sword, but at that moment he could no longer even hold it properly, and he still wondered how much time had truly passed, since he didn't know whether time in that place flowed the same as in the real world, which made him feel as if he might simply be wasting time. Even so, he ended up thinking that he could just continue living in that comfortable space forever, until he was interrupted by a voice calling him from inside the cabin. When he looked, he saw Ilya entering through the door, saying that he needed to start training at dawn, which startled him, causing him to wrap himself in the blanket and fall awkwardly to the floor, while she asked if he was really happy to see her and if that was some kind of attempt to escape. Without wasting time, he changed his clothes and went running with her, and even though there was no path in that place at first, a trail naturally formed as soon as they started running together. During the run, Ilya said he was slower and told him to keep the pace, after which he returned completely exhausted to the cabin. There he found Ilya already preparing a meal and saying that after eating they would go straight into sword training, so they ate together, and she noticed he was different, asking if he had something to say while staring at him. He tried to ask how she was there, but she cut him off, telling him not to ask useless questions, and to hurry up and eat. After that, they went to sword training, and at the beginning of the session Ilya asked if he had spent the last few days just playing around, noting that his heart was completely empty at that moment, and that he needed to fill that heart so that his sword movements would have meaning, reminding him that this was something Ruru herself had taught him. Eren asked if she knew Ruru, but Ilya responded coldly, telling him to stop asking useless questions, and to get back to another 2,000 movements. At the end of the day, she said that was all for today, and that she would see him next time, disappearing shortly after, as if she were smoke. Eren was already certain that it was not reality, but even so he went back to rest. He thought that perhaps he had unconsciously summoned Ilya into his mystical arts world, but he didn't see it as something bad. In the middle of sleep he was awakened by Judith, who pulled him forcefully, and complained that the sun was already high and he was still sleeping, asking if he wanted to die. She took him outside together with Bart, and also Ilya. Bart found the situation strange, saying it was unlike Eren to sleep so much. Judith then told him to pick up his sword because they would duel, but Bart complained that he hadn't even warmed up yet, while the two argued. Meanwhile, Ilya ended up going to warm up together with Eren. He returned to sword training, noticing that his posture had worsened again, likely because he had rested too much. Ilya said it was fine, that he was a bit unstable, but still improving and making progress. He looked around and thought to himself that he didn't want people to build expectations about him, because he still felt incapable of doing anything on his own. Even so, he kept training, and at times imagined meals and situations with the people he loved inside his own mind. He wondered if his mystical arts were creating this because those people believed in him. In the real world, he kept running to his limits, feeling his body heavy, his breathing difficult, and his legs weak, but without wanting to stop. At that moment, Judith passed by him saying she would not lose. Later, he trained sword techniques with Bart, repeating movements of strength, agility, and technique, absorbing everything he could. Inside the mystical arts space, he noticed he had become more stable and faster, managing to execute better strikes. Although he still matched Bart in strength, he realized he had truly improved a lot, and thought Ruru had been right in saying he didn't need to suffer alone. He remembered the Oracle Orc, an idea from Marcus, and found a note saying there was no need to be alone, and that strength came from those who believed in him. With that, he managed to perform 10,000 sword movements. Gradually, the images of the people around him began to disappear, and he started again from zero, training continuously. Time passed inside that space, marking 1,237 days, then 1,375, 1,492, 1,566, 1,613, 1,687, and 1,755 days since he had entered that world. Aaron had become much stronger. His body emanated mystical arts and he seemed like a different person, almost like a son of his own. He could now stand on his own, but decided to call his friends again just to show how much he had evolved. Judith joked, asking if he hadn't called everyone there just to show off, but he denied it and said he wanted to duel. She said she would begin, but Aaron surprised them by saying he wanted to face all three at the same time. He advanced with his sword under immense pressure, exciting everyone, but also making them think he was being far too bold. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he didn't feel like he would lose either. He entered a deep state of focus, perceiving every movement of his opponents. First, he charged at Judith, landing a powerful strike. Then he dodged Bart's speed, and afterward avoided an attack from Ilya, responding with fast and precise counterattacks. He began by isolating the fights, overpowering Judith first, who ended up being pressured. Bart had to step in with his speed, and together they made the situation difficult for Aaron, especially with Ilya's covering attacks. Even so, he managed to defend and evade using his mystical arts. When Judith attempted an aerial attack, he blocked it with both hands and held his ground. Ilya noticed that the movement he used to defend himself resembled Bart's own technique, and he confirmed that he had learned by observing all of them. Bart asked how he had managed that, and Aaron replied that he had simply absorbed what he could at the academy, taking bits of everyone's swordsmanship. He didn't want to abandon his own path, but he wanted to strengthen his will through everything he had learned. Judith called him selfish and a fraud, but he replied that she should also awaken her mystical arts. She got irritated and ended up chasing him around for a while. After that, he continued training with all of them inside that space for a long time. On one of the days, he finally managed to knock Judith down, and she surrendered, saying that next time she wouldn't go easy on him. When everything disappeared, Aaron realized he had become much stronger and that he was finally ready to leave that place. He lay down one last time and saw the cabin transform into a massive exit with two giant doors without locks. Near them was the sword from his dreams, as if it were the key. He realized his body now matched that size and understood that this was the closing of a cycle. He remembered that he had come there to free himself from another man's sword style, but to leave, he would have to use it. In the past, that would have driven him to despair, but now he understood better who he was. Everything he had learned was not to become someone else, but to strengthen his own will. He then cut the doors in half. When he opened his eyes, he woke up in his own room, in his own bed, with nothing changed. He wondered how much time had passed, and immediately went to look for his parents. On the way, he passed a white kitten that was not Ruru, and Marcus became confused seeing the animal there even with the windows closed. Shortly after, Aaron met Marcus again, who hugged him and said he had finally returned, and that he thought he would never get out of there. Aaron asked how much time had passed, and Marcus replied that 5 years had gone by. Aaron fell silent, realizing that time had passed, the same as in the other world. Remembering the promises he had made to the Academy Master Ruru and Ilya, he asked about his parents and Khalil, and later finally found them. He embraced his parents, who were crying with emotion at his return. Harun said he was simply happy that he had come back safe and sound, and thanked him deeply for it. Aaron asked about Khalil, and Amelia replied that she was in the Principality of Caesar, where she had become a disciple of a mystic named Skina Kitten. Aaron thought it was good to know she was safe and had followed her own path, but at the same time realized he had caused his parents trouble again. Still, he decided he would do his best from then on. He said they had really gone through a lot because of him, and it must have been hard for them while he was trapped in that strange place for 5 years. But he also said he hadn't been idle, since he had trained more than anyone and achieved the results he wanted. Harun asked if he had practiced swordsmanship inside, and Aaron confirmed, saying there was nothing left to worry about, and that he would no longer cause trouble. He stated that from now on he would live as the honorable son of the Ferreira family, showing proper conduct for his title. He also said that since he had returned in April, he could take part in the subjugation next month. At that moment, Khalil appeared and said he wouldn't go, not without her permission. Aaron asked if she had grown as well, and she replied angrily, asking how he could smile in a situation like that. He simply said he was happy to see her after so long. Amelia questioned why she was there if she should be in the Principality, and Khalil explained that she intended to take part in the subjugation in her brother's place because she couldn't allow him to go. She said she wasn't being reckless, but that he didn't need to get involved in this after having been trapped for 5 years in a dangerous place. Aaron replied that she didn't need to worry because he had trained and become stronger. Kylie then said that if he was so confident, they should duel to prove he was worthy. She released the power she had accumulated over the years, pressing the surroundings with overwhelming force, but Eren endured it and simply asked her to follow him. They went to the training courtyard, where the knights commented in shock that they had thought he was either dead or gone for good, yet he had already returned, ready for a duel against his own sister. Kylil provoked him, asking what he was waiting for, and he replied that he was already ready. He took a firm stance, as if holding an invisible sword, which made her complain that he wasn't even armed. At that moment, a mystical energy sword materialized in his hands. Everyone was shocked, realizing that he was truly capable of using mystical arts. Eren, however, thought it was nothing more than the ability to manifest a sword. Kylil then opened her bags and revealed small swords that transformed into giant magical weapons. She launched them at him, starting the duel, while he was still trying to understand whether this couldn't be resolved more peacefully. He blocked the first strike, feeling as if his arms might break from the impact, but he kept resisting. He was almost hit from behind, but managed to defend at the last moment. Kylil's swords continued to be controlled like guided missiles, while he knocked each one down one after another, maintaining constant defense. The duel continued like that for a while, and Marcus noticed that Eren was only defending without counterattacking. Kylil eventually lost control of her technique and her weapons fell to the ground, until she began to cry, saying she was only worried about him. She embraced him in tears, calling him an idiot, and telling him never to disappear like that again. Eren apologized for taking so long to return, and said she had done well during that time. Later, Kylil warned him to be careful about the subjugation, because the Deciano region had become far more dangerous. She explained that a demonoid had appeared, an existence formed through contracts with demons, with power comparable to high-level mystics, born from a corrupted heart and extremely dangerous, far beyond ordinary monsters. She said she would also take part in the mission. Eren replied that that was true, but at that moment a mage appeared and interrupted, saying that couldn't happen, because a very important event would take place in 2 weeks. Kylil responded that her teacher had come because she was visiting her brother, who had awakened after 5 years. Then she asked if he was Eren Ferreira, since she was the mystic of Cesar, Skin a Kitten. Eren thought she looked very young and beautiful, but he had heard she was around 50 years old, so he concluded she probably used mystical arts to rejuvenate herself, which Skinna herself confirmed. When he reacted in surprise and asked if she could read minds, she explained that she couldn't, but that she was very good at reading people's thoughts, making it clear he had indeed been thinking she was too beautiful to be his sister's teacher, which was true. Kylil told him not to listen to her, saying her teacher was a total mess in everything involving mystical arts, and Skinna responded by hugging her disciple and saying that was exactly what made her special, calling her silly. She then commented to Eren that the girl had talked about him a lot over the past 5 years, which left Kylil extremely embarrassed. The teacher then asked what he had just said, and stated that if he wanted to keep her quiet, she would have to go back to her room and prepare to return to her routine, showing a very direct way of dealing with her disciple. Eren thought she was truly impressive, since even he couldn't handle Kylil so easily. Skinna apologized, saying that maybe that hadn't been the best first impression, explaining that to be Khalil's master one needed an even stronger will than hers. Eren replied that it was fine, and the teacher commented that he was quite different from her disciple. Shortly after, she revealed she had brought him a gift, handing him a necklace with a crystal pendant, an artifact capable of detecting demonic energy and dangerous elements, and even detoxifying poisons. Eren refused, thinking it was too valuable, but Skinna insisted that he accept it, saying that both she and Khalil had made it together, and that during the 5 years the disciple waited for his awakening, she had poured all her power into creating the necklace. She added that she had never seen Khalil so excited since becoming her disciple, and asked him to make good use of the gift. Eren eventually accepted it and thanked her. Upon parting, Skinna said she was pleased, and that he was a better brother than she had expected. After she left, Eren also felt satisfied to see that his parents were well, and that Kylil had found a good master, but he wondered where Ruru might be. Later, in the Gairun territory, at a provisional base, everyone was preparing in a war camp for the monster subjugation. When he asked about Ruru, Khalil replied that she had stayed in the duchy for a few months and then disappeared without leaving any trace. Eren said he understood that she didn't like Ruru very much, but that none of it had been anyone's fault, only what he himself had wanted, and asked her to try not to hate her so much if they ever met again. Khalil replied that she would try. Meanwhile, people were talking about Eren himself. The Lester twins commented that they thought he shouldn't even be there, while Martin said he had heard he had been trapped inside a mystical barrier for 5 years. Ryan claimed that was a lie and just an excuse, saying he must have been resting all that time. The twins questioned why he wanted to join the subjugation since he had no experience fighting monsters, but Martin said that if he had the same abilities, he would easily manage it. Kevin added that because of the demonoid, knights, mages, and priests had been dispatched, and even the vice-captain of the order, Sir Hill Burnett, was in command of the operation, making it impossible not to participate. Without realizing it, Kevin said all this while Hill Burnett, vice-captain of the Knights of the Twilight Order, was standing right behind him. The vice-captain apologized for interrupting, but said that since everyone was gathered, they would not be participating in the subjugation, as he would continue only with those he had brought with him. Phil questioned how he could make such an important decision alone, and Hill replied that a demonoid was on another level compared to ordinary monsters, and that many of them did not understand the true true severity of the situation. He criticized the southern nobles, saying they relied too much on honor and failed to grasp the real danger, and that he would not risk the mission alongside people driven only by personal glory. His presence alone put everyone under pressure, but Eren remained calm. At that moment, Ryan tried to pass and ended up stepping into Hilburnet's path, who asked who he was to block him. The pressure was so intense that Ryan coughed blood and fell to his knees, barely able to move. Even so, he said he would not make excuses, that he had underestimated the demonoid, but would not repeat the mistake, and wanted another chance to join the mission. Hill observed his attitude, and said that, despite everything, he could not simply exclude them after seeing their willingness to fight for the territory, only reinforcing that they must understand the gravity of the enemy. Later in his tent, Hill Burnett reviewed documents and realized that Ryan Guerin was a good soldier, but among them all he was practically the only truly useful one. At that moment, he received a visitor. Tom Miller, a wandering knight from the kingdom of Gerbera, appeared to meet Hill Burnett, who commented that it had been a while since their last meeting, and asked about his disciple, saying he had heard he was quite talented. Miller replied moderately that he was merely acceptable, which led Hill to question whether he was being too harsh, since the disciple was one of the 27th generation trainees of the Grimacrono Academy, known as the Golden Generation. Miller explained that he was one of the trainees who failed to become an official knight, although he believed that even so, he would not be inferior to official apprentices, but still had a long way to go before reaching geniuses like Ilya Lindsay. Hill remarked that she was from the kingdom of Adam, and remembered she had ranked first at the academy, but refused to become an official apprentice, leaving at 14 to become an honorary knight of the Knights of the Moon, the kingdom's greatest order. Miller replied that she was an absurd genius, comparable to Ignat, and Hill said he felt envious, since in the kingdom of Hell there was no one at that level. Miller disagreed and said there was indeed someone like that, stating that his disciple had heard of a monster capable of rivaling Ilya Lindsay, someone who nearly placed second in the academy's final evaluation by a minimal margin, and who had once split the ground with his sword. Hill, surprised, asked if that student was still at the academy, but Miller said he had already left and was from the southern region of the kingdom of Hell, possibly participating in the subjugation. When Hill asked for the name, Miller revealed it was Aaron Ferreira. The next morning, the expedition set out for the subjugation, and after a long march, they paused in a clearing to rest and eat. The Knights of the Twilight Order observed the southern warriors' training and acknowledged that, despite being showy, they were skilled, with Ryan Garoon standing out as the best among them. Phil observed that this was noteworthy, and thought that the gap between their family and the Ferreira family had widened in recent years, but that if they managed to monopolize active roles in the mission, they could strengthen the Garoon family, since Ryan was essential for that, and needed to impress the vice captain. At that moment, Hill passed by Ryan without interacting, which annoyed the young man, but he tried not to be shaken by it. However, the situation changed when Hill approached Aaron. They stared at each other in silence, until Hill informed the soldiers that he had been looking for him, saying he had heard rumors that Aaron was a lazy southern noble who had disappeared because of mystical arts. Hill was confused, thinking that he might have abandoned Kronos Academy and returned home, also questioning the use of those mystical arts, since he believed only his sister dealt with them. He then confirmed whether he was Aaron Ferreira, and said that, as the one leading the subjugation, he should be treated as a commander. Straightforwardly, Hill criticized the fact that the other youths were training hard while Aaron seemed relaxed. Aaron apologized and explained that, in his current state, training swordsmanship would not be true effort, as it would go against his heart. Some nearby people commented that it sounded like showing off, but Hill found the answer interesting and asked him to explain further. Aaron said he was there to kill the demonoid and also to increase his family's honor, but at that moment he was focused on understanding what he truly needed to do in that subjugation. He explained that, since he had no experience in missions like this, he had decided there was something more important than simply training swordsmanship, because true effort required putting one's heart into the action completely, and training without that could not be considered real effort. Hill thought he was indeed different, and at that moment a soldier announced it was time to depart. The order was given for everyone to return to formation, but Hill asked Aaron to remain by his side, as he still wanted to talk to him. Thus, they continued the march together, while Ryan silently watched everything, satisfied with how things were unfolding. But Phil said they shouldn't be so impatient, and that they could wait for an opportunity to appear, or even create that opportunity themselves. Ryan replied that he also thought sooner was better. Meanwhile, Aaron told Hill that he had a sword made from mystical arts, and Hill found that very interesting, especially since he was already armed at that moment, and thought that this boy had awakened mystical arts at such a young age, in addition to being a swordsman, which was surprising. Then he asked whether Aaron had said there was still something he needed to focus on besides training, and what exactly it was. Aaron was thinking of three things. First, he had never killed before, and wanted to prepare himself for the shock and confusion that might come after his first kill. Second, he had heard that nothing was more dangerous than the unpredictable actions of a soldier, so he wanted to avoid becoming a nuisance or a burden. Third, he was thinking about the demonic energy emanating from demonoids and their subordinates, and wanted to do what he could so others could better recognize the appearance of enemies, maximizing his senses. Hill replied that he was far more realistic than expected, and praised him, but said he should not overburden himself at the start, especially regarding the last point, since veterans and priests already handled that, and were able to detect demonic energy. At that moment, Aaron sensed the presence of an enemy approaching from behind before anyone else, a gigantic beast with long fangs and a sharp predator's gaze. Hill sensed the threat thanks to Aaron, and immediately ordered everyone to prepare for battle, with the 6 families moving to the rear to protect mages and priests, while the knights engaged the enemies. Before any strategy was fully organized, Aaron rushed out alone, summoning his giant mystical sword, and with a single vertical strike, split the demonic beast in half. Everyone was shocked, unable to react, including Harun, who couldn't believe what he had seen. However, the creature grotesquely regenerated and counterattacked Aaron, who blocked it, ran along its arm, and tore it off with a spinning strike, continuing the fight while Hill shouted that there were still more enemies and they needed to be eliminated. After the battle, everyone was safe with no losses, and Aaron questioned what he had done and why he had acted that way, since upon seeing the giant he could not contain his anger, something he had never felt before. Hill approached and asked if he understood what he had done, and Aaron apologized for acting without following orders, saying he could not control his emotions. But Hill replied that he did not need to bow his head, and that they were in a subjugation where the goal was precisely to eliminate beasts, and that he had done an excellent job helping defeat the giant quickly and keeping the operation efficient, congratulating him on his first performance. Soon after, Harun approached his son worried, asking if he was okay and if he was injured, and Aaron replied that he was only stained with the creature's blood. Harun then hugged him, saying he was very proud of him. Later, Aaron showed Hill an artifact he had received as a gift from Khalil and her teacher, capable of detecting demonic energy, which impressed Hill, as it seemed even more sensitive than divine artifacts used by priests. During the march, the pendant detected enemies coming from the left, and the formation was quickly prepared, with the creatures being easily eliminated by the subjugation force. Hill then told Aaron that he would start trusting his words more than the divine artifacts of priests, asking him to announce aloud whenever he detected energy. Ryan was not very happy with this change. Later, at the camp, while everyone was eating and resting, the knights were impressed with Aaron, who at only 21 years old already demonstrated great skill, seeming like a true specialist. While eating his soup, Aaron's pendant reacted again, but this time it was not demonic energy, it was poison, and it turned completely black. He realized that someone was trying to kill him and that this was relatively common among noble families, though this time it had been done in a very direct manner. He suspected the 3 present families, especially Garen, but decided not to tell his father so as not to worry him. He then purified the poison and found a hidden note under the pot, indicating that someone had tried to discreetly warn him about it. Aaron was surprised that someone was trying to help him, while from a distance Jack Stewart watched everything and wondered whether he was truly making the right decision. After Aaron finished eating, Hill requested a duel against him, judging that he needed to see the full extent of Aaron's power to better understand how it could influence the demonoid subjugation. Both prepared under the eyes of the entire camp, and Hill drew his sword, asking Aaron to do the same. Aaron then materialized his sword out of nowhere, which shocked and amazed everyone, who began commenting among themselves about how unbelievable it was. Hill explained that, since the duel was meant to confirm Aaron's abilities, only one full power strike from each side would determine the outcome. Aaron immediately accepted without hesitation, which satisfied the commander, who noticed that he had an unusual composure, like someone accustomed to facing death or something even deeper. Hill then entered his own combat preparation, almost like a bestial transformation through his ability, while evaluating the boy's spirit, which seemed unbreakable like steel, and at the same time emitted a sinister, glorious, and radiant aura. He realized that if he did not take the duel seriously, he could easily be overwhelmed by that power. As the tension rose, Hill roared like a beast, and the Knights of the Order of Twilight realized he was truly taking the confrontation seriously. One of the knights tried to initiate the procedure but tripped and fell between them, apologizing. Hill then stopped the duel and said he had seen enough, stating that Aaron could act independently from that point onward without needing to follow direct orders, as he possessed sufficient skill and was close to the level of an experienced combatant. Later, while resting, Aaron stayed awake thinking about what he had felt during the battle against the giant beast and during the duel with Hill, realizing that in both moments he had partially lost control, as if his emotions had taken over his body. This reminded him of an old dream involving a mysterious man who seemed to return, now older and enraged amid a violent storm. Aaron woke up early the next day and decided to set it aside, understanding that he needed to focus on the subjugation for now. Meanwhile, Ryan questioned Jack about the poison placed in Aaron's soup, and Jack confirmed that he had done it, but was surprised that it had not affected him. Ryan became irritated and ordered him to increase the dose, even as Jack warned that it could be fatal. Ryan coldly told him to stop worrying about Aaron and simply obey. Jack agreed, though clearly uncomfortable. At the next meal, Aaron's pendant again detected poison and automatically purified it. He realized that the assassination attempts were becoming persistent, but also noticed that, once again, a hidden note had been left warning about the poison, indicating that someone was trying to help him discreetly. During the march, Hill noticed that Aaron seemed deep in thought, but Aaron said it was nothing important. Shortly after, the pendant detected demonic energy to the left, and Aaron went alone to deal with the enemies, effortlessly destroying humanoid creatures while Hill handled the rear guard. After the battle, the knights praised Aaron's performance, impressed by his strength and precision. He, in turn, realized that his senses were becoming sharper, allowing him to detect demonic energy even before the artifact itself, and he wondered if this was was connected to that internal change and the mysterious dream. Meanwhile, Ryan became increasingly irritated with the situation and questioned Jack about Aaron's behavior. Jack replied that Aaron's artifact not only detected demonic energy, but also seemed capable of detoxifying poisons. Ryan asked whether all of that was the fault of his little sister again, and concluded that the only solution was to kill the demonoid. Soon after, Hill reported that they had found an artificial cave, which was the demonoid's base, and called Aaron to advance with him. Ryan also stepped forward, volunteering to take the vanguard, and Hill accepted, but warned everyone not to let their guard down at any moment. The group then entered the cave. As soon as they went inside, they began hearing music echoing through the walls, a strangely beautiful symphony that made the environment feel too comfortable to be real. Aaron realized it was an illusion and was unaffected, observing the others from a distance. Hill nearly fell into the trap, but recovered by releasing his lion's roar, and ordered his men to immediately wake those who had been influenced, reinforcing that they could not fall into the demonoid's temptations. The group arrived at a vast hall inside the cave, from where all the music was coming, and there they found the demonoid, a beautiful woman playing the piano. She turned her face toward the intruders, and asked whether they would like to hear another piece. She was not alone. When she stood up from the piano, she was accompanied by concert skeletons and a kind of astro-violinist. Hill immediately recognized that she was a high-ranking demonoid, whose only visible difference from a human was her red eyes, and he found it strange that she maintained such a human-like appearance, even after being infused with demonic power. Meanwhile, Ryan was focused only on proving that he was superior to Aaron Ferreira. The demonoid stated that she wanted to play them a song, but Hill told her to shut up and maintain formation. She insisted, saying her performance was renowned, and that what they had heard earlier was only an appetizer, then resumed singing with a siren-like voice that began to affect the men. Hill ordered everyone to avoid looking at her, as she was attempting to hypnotize them. Even so, Ryan rushed forward alone, disobeying formation, and was attacked by hair that functioned like whips. He tried to defend himself with his sword, but could not break through her defenses. The demonoid then attempted to counterattack again, but Jack stepped in front to protect the group and was pulled toward her. She recognized him and said it was a pleasure to meet him, stating that she did not intend to kill him, as she was a pacifist, and proposed a deal involving his life and hers, asking for a way out of there. Hill and the others refused any negotiation with demonoids, while Phil became conflicted, saying he would not let his own son die, and ordered his group to protect the young master first. Tension grew among the allies themselves, as the demonoid watched, satisfied with the chaos unfolding. Amid the confusion, the demonoid noticed that Aaron remained still, eyes closed, as if meditating. In the next instant, he moved in a single swift strike and split her in half, destroying the piano and the surrounding skeletons as well. Even as she regenerated, she realized her recovery was being weakened. She tried to use hostages as shields, but Aaron completely ignored it, cutting through her hair and her left arm, and continuing his assault without hesitation. She attempted to defend herself with a cocoon of hair and retreat, but Aaron kept pressing until he broke through her defenses. In the end, the demonoid saw her own death approaching as everything was engulfed in a bright light inside the cave. She tried to escape, but was prevented by the pressure of the battle, and was struck again by Hill in his beast-like form amid the chaos. Even so, Aaron detected her final attempt to flee, and unleashed a long-range strike that completely fragmented her, leaving nothing behind. Afterward, the Knights of the Order confirmed that the demonoid had been defeated by Aaron Ferreira. Hill said he had no words to describe what had happened, while Jack could only admire Aaron for what he had done. After that, the temporary camp began to be dismantled, and the Knights were still in shock at the outcome of the battle, as Aaron Ferreira had defeated the demonoid almost entirely on his own. Many recalled old rumors about him, saying he was just a lazy noble, but that no longer made sense. It was decided that, upon returning, they would need to deal with the vice-captain, as what had happened should not have occurred that way. Later, Hill held a meeting with Phil Guerin, who tried to justify himself by saying he was not himself during the confusion, and asked for forgiveness, but Hill made it clear that such excuses did not work. Phil insisted that he had been under the demonoid's mental control and would never have acted that way under normal conditions, especially against his own son. Even so, Hill considered the explanation weak and realized that despite everything, there was no concrete proof of the crime, leaving the situation without a clear resolution. Back home, Aaron lay in silence, thinking about the battle. He reflected that it had not been fought for his family, but simply to kill the demonoid, and that being covered in blood during combat might mean something deeper, tied to the memories and fury of the man within him. He questioned what it all meant, still confused by those sensations. At that moment, Jack Stewart visited him politely, saying he had something important to discuss about the subjugation, but first wanted to give thanks. He explained that when he had been taken hostage by the demonoid, no one cared about his life, not even the vice-captain, his subordinates, or his lord, and that he only survived because of Aaron. Aaron replied indifferently that he did not care about the hostages, and had only been there to kill the demonoid. Still, Jack insisted that he owed his life to him, and revealed something more serious. He confessed that he had been the one who put put poison in Aaron's food. He said it was an unforgivable act, something no human or knight should ever do, and that he would accept any punishment. Aaron replied that he had already suspected it and was uneasy about it, but at that moment he did not want to deal with it, asking Jack to leave. He stated that he would not let the matter go, but needed time to clear his mind first. Jack accepted, promised to atone for his sins later, and then left. Right after he left, Ruru appeared and said that nothing would change even if he kept thinking about that day all the time. Aaron noticed her presence and asked if she had come back. She replied that she had only come to see how he was, but said she didn't have the right to appear before him. She explained that if she had done a better job, he wouldn't have been separated from his family for 5 years, and admitted she felt guilty about what happened to Khalil, who ended up becoming depressed because of her. When Aaron tried to approach her, Ruru stepped back, telling him not to touch her and calling herself a black cat of bad luck, saying that even superstitions can become real. She opened a portal to try to escape, but Aaron grabbed her and said that from that moment on, black cats would be a symbol of good luck, insisting that his belief would be stronger than any superstition. In the end, Ruru gave in and said she had missed him too. After that, Aaron told her everything that had happened during the battle, and Ruru was impressed, saying that mystical arts were truly incredible and that she hadn't expected people from the academy to appear in such a way. She commented that he could now even manifest his own sword and said he had a strong affinity for mystical arts. When Aaron asked how she knew that, Ruru replied that she had always been by his side, disguised as the white kitten, and that she was also the one who sent the warnings about the poison. She then observed that during the fight against the demonoid, he seemed like a different person, and asked if something had happened to him. Aaron told her everything about the dream, and the enraged man who frequently appeared in it. Ruru analyzed the situation and explained that the man seemed to harbor a deep hatred for demonoids, and that his origins might be connected to something ancient, possibly around 150 years ago, making it likely that he was tied to some conflict against demons from that period. She also questioned why Aaron still cared so much about that figure, since what mattered most was that the man's will was leaving his heart unsettled and unstable. Still, Ruru said he might be affected at times and even lower his sword due to fatigue, since in the end he was human, but that this was part of the process, because afterward he could rise again even stronger. She added that if things ever became too difficult, she would help him recover, since over the past 5 years she had trained a lot and become much stronger, proudly showing it. Aaron was happy to be reunited with Ruru, realizing that on his own his worries would only grow, and that it was much better to have a master he could trust, although he still had important matters to resolve, such as his promise with his master, with Ilya, and with his friends. Meanwhile, Hill was very dissatisfied upon realizing that other families seemed to be accepting the Viscount Garen's claims, even after the illegal actions committed against a horde of knights, which he saw as something being covered up in the name of the kingdom's good and the continent's peace, something he did not intend to let slide. At the same time, Phil was extremely stressed, complaining about everything, even the taste of his own tea, going so far as to throw the cup at the window and dismiss the maid, while trying to deal with the consequences of what had happened in the subjugation, knowing it had been the family's last chance and that everything had failed because of Aaron Ferreira. Soon after, Hill knocked on Phil's door, questioning the reason for his anger and saying they needed to end that discussion, but Phil replied that there was nothing left to talk about. Hill then got straight to the point and mentioned hearing about something shameful that had happened during the subjugation involving the Gairun family, which had allegedly poisoned the food of the young master of Ferreira. Phil denied it and accused Hill of trying to frame him without evidence, saying it was extremely unpleasant, but Hill replied that he did have proof, and called Jack, who appeared as a witness to the incident and as someone who had confessed to the crime and would be punished for it. Phil tried to discredit him, saying he was lying and acting alone, but Jack confirmed the truth, increasing the tension even further. Hill then stated that he would make an official request to the kingdom to open an investigation, making it clear that if Jack Stewart was lying, he would have to cooperate, but if it was true, he would have to pay for his crimes and could lose everything he had built. After that, Hill returned to the settlement feeling relieved, believing he had finally resolved part of the problem, but soon decided to head to Ferreira, determined not to lose Aaron and wanting to make him his disciple. Upon arriving there, he learned that Aaron had returned to the Sword Academy and heard contradictory information, as some said he had refused admission, while Harun explained that he simply had something to resolve and had in fact already been officially admitted 5 years earlier. Hill realized he had arrived too late, but still praised Aaron, saying he was incredible and a true treasure of the kingdom. On the way back to the Sword Academy, Aaron traveled alongside Ruru, who was hidden inside his cloak, and asked if he was talking about the Academy Master Ian and whether he was really that impressive. Aaron replied yes, explaining that he had one of the best skills on the continent and was the one who guided him to the right decision, being his first master and someone he deeply respected, believing he might have some advice about his current condition, even if it might not help much with his dreams. Ruru replied that this wasn't impossible, reminding him that the greatest swordsmen on the continent were no different from mystics, as they possessed unbelievable abilities and desires that did not follow logic. This gave Aaron a bit of hope again. Ruru then asked if he only had that one mystical arts master, and he said yes, mentioning his second master. After that, Ruru began preparing for the journey and entered a portal, reappearing shortly after in a stylized outfit similar to Puss in Boots, commenting that she usually didn't dress up, but when she did it was serious, telling him to just wait wait since they were arriving at the academy. Finally, they arrived at the metropolis of Alcantara, where the Chronos Sword Academy was located. Ruru was impressed by the magical lights in the streets and by people freely using magic. Aaron explained that the city had grown so much precisely because of the construction of the academy, and commented that the place was even more incredible than he had imagined. Deciding to first look for an inn, they went to the sword's cradle, where Ruru moved away a bit to explore, while Aaron went inside and noticed that despite its size, the place had a heavy, intense atmosphere, with several armed people staring at him. A large man asked if he was also a guest of the Sword Academy, and Aaron confirmed. The atmosphere grew even stranger, with comments about recruitment and challenges, while some said that anyone could accept the invitation but should not overestimate themselves. The situation escalated into an argument among those present, until the tavern keeper asked them not to mind it, and soon several people went outside to fight. When the commotion calmed down, the tavern keeper asked again if he was an academy guest, and Aaron confirmed, curious about how everyone seemed to recognize that so easily. The man replied that everyone there was gathered precisely because they were also Chronos invitees. The inn was known for hosting this type of people, swordsmen invited by the Chronos Sword Academy, and the tavern keeper asked if this was Aaron's first reception of invitees. He replied that he was not familiar with such things yet, and the man explained that the Chronos Sword Academy was a dream institution for swordsmen. Because of its fame, many invitees came, but since there were so many were dismissed immediately. This created a problem, as some swordsmen began insisting on staying at the academy gates waiting to be challenged, and groups even accused Chronos of cowardice. This led to the creation of the guest reception, an event held every 2 weeks on a fixed day chosen by the academy, allowing anyone to enter and duel. The tavern keeper explained that this was why everyone was there, as they were trying to obtain a mercenary tag. Aaron thought there was nothing wrong with that. The tavern keeper then guided him through an unexpected path, down staircases, leading to an underground mercenary agency, where a man greeted him, asking if Edgar had brought another candidate for the test. Inside the place there was a magical measuring device, and they explained that Aaron would need to strike it with full strength using only his sword to determine his rank. When he asked if the equipment could break, the man said it was a magical tool and would not break easily, so he decided to try. Edgar confirmed to his friend that Aaron was indeed a Chronos invitee, and the two began betting on the result while offering Aaron the chance to choose a normal sword for the test. He refused and instead manifested his own sword using mystical arts, quickly focused, and delivered a full power strike to the device, which withstood the impact, astonishing everyone. The man was shocked and asked where that sword came from. Aaron explained it was a mystical art, and the weapon vanished immediately afterward. When they asked for his score, the result was 10,772, leaving everyone stunned. Although he broke a record, the highest rank he could initially receive was a silver mercenary tag, despite a performance worthy of something far greater. Later, Ruru played with the tag in the room while Aaron commented that it had been fun to earn it, and she reminded him that the next day would be the important moment. Aaron was excited to meet Judith, especially her, and the following morning he and the other invitees headed to the gates of the Chronos Sword Academy, with Ruru bright and enthusiastic. Upon arriving at the arena, Aaron noticed that Lance was there, a former classmate of his, and Ruru commented that he looked strong, which Aaron confirmed. At the center of the arena, Lance introduced himself as the opponent for the guest reception, being an official apprentice of the 27th class, the so-called Golden Generation, which caused commotion among the spectators, as many thought it absurd for a student to face invitees. Still, Lance explained that the academy wanted its apprentices to gain experience against outsiders, and that if anyone was disappointed in him, they should call a superior immediately. An aggressive-looking mercenary tried to face him, but Lance dodged easily, disarmed him in a single strike, and sent the sword flying into the stands, impressing Ruru with his strength. One by one, all challengers were defeated, showing how much stronger Lance had become through years of training. Then he looked into the stands and recognized Aaron, calling his name and asking if he remembered him, to which Aaron replied yes, saying it had been a long time. Lance asked where he had been, and Aaron said it was a long story. Lance commented that it was a shame he had not returned sooner, as he could have reunited with Judith and Bart. This surprised Aaron, as he thought Bart had given up, but Lance explained that he had returned and had even left on a training journey with Judith a few days earlier. Aaron was happy to hear this, but also realized he might not be able to meet them at that moment. Soon after, Lance challenged him to a direct duel, wanting to see how strong he had become. The other spectators did not have much faith in Aaron, having just witnessed Lance's overwhelming power, and the atmosphere in the arena grew heavy as everyone waited for the confrontation between the two. But Ruru got excited and cheered loudly, saying he could do it, telling him not to hold back just because the opponent was someone he knew, and even asking him to finish him off. At that moment, Lance asked if that talking cat that speaks human language belonged to him, and Aaron replied that she didn't belong to him, explaining that she was his teacher and that she was the one who taught him those kinds of things. While he already began materializing his giant sword using mystical arts, Lance commented that it was either sorcery or mystical arts, and said Aaron was full of surprises, noting that he hadn't stayed idle over the years, and warning that he wouldn't forgive him if he wasn't good enough, teasingly calling him Blondie. The two then began their duel, with Lance's sword being lighter and faster, allowing him to open with an intense sequence of attacks. The mercenaries noticed that he was pushing Aaron backward, but Aaron still managed to block block everything. At one point, Aaron managed to deflect Lance's sword trajectory despite the heavy movements, which made Lance suspicious and want to confirm something. He quickly changed his blade angle, but Aaron blocked again, making Lance ask if it was true and if he was using Bart's sword style, unable to understand how he could have learned it so quickly. But then he realized that the stance was no longer exactly Bart's, but a different variation. Aaron then completely changed his posture, showing another way of fighting and blocking differently, which made Lance even more confused, unable to understand how he had memorized it after seeing it only once. Then it was Aaron's turn to attack, and when he advanced, his heavy strike collided with Lance's long sword, driving him into the arena floor with the impact. A second spinning strike almost knocked him down completely, and at that moment Lance recognized the sword style very clearly, because he had already been defeated by it before. It was Judith's swordsmanship. Even while being thrown back, Lance managed to stay on his feet, but realized he had been caught up in his own thoughts, remembering that he had never managed to defeat either Bart or Judith, and now he couldn't defeat Aaron either. He then rushed forward again with more anger, his wild attacks pressing Aaron, who realized he couldn't lower his guard for even a second. The fight continued intensely, with both exchanging high-level speed and strength, while Aaron searched for a clear opening, and Lance fought with the determination to finally surpass Bart, Judith, and now Aaron as well, constantly getting back up and trying to prove his worth. In the middle of the fight, Aaron dodged a thrust and used the opening to raise his giant sword and disarm Lance, ending the duel with his victory before hiding the sword again using mystical arts. Lance didn't get angry, he simply smiled, while Ruru cheered excitedly, saying that was exactly how it should be. Aaron then greeted him, saying it was a great match, and Lance asked what kind of training he had gone through over the past 5 years. Around them, the mercenaries stood in disbelief, unable to accept what they had just witnessed. At that moment, Ruru sensed a presence approaching and warned Aaron that he had arrived. The professor he had mentioned. Ian approached, saying that it was a sight he never expected to see, calling Aaron Ferreira and saying he hadn't imagined they would meet again, asking how he had been all this time. Aaron replied politely that he was very well, sir. Ian also noticed the presence of the talking cat, but chose not to focus on it for now, simply asking whether they had been dueling and who had won. Lance respectfully answered that he had lost this time, master. Ian was clearly surprised, saying he hadn't expected Lance to lose that day, acknowledging that Aaron hadn't been idle over the years. Aaron simply apologized for being late, but Ian said not to talk about that now, and to leave it for later, stating that at that moment, a swordsman should only speak with swords. Then he removed his cloak, drew his sword, and asked if Aaron wasn't tired of fighting, also saying he didn't remember accepting such a weak disciple. Aaron took a little while to be recognized by the mercenaries around him, but it didn't take long for everyone to realize that he was standing before Ian, the master swordsman of the Kronos Academy. Excitement quickly spread through the area, since having the chance to watch the greatest swordsman on the continent fence in person was an incredible stroke of luck. When Ian gave permission for the duel to begin, Aaron charged forward with everything he had. The old master didn't need to block the attacks directly. Instead, he redirected the force of each strike to different points, guiding the impact of Aaron's heavy sword away from himself. As they fought, he explained that Aaron's attacks were far too simple. He said it was possible to use an opponent's momentum at the moment of impact to increase both speed and power, but simple attacks were nothing more than putting strength into one's hands and hoping for the best. Even while holding back his strength, a single thrust from Ian was enough to send Aaron flying backward. The young swordsman managed to regain his balance, which impressed the master. Ian realized that Aaron had just used Bart's swordsmanship, and that his level of mastery was already quite high. Even so, his combat rhythm had been completely disrupted. In the blink of an eye, the short master swordsman appeared right beside him, attacking while closing the distance. Aaron barely managed to block. Ian pointed out that the transition between his defense and offense was far too slow and clumsy. Because of that, he took a direct blow to the chest and dropped to one knee. The master explained that mastering several styles of swordsmanship meant nothing if he could not connect them naturally. A real battle was not a chivalrous duel divided between attack and defense. Everything happened at the same time. Even so, Aaron refused to give up. He charged forward once again, using the power of wind and storms. Lance watched carefully and realized that he was also using the swordsmanship of the heavens, Ilya's special technique. With light and effortless steps, Ian blocked the entire storm of attacks. Then he commented that it wasn't bad, but it still felt incomplete compared to everything Aaron had shown so far. He asked if that was truly all he had to offer, or if there was still something else. Aaron immediately understood what the master meant. He closed his eyes, raised his sword, and began to focus. The two remained motionless for several moments. As he watched the scene, Lance remembered the last attack he had seen Aaron use, and felt a chill run down his spine. That strike had been terrifying. When Aaron opened his eyes again, he swung his sword. The attack didn't shatter the ground or cause an immediate explosion. In fact, it merely pushed away the smoke around them. For the first second, nothing happened. The very next instant, a tremendous shockwave slammed into Ian's sword, creating a massive rupture throughout the arena. An enormous cliff-like chasm opened before everyone's eyes. The mercenaries were left speechless when they saw what happened next. To block that attack, Ian had to use an ability reserved only for true masters of the sword, an aura sword. Ian himself admitted that he had not intended to resort to that technique. He then praised Aaron, saying that it had been magnificent and that he had finally found his his own swordsmanship. Aaron replied that he had, but before he could finish speaking, Ian interrupted him. The master said that his heart was wavering, and that this was probably what he wanted to ask about. Shortly afterward, Ian apologized to the guests and announced that the reception would end there. He thanked everyone for their understanding, and invited Aaron to a private conversation in his office. Later, in the office, Ian, the Academy's vice master, Aaron, and Ruru were all present. Ruru introduced herself as a master of mystical arts. The vice master also introduced herself, revealing her name to be Kara Finn, but Ian's attention was focused on something else. He wanted to hear everything that had happened to Aaron over the past 5 years. After listening to the entire story about the mystical arts and the dream that continued to change more and more, the master got straight to the point. He said that he did not have a definitive solution to the problem, but he could offer some advice. According to him, Aaron should leave that place. It was possible for him to continue training at Kronos, but if he could not control that man's desire whenever he encountered demonic monsters, perhaps he could simply avoid such situations. However, Ian believed that this was probably not the path Aaron truly wanted to follow. There were many possible paths for a swordsman, but living while avoiding such an important part of himself did not seem right. The master explained that the world inside him was only a small part of reality. The way he perceived the world would change as he grew stronger. If his perspective changed, then his thoughts would change as well, and as a result, his heart would change too. Perhaps he would find something capable of making his sword stronger and sharper. Perhaps he would even end up wielding a completely different sword from the one he carried now. That was why Aaron needed to set out on a journey and search for his own answers in the vast world beyond, without remaining bound to what he already knew. Ian acknowledged that it was not an easy decision and told Aaron that he should take some time to think it through carefully. But Aaron immediately replied that he did not need any more time to think. He was going. The certainty in his answer impressed Kira. Aaron then continued, saying that he had spent his entire life avoiding things he did not want to do or things that terrified him. However, he no longer wanted to run away. After Aaron left, Ian asked Kira what she thought of the boy. She replied that she was not sure. She considered Aaron an exceptional and honorable person, but she still could not call him a true swordsman. Ian answered that she was being too harsh and asked her to give the boy some time. If he was truly the same child Ian remembered, then he was certain Aaron would find the answer to his own problem. The following day, Aaron said goodbye to Lance. His friend commented that it was a shame he would only be staying for such a short time, but he also took the opportunity to ask whether Aaron would be heading west. As far as he knew, Judith was traveling in that direction as well. The 5 Western kingdoms were famous for their schools of swordsmanship. In addition to countless academies, they were home to renowned coliseums where swordsmen from all over the world gathered to refine their skills. In Lance's opinion, it was the perfect destination for Aaron. He truly should visit the region during his journey. Aaron departed, and after the farewell, Lance was approached by Kira. The vice director told him not to let his inferiority complex interfere with his growth. He needed to overcome it, continue improving, grit his teeth, and endure. Lance answered with a respectful, "Yes, vice director." When Aaron returned to the city, he was stopped by a homeless man who claimed he had not eaten in a week. However, after taking a closer look, Aaron realized he already knew him. The man was the orc seer, the very same one who had delivered the mysterious note back when he was with Marcus. Later, the orc was sitting inside a tavern devouring an enormous meal, all paid for by Aaron. As she watched the scene, Ruru commented that the man looked incredibly suspicious. Aaron, however, replied that he did not seem like a bad person. Even so, he could not forget that the seer had asked about his age years ago, nor could he forget the contents of that note. Those memories still troubled both his mind and heart. If the man truly was a seer, perhaps he knew something about the dream that continued to haunt him. After finishing the meal, the orc seer remarked that he finally felt alive again. Ruru asked if he had no shame at all. After all, he had just received a free meal and still looked like nothing more than a strange fortune teller who had read Aaron's fortune 5 years earlier. Unbothered by the criticism, the orc said he had a small gift for the little kitty and handed her a small wooden ball. The scent was so pleasant that it immediately caught Ruru's attention. The seer explained that the wood contained ground taiho powder, a rare plant that grew only in the northwestern region. According to him, cats simply went crazy over its scent. Ruru's attitude changed instantly, and she commented that perhaps he was actually a good person. The orc burst into laughter and said that he had finally managed to appear more friendly in the eyes of the little sorceress. He then added that he intended to pay for the meal. Aaron asked how he planned to do that, considering he looked completely broke. The orc seer replied that he was an orc shaman. Compared to human shamans, he possessed far greater power, and a simple fortune reading would be more than enough to repay the cost of the food. Aaron agreed, and the orc began his reading. First, he asked whether there was a persimmon tree near Aaron's house. Aaron replied that there was not. The seer insisted that there had been one when Aaron was a child, and suggested that he might have forgotten. But Aaron continued to insist that no such tree had ever existed. The orc then declared that when Aaron returned home, he would find one. Ruru immediately said that it sounded like a complete lie, and asked him to read her fortune as well. The seer replied that it was easy. He said that she liked raw salmon. Ruru shot back that every cat liked raw salmon. The orc responded that he was not talking about cats in general, but about her specifically. Even so, Ruru remained convinced that he was a complete fraud, and stated that it was no surprise he could not even afford his own meals. The orc orc seer sighed and remarked that, at this rate, they really would end up believing he was nothing more than a charlatan. It was then that he decided to use his true power. His gaze changed, and he began to see beyond what ordinary eyes could perceive. As he looked at Aaron, he said that the weight in his heart was much greater than before. Something that had remained hidden in the past had now revealed itself completely. According to him, there was a massive iron stake lodged in Aaron's chest, heavy and unyielding. It was no wonder he had been going through so many hardships. However, that stake had not appeared on its own. Someone completely unrelated to him had placed it there. The orc explained that he was not using shamanism at that moment, but spiritomancy. Although he was not an absolute master of that art, he possessed enough skill to recognize something like the energy of metal. He explained that spiritomancers believed all forms of life were composed of 5 fundamental energies: earth, metal, water, wood, and fire. True harmony could only be achieved when those 5 energies remained in balance. Upon hearing that, Aaron asked whether his metal energy showed any abnormalities. The seer replied that it did. The iron stake he had mentioned was disrupting the balance of energy within him. When Aaron asked how he could get rid of it, the orc answered that it was not possible to simply remove the stake. Instead, he needed to achieve harmony. The problem was that his metal energy was far too strong. Because of that, he would need to use an incompatible energy to balance it. The orc then placed a solid piece of metal on the table and snapped his fingers. Moments later, flames engulfed the metal. He explained that fire was naturally opposed to metal. If Aaron's fire energy could balance that excessive metal energy, there was a chance of turning the problem into a great opportunity. The stake was a nuisance now, but if it were refined through fire, it could become the extraordinary sword he wished to possess. Interested, Aaron asked how he could control his fire energy. The seer replied that he needed to nurture the ember that existed within his heart. He also mentioned that this ember had not existed 5 years ago. Now it was there, small but alive. According to him, increasing the fire was like feeding a campfire with more wood. The harder Aaron worked toward his goals, and the more he moved toward what he desired, the stronger that flame would grow. Upon hearing those words, Aaron understood that if he wanted to strengthen that ember, he needed to act rather than remain still. Later, he bid farewell to the orc seer and thanked him for his advice. But before he left, the orc made an unexpected proposal. He asked whether there would be any problem with accompanying him on his journey. From what he could see, Aaron was about to embark on a long journey for the first time. Since it had been 10 years since the last time he himself had traveled across the continent, he believed he could be useful as a guide, as long as he was paid for his services. Aaron considered the proposal for a few moments and replied that it sounded like a good idea. To his surprise, even Ruru liked the suggestion. The orc responded that it was incredible. He could finally have a stable source of income. However, he made a point of saying that he was not traveling with Aaron just for the money, right? Hearing that, he was met with deadly glares from the others. He quickly explained that he also understood how rare the opportunity was to witness the growth of a promising young man. If he could be part of that journey, he would feel that his life had been worthwhile. Ruru, however, commented that if he did not do his job properly, he would not receive any payment. Ignoring the jab, the orc explained that the next city they would pass through was Denriku, a city where dozens of blacksmiths worked together, beginning with the dwarves. He was certain that place could help Aaron with his problems, especially if he visited it before continuing on to the 5 kingdoms of the west. Ruru said that Aaron did not need a new sword, but the orc explained that it was not merely about acquiring quality equipment. There was a deeper meaning in meeting those who had mastered the domains of fire and iron. According to him, watching the suffocating heat of the forges melt enormous blocks of metal and then seeing them transformed into swords could help Aaron learn to control the embers he carried within his own heart. Ruru commented that mystics did something similar. It was easier to desire something when you had a real image to associate with your goal. Perhaps they could use the process of forging a sword as part of Aaron's psychological training. The orc admitted that the idea was not a bad one. After listening to both of them, Aaron decided to follow his master's advice. Thus, the group set out for Denriku. The guide found a shortcut that would allow them to reach the city more quickly. Later, already in Denriku, he was busy haggling. He asked the merchant to lower the price just a little more, claiming that he knew the rates charged by the neighboring inn. Before the innkeeper could even respond, the orc said they would return after dropping off their luggage, as he knew an excellent restaurant in the area. Later, at the restaurant, the group ordered a large amount of food. After much conversation, the orc even managed to negotiate a free beer. Watching all this, Aaron thought that the man was a true master of bargaining. That night, at the inn, Ruru asked Kuvar to tell an interesting story. The orc then asked Aaron if he knew who the 10 strongest people on the continent were. Aaron replied that he only knew Ian, and had also heard of someone named Joshua Lindsay. Kuvar was surprised. He said that Aaron was far less interested in the world than he had imagined. He could hardly believe that someone who called himself a swordsman knew so little about the continent's greatest figures. He then began explaining that most of the strongest individuals belonged to the 5 Western Kingdoms and the Holy Kingdom. The only person to break that tradition was the Academy director, Ian. According to him, among the greatest were Ian, the captain of the Holy Kingdom's White Knights, Julius Hewley, the captain of the Crimson Knights, Rigoberto Clark, the lords of the 5 swordmaster families, Joshua Lindsay, and the orc's great warrior Karakum. All of them were known as the strongest on the continent. However, there were probably 11 now, since Ignat had also reached that level. Upon hearing that name, Aaron remembered who she was. At that moment, Ruru commented that one person was missing from the list. Kovar agreed. He said that perhaps it was because of Ian's astonishing growth, since many people considered him the strongest swordsman on the continent. However, he personally disagreed with that opinion. In Kuvar's view, Kun was even stronger. He explained that the man had only become a swordmaster at the age of 70. Ruru commented that Kun must have been an incredibly persistent person. After all, most people had ridiculed and criticized his decision. No one in their right mind would spend their entire life trying to become a swordmaster until the age of 70. It must have been an extremely difficult journey. Even so, Kuvar explained that Kun succeeded. He never gave up and achieved the title of swordmaster at 70. Now at 90 years old, he was considered by many to be the strongest man on the continent. His story had inspired not only swordsmen, but people from all walks of life. Aaron remarked that he truly sounded like an incredible person. He said he was certain that Kun had already been admirable when he was 50, even while being ridiculed by others at the time. In his view, there were many people like that throughout the world. People who continued to persevere without receiving recognition. People who had not yet bloomed, but who would one day prove their worth. He was certain they existed. Kuvar was pleased to hear those words. He agreed that there must be countless remarkable people out there, all on the verge of reaping the rewards of their efforts. At that moment, he thought that Aaron was quite an interesting young man. Despite being a swordsman, his thoughts were not limited solely to the sword. He viewed the world from a much broader perspective. He truly was a fascinating young man. The following morning, the group was already near the Alhad mountain range. Cover explained that they would reach Denriku as soon as they crossed those mountains. However, they would not be able to pass through them directly because of the numerous bandits operating in the region. Even so, he told everyone not to worry. They could continue their journey alongside a merchant caravan. In addition, Aaron possessed a mercenary badge, which would be a great help. When they arrived at the trade post, one of the employees was impressed to see that he carried a silver badge from Alcantara. Kuvar was also accepted without difficulty. After all, he was an orc shaman, something considered a symbol of good fortune. Any merchant group would be happy to have him with them. Suddenly, they heard the voice of a child offering her services. The girl asked people to leave their shoes, armor, or any other equipment with her. In exchange for a few coins, she would clean everything quickly. She proudly repeated that Anya did everything fast. Meanwhile, Tarhal spotted Ruru and immediately commented that she was a very cute talking cat. Without missing a beat, Ruru replied that she certainly was, and that she also considered herself very cute. The little girl then introduced herself as Anya. She explained that they could leave their shoes, armor, or anything else with her because Anya always found a way to get everything fixed up. He replied that he was fine. The girl then said goodbye, telling him that everything was alright, and that if he needed anything, he could just let her know. As soon as she left, both Aaron and Ruru immediately realized that the girl was a mystic. As they continued their journey, Ruru pointed out to Kuvar that Aaron was thinking too much. All anyone had to do was look at his face to notice it. Aaron then decided to ask a question that had been bothering him for quite some time. He wanted to know whether he would be capable of using his sword against another person. He had never killed anyone before, but that day he felt that, sooner or later, a moment would come when he would have to raise his sword against another human being. He explained that he could imagine fighting weak people such as bandits, but he could not ignore the weight of taking a life. He did not know whether he should simply intimidate them. On the other hand, if he allowed them to live and they continued committing crimes against others, he could not consider that decision the right one either. Kuvar replied that it was indeed a profound subject, but said that Aaron did not need to worry about it right now. The conversation then shifted when Aaron mentioned that he had heard about a notorious bandit leader named Kazir who operated in that region. To his surprise, Kuvar replied that Kazir only wanted to live in peace. He and his group had been living in those mountains for 5 years. They allowed caravans to pass as long as they received a toll. According to the orc, merchants did not hire escorts to defeat the bandits, but rather to intimidate them and maintain a balance between both sides. He explained that the merchants themselves probably did not view the situation as all that terrible. Many saw the toll as nothing more than an additional travel fee. Confused, Aaron asked whether that meant criminals were taking money from merchants for no reason, and that the territories and kingdoms simply allowed it to happen. One of the escort warriors answered that they did. He explained that the profits generated by the outskirts were no joke, and that many interests became intertwined. The situation was far more complicated than it appeared at first glance. Kuvar then concluded that the world was like that. Good and evil, right and wrong, could not always be separated so easily. A short while later, the group finally encountered the bandits. The caravan leader was already prepared to hand over the passage fee, but Kazir's men surprised everyone by demanding that they leave all their cargo behind and return the way they had come. Hearing that, Ruru looked at Kuvar and asked what exactly he had said about those bandits. The merchant tried to reason with them. He asked Kazir what this meant, reminding him that they were willing to pay the toll as usual. However, Kazir coldly replied that if they did not want to die, they should leave. Unable to understand the sudden change in behavior, the merchant asked why he was acting that way. Kazir merely replied that this was how things would work from now on, and asked whether there was a problem with that. At that moment, Aaron sensed something strange. A demonic energy was clearly emanating from Kazir. Ruru noticed his reaction and asked whether it was similar to what had happened during the subjugation, as if something had suddenly changed. Aaron answered that it was. He said he could control himself because the energy was weak, but it was definitely there. Not understanding the conversation, Kuvar asked what they were talking about. Aaron then explained that it was related to the iron stake. Whenever he approached demonic energy, his emotions began to explode. An intense rage welled up inside him almost uncontrollably. He had not transformed into a demonoid, so he believed it was something different. While they were talking, one of the escort knights stepped forward. His name was Wolfgang, and he declared that they could not trust a bandit. Drawing his frost sword, he approached Kazir and stated that everything would be fine as long as no one caused trouble. He continued walking forward and said that he was certain both sides would suffer losses if they fought there. Therefore, it was best to end the matter peacefully. But Kazir merely looked at the sword and commented that it was a beautiful weapon. Then he said that he would allow Wolfgang to pass if he handed the sword over. The response irritated the knight. Wolfgang declared that a bandit should not even think about negotiating with him and that he needed to know his place. Kazir's answer came immediately afterward. Short, direct, and extremely convincing. A real hammer blow. Literally, the strike hit Wolfgang head on, sending him flying into a nearby tree. The impact was so powerful that everyone was shocked. The merchants panicked. The escort warriors showed no desire whatsoever to face Kazir. Noticing this, the bandit declared that he had changed his mind. Now he was angry and intended to kill everyone present. That was when Aaron finally realized something important and came up with a plan. He calmly walked up to Kazir and said that he knew he was not conscious of his actions at the moment. Then he introduced himself as Aaron Ferreira, the official disciple of the 27th generation of the Kronos Swordsmanship Academy. The people around them were surprised. Some even commented that this was the famous Golden Generation. Kazir, however, mocked him. He asked if he looked like an idiot. After all, what kind of official student of the Kronos Academy wandered around without even carrying a sword? The next instant, he swung his hammer. The attack was stopped by one of Aaron's hands alone. Without showing any effort, Aaron asked where Kazir had gotten that necklace. The difference in strength was so overwhelming that the bandit fell to his knees under the pressure. As he tried to answer, demonic energy began leaking from the necklace hanging around his neck. At that moment, Aaron thought that a strong person should act like a strong person. He then materialized his sword through mystic arts. The moment the weapon appeared, an overwhelming pressure spread throughout the area, causing the ground beneath Kazir's feet to crack. The bandit collapsed in terror. His body trembled so violently that he could not even stand. He even begged for mercy. But Aaron simply approached him, removed the necklace from his neck, and confirmed what he had already suspected. That object was the source of the demonic energy. Because of it, Kazir had been acting strangely. Holding the necklace in his hands, Aaron looked at the bandit once more and asked where he had obtained it. Kazir replied that he could not remember anything. It was as if he had been in a trance. He remembered walking around while wearing the necklace, but he had no idea when all of it had started. The merchant said that made no sense at all, but Aaron believed him. In exchange, he would keep the necklace, and everyone could continue their journey safely. Kazir agreed immediately and apologized to the merchants, admitting that he had truly done something unforgivable. Later, the leader of the merchants personally thanked Aaron, saying that everyone was still alive because of him. He also promised that they would treat him as well as possible during the journey, and that he and his companions could ask for anything they needed. After they set off, Ruru remarked that they should not have let those bandits go. However, Aaron replied that they had not been like that in the beginning, and that he believed they would not cause any more trouble now that the necklace had been taken away. Ruru grumbled that they had better not cause any trouble, because next time she would break their legs. A little later, Aaron decided to resume his swordsmanship training. Kuvar commented that he had looked incredibly strong during the previous fight, and that, if he had not been powerful enough to defeat Kazir, many people would have ended up in danger. Aaron replied that he wanted even more options for dealing with situations like that, improving both his personal growth and his swordsmanship. While they trained, he asked Kuvar if it was true that many famous swordsmen gathered in the artisan city of Denriku. Kuvar confirmed it, explaining that duels were frequently held there, with swords forged by the city's finest craftsmen at stake. In his opinion, it would greatly broaden the boy's perspective. The news excited Aaron. He took a deep breath, and the orc noticed that the flame inside him seemed to be growing stronger and stronger. His heart was burning with determination. Suddenly, Aaron drew his sword, threw the necklace onto the ground, and said that they should destroy the evil artifact once and for all. But Kuvar told him to wait. According to him, it was not a good idea to destroy objects like that carelessly. He placed the necklace inside a special pouch, explaining that it could block demonic power and that they would dispose of it properly later. At that moment, Anya appeared, full of excitement, saying that it was amazing. Then she asked whether Aaron would like to trade that cool sword for one of her treasures, because she wanted to give her captain a weapon like that. Aaron immediately refused, explaining that he could not trade the sword and that, besides, only he could use it. Anya, however, replied that she could use it too, and decided to show off her treasure. Using mystic arts, she summoned a gigantic golden piggy bank-shaped vault. The moment it appeared, Aaron sensed an absurdly powerful mystical energy coming from it. Both startled and curious, Ruru asked what the hell that thing was, and how Anya had managed to create something like it. The girl proudly replied that she had made it using the money she had earned, and a whole year of hard work. Then she insisted on the trade once again. Even so, Aaron refused. Anya then said that she could still make the treasure even bigger. She placed a single gold coin into the piggy bank, and to everyone's surprise, it actually grew larger. When Ruru saw that, she immediately started urging Aaron to accept the trade. Kuvar joined in as well, saying that he would probably probably never be able to get that much money anywhere else. Despite the pressure from both of them, Aaron stood by his decision and told them to stop. Even so, he apologized to Anya for refusing. The girl did not seem offended at all. On the contrary, she replied that she would come back after some time and try again. She was certain that her treasure would become even more impressive during the journey to Denriku. After she left, Kuvar commented that she was an interesting girl. Ruru immediately agreed. Aaron, however, was simply worried. Later, at a tavern along the road, Kuvar called Aaron over to meet a man he had found at the bar. According to him, the fellow possessed important information about Denriku. The man explained that the city's greatest blacksmith had finally returned from his journey. His name was Vulcanus, a dwarf whose swords were so extraordinary that nearly every swordsman on the continent dreamed of owning one. He went on to explain that Vulcanus would number the swords he considered his finest creations. These weapons were known as numerical swords. Out of the 100 swords he had forged throughout his life, only 9 had been granted that title. What was even more remarkable was that there were only 2 kinds of people capable of wielding a numerical sword: sword masters, or those destined to become sword masters. Over the last 10 years, only 3 ordinary swordsmen had managed to use one of these weapons, and all 3 eventually reached the level of a true master. The man then revealed the main reason behind all the excitement. According to the rumors, a competition would be held in Denriku 2 days later to determine the bearer of the 10th numerical sword. The news immediately caught the attention of everyone around. Even Wolfgang, still covered in injuries, showed interest. The informant explained that he did not know many details, and that the full information would probably only be revealed on the day of the tournament. Upon hearing that, Aaron remarked that many powerful swordsmen would be gathering in Denriku. Besides the opportunity to see the numerical swords, it would also be an excellent experience for his growth, so he intended to participate as well. Wolfgang replied that, in that case, he would have no chance of winning. After all, he could never defeat Aaron. The young man simply responded that he was going to his room to rest because he was feeling tired and somewhat stressed. Kuvar agreed, but he sensed that something was off. Any swordsman would have been extremely excited by a story like that. Yet Aaron showed almost no interest. Perhaps it was simply part of his personality, but even so, he seemed different from every swordsman Kuvar had ever met. Alone in his room, Aaron thought about the truth he was hiding. Once again, he had been controlled. Fortunately, everything had ended well, but he was certain that similar situations would happen again in the future. It had been quite some time since the last occasion, but he sat down on the bed and began his mental training. Using the same method he had learned in the mythical world, he visualized the enormous wall of solid metal before him, attempting to refine it with the fire burning inside him. Sometime later, the group finally arrived at the city of artisans, Denriku. The place was filled with warriors, blacksmiths, and swordsmen from every corner of the continent. As soon as they arrived, Anya ran off to meet someone she knew. The man called her Pincher, and Ruru immediately realized that he was a sword master. Kuvar, on the other hand, had failed to notice and was surprised, wondering whether there was still a master on the continent he had never heard of. The man introduced himself as George, and said that Anya had spoken about them quite a lot. He remarked that they all seemed just as peculiar as she was, though he clarified that he did not mean that in a negative way. In fact, he had simply sensed something special from the group. George then asked Aaron if he would mind showing him his sword. After all, Anya could not stop talking about how extraordinary the weapon was. When Aaron summoned the sword through his mystical art, George realized that it was not only the weapon that stood out. The swordsman used a special ability to examine him, causing Aaron to feel something strange. Shortly afterward, George apologized for staring at him for so long. He commented that it truly was a magnificent sword, and that he completely understood why Anya wanted it so badly. The girl immediately replied that her captain would love to have it. George agreed, but took the opportunity to scold her with a smile, saying that trying to steal other people's belongings was very wrong. Anya quickly responded that she was not trying to steal anything. She simply wanted to trade the sword for the golden piggy bank she had built after saving money for an entire year. However, George said that the sword was probably worth far more than that. Because of this, he asked her not to bother those people anymore, and also apologized for the girl's behavior. After they parted ways, Aaron commented to Kuvar that the man was incredibly strong. The two of them were also curious to find out who this Captain Anya kept talking about was. Meanwhile, several people nearby were impressed to see that certain participants had actually shown up. Among them were the twin knights Charlot and Victor. Kuvar explained that they were a very famous duo, and that rumors claimed they could even challenge a sword master when fighting together. That alone made it clear that the competition would be far from easy, and that Aaron should be careful. Even so, Aaron replied that he was certain George would be participating as well. To him, this was a great opportunity to learn and grow, so he intended to do his very best. Upon hearing that, Kuvar decided to give him some advice. He said Aaron could ignore him if he wanted, but he believed it was important. In his opinion, a swordsman truly needed to face strong opponents in order to grow, but he should not enter a fight thinking only about learning from his opponent. As an example, he brought up Kun and Ian. When Kun challenged Ian, he had not entered that battle thinking about learning anything. Most likely, he had entered wanting to win. He wanted victory at any cost, and it was precisely that fighting spirit that had allowed him to reach the same level as Ian. That was why, in Kuvar's view, a true swordsman should always fight with the intention of winning. After finishing his speech, Kuvar apologized, saying that he might have gone a little too far. However, Aaron replied that it was fine, fine. In fact, he should be thanking him. He finally understood what had been missing from his path. Afterward, he returned to the inn, saying that he wanted to reflect more deeply on that advice. Alone in his room, he meditated while thinking about the idea of fighting to win. Until then, he had never seriously reflected on it. When he trained at the academy, all he had wanted was to become like the man he admired. On the other hand, his friends had always raised their swords with the desire to surpass their opponents. It was a pure desire, fueled by a strong fighting spirit. Perhaps that was exactly the feeling a swordsman was supposed to possess. Now he understood why Kuvar had given him that advice. Perhaps he had never experienced such a feeling before. The following morning, Kuvar commented to Ruru that he had probably said something he should not have. He had become too excited seeing a young man grow so quickly, and had ended up being a little greedy. Perhaps he should have given more thought to the way Ian guided his disciples. But Ruru replied that there was no problem at all. At that moment, Aaron came downstairs. She immediately noticed that something had changed about him. She said that he looked much better now. Indeed, Kuvar also noticed that the flame within the boy seemed far greater than before. Ruru then remarked that all that worrying had been unnecessary. Shortly afterward, the group headed toward Denriku Arena. The place was packed with renowned warriors, all prepared to compete in the opening match. Among them were Grosh, known as the Double Sword, and Randell, called the Single Strike. As he observed the participants, Kuvar noticed several exceptionally strong contenders. With so many powerful competitors, even Charlot and Victor were far from guaranteed victory. Soon afterward, everyone's attention shifted to Vulcanus, who had finally appeared. Using a megaphone, the legendary blacksmith said that everyone there probably already knew who he was, so he would get straight to the point. As they all knew, the prize for the competition would be the sword he was currently creating, known as the 10th numerical sword. He then explained the rules. 2 participants would enter the arena and fight. When the battle ended, the winner would remain on the field while the loser would be eliminated. If the winner chose not to continue, 2 new participants would enter to fight the next match. According to Vulcanus, however, the goal of the competition was not to find a champion. Its true purpose was to discover a spark of inspiration that would help him complete the 10th numerical sword. Therefore, the tournament would continue until he found the person he was looking for. The 2 blacksmiths standing behind him were there for the exact same reason. After hearing the explanation, Kuvar commented that it was interesting. Vulcanus had not gathered all those swordsmen simply to hand over a completed numerical sword. In reality, he was using the competition to find the inspiration he needed to finish forging it. Shortly afterward, Vulcanus declared the competition open and invited the participants to enter the arena. The first to step forward were Victor and Randell, 2 of the favorites to claim the title. Before the match began, Randell remarked that he hated hypocrites more than anything else. Looking at Victor's smile, he claimed he could easily imagine the kind of thoughts running through that boy's head. Victor, in turn, merely replied that the veteran seemed to carry a great deal of anger within him. Meanwhile, Kuvar explained to the others that Charlot and Victor were highly respected mercenaries. They regularly took on demonoid nests for modest rewards, protected merchants in danger, and had accumulated countless heroic stories. But as their fame grew, so did the envy surrounding them. Just before the fight began, Randell asked Vulcanus a question. He wanted to know whether killing an opponent was permitted. The blacksmith replied that he did not mind, since it sounded entertaining. The only condition was that the opponent agreed. Victor immediately answered that he had no problem with it. As long as he could overcome Lord Randell, any condition was acceptable. Satisfied, Vulcanus declared that the 2 appeared ready and announced that the fight would begin at his signal. As soon as the match began, Randell unleashed his famous signature strike, trying to end everything with a single attack. However, when the intense beam of light disappeared, everyone was shocked. Randell's sword had been broken in half. Victor let out a sigh of relief and remarked that the attack had been truly fast. It had come dangerously close to piercing a hole through his chest. Around the arena, many people wondered what had just happened. In the blink of an eye, Victor had shattered Randell's sword. George commented that the guy was very strong enough to stand out even among experts. In his opinion, he might even rank among the top 200 on the entire continent. In any case, he asked Anya if she was certain they were the ones. She replied that the golden lines had turned red and confirmed that they were indeed the people they had been searching for. George then asked her to place a mark on them as well. Anya took out her piggy banks and complained that she did not want to spend the equivalent of 2 days' worth of savings, but she broke them anyway and guided golden lines into the minds of the 2 twins, marking them both. Shortly afterward, Ruru was marked as well. No one seemed to notice that anything had happened. Seeing this, Kuvar commented that he knew coming there had been a good idea. George replied that their target was the boy, not the cat, but Anya shot back that they traveled together, so it made no difference. He then asked whether 1 piggy bank should not be worth 2 marks. She explained that it was more difficult to mark other mystics. George accepted the answer and found himself wondering how a spoiled child like her had become a mystic. No matter how many times he watched, her abilities remained impressive. According to Anya, her power worked through a mystical piggy bank capable of granting any wish, provided the cost of the wish did not exceed the amount stored inside it. Later, Victor won another match, reaching 17 consecutive victories. Charlot asked whether there really was no one capable of defeating him other than himself. Victor replied that there probably was not. The 2 then wondered whether they had shown Vulcanus anything truly impressive yet, but the dwarf did not seem particularly excited by any of the competitors. At that moment, Aaron stood up and began began walking toward the arena. Kuvar wished him good luck and told him to do his best. When a new challenger appeared before the twins, Charlotte remarked that he would fight after him. Victor agreed, but as he watched Aaron approach, he immediately realized that he was strong. Aaron asked whether Charlotte could wait a little, but he replied that it was not a problem. When they commented about the sword, Aaron answered that he had it ready. As he stepped into the arena, he thought about how he carried more than just a sword. He carried the desire to win. He remembered the day of the midterm evaluation, when he saw Ilya running ahead of him. The feeling he had at that moment was the same flame of determination he had always seen in his friends. Remembering that made his fighting spirit burn even brighter. Charlotte noticed that he wore a different expression now, one filled with confidence. As for Aaron, he decided that he would fight to win, like a true swordsman. Even Volcanus rose to his feet when he noticed the boy. There was a blazing, radiant flame within him that caught the dwarf's attention. Then, before any fight could even begin, the blacksmith made a decision. He walked up to Aaron, raised his arm before everyone present, and announced that the owner of the 10th numbered sword would be that young man. The twins could not understand what was happening. The people around them immediately began complaining, saying it made no sense since he had not even fought yet. Volcanus grabbed his megaphone and ordered everyone to be quiet. He then explained that the competition had never been intended to determine a winner. Its true purpose had been to find a swordsman capable of igniting a spark of inspiration. According to him, the other blacksmiths had chosen that young man as well. Without allowing any further discussion, Volcanus declared the competition over and told Aaron to follow him. The twins commented that they had always known he was different, but they had never expected anything on that level. Aaron simply thanked them. In the audience, Randell was quite pleased to see the outcome. Later, Aaron demonstrated his sword techniques to Volcanus. When the blacksmiths examined his sword, they were astonished. The material was unlike anything ordinary. The weapon had been created through mystical arts and possessed unbelievable durability. Volcanus observed that not even his hammer could leave a mark on it, which made him curious about the existing marks on the blade. He wanted to understand how those marks had been made. Meanwhile, Kuvar commented that he could not believe the swordsman had to remain present throughout the entire sword forging process. It was an extremely unusual method of production. Aaron himself had not known that he would need to demonstrate his spirit as a swordsman. He then asked whether he had been chosen because they had sensed the presence of that man's energy within him. Kuvar replied that it might have influenced their decision, but told him not to worry about it. He explained that he was already working on a solution to that situation, and was certain that one day Aaron's flame would become strong enough to melt that iron stake. Noticing that he seemed a little discouraged, Kuvar changed his tone and said that, on second thought, such an attitude was unacceptable. After all, it made no sense to be sad after being chosen because of a sword he did not even need. According to Kuvar, they needed something far greater than that. Sometime later, Kuvar began negotiating with Volcanus. The blacksmith asked whether he really wanted to receive the sword for free. Kuvar replied that it was not just that. He also wanted Volcanus to produce Aaron's full equipment set, forge a sword for Ruru, and allow them to observe the entire forging process. Volcanus asked why he should accept such outrageous demands. Kuvar then decided to be straightforward and explained that he was trying to use Aaron as a source of inspiration because his skills as a blacksmith had reached a point of stagnation. Volcanus was left speechless. The other blacksmiths were as well, because Kuvar had hit the mark perfectly. He knew that Pablo and Dwanson had not produced anything for quite some time. The two had been wandering around in search of inspiration to return to work, and deep down they were simply trying to take advantage of the opportunity to use a man who had reignited that inspiration within them. Annoyed, Volcanus asked who he thought he was to interfere in that matter. After all, the person most involved in the situation was not complaining at all. Kovar replied that he was merely a first-class guide, nothing more than that. Sometime later, Aaron and Ruru did indeed receive new equipment. Throughout the forging process, Aaron remained beside the blacksmiths, observing every detail with sharp eyes. As he watched them work, he created images in his own mind. He imagined that enormous metal stake being transformed by a hammer. He wanted to break it, melt it, and forge it anew. In his imagination, he used the flames of his own heart to forge that stake. A month later, Aaron commented to Kuvar and Ruru that his mental training had not improved as much as he had hoped. Even so, he felt that he was progressing little by little and continued pushing himself harder and harder. Thinking about it, he also realized that he had not encountered any swordsmen lately. Kuvar explained that most of them had come because of the numbered sword. Since that objective had already been achieved, many had lost their reason for staying in the region. Aaron replied that it was a shame because he genuinely wanted to fight some of them. In response, Ruru reminded him that he had obtained a numbered sword. Kuvar agreed and told him not to be disappointed. Soon enough, he would have a complete sword in his hands. However, when they arrived at the agreed location, Volcanus revealed that he felt deeply sorry. He admitted that he had still not managed to finish the numbered sword. He said he would need another year, but promised that he would create the finest sword of his entire life, a masterpiece far superior even to the great sword he had forged before. Aaron replied that it was not a problem and that he would wait as long as necessary. Hearing that, Kuvar complained that he was making things far too easy. In his opinion, he should at least demand some kind of signed contract. Even so, Aaron insisted that it was fine. They had not come there for the sword in the first place. Before leaving, Ruru warned the blacksmiths that she was trusting them. After that, the group continued their journey to the city of Lathion, the place with the highest concentration of fencing academies. Along the way, Ruru caught caught a strong scent of blood. Shortly afterward, they spotted two hooded figures covered in red stains. It was Charlot and Victor. The two had just dealt with a certain individual, and in front of them they tossed a severed head onto the ground. It was Randel's head. Shocked, Kuvar asked what the hell they had done. The twins casually replied that they had merely eliminated a bandit. They explained that many people had been after Aaron, and that they had worked hard to get rid of all of them. Now they wanted to be rewarded for their efforts. Then they demanded the numbered sword. Ruru replied that the sword was not even finished yet. Victor, however, claimed that they were probably hiding it with mystical arts. Kuvar asked whether they were really willing to ruin their own lives over a sword. They would not become criminals only in Denriku, but across the entire continent. Charlot thanked him for his concern, but replied that no one would suspect them. The two enjoyed an excellent reputation. They could easily invent a story claiming that a young knight had been attacked by bandits seeking his sword. By pure coincidence, Victor and Charlot would happen to be passing through the area and would try to help him, only to arrive too late to save him. Even in that situation, Aaron decided to ask a question. During his stay in Denriku, he had heard countless stories about the two brothers. They were knights admired by many swordsmen because of their extraordinary achievements and years of service. Because of that, he wanted to understand why they were doing this. He said that without a proper answer, they would never obtain the sword, even if they killed him. Victor replied that the numbered sword was more important than anything else. Aaron countered that it was still just a sword. He could not believe that something like that was more important than their own future. Victor then explained that a numbered sword was not an ordinary sword. It had been 30 years since they had reached the expert level, and 20 years since they had hit their limit. For decades, they had done everything they could to surpass the barrier that separated an expert from a master. They had devoted their entire lives to that goal, yet they had never managed to move forward. According to him, they were not the only ones. Countless swordsmen suffered in the same way, unable to overcome that final obstacle. People who had dedicated decades of their lives to the pursuit, carrying an enormous burden on their shoulders and enduring a pain that few could truly understand. As Aaron listened to those words, he drew his sword. A tremendous amount of demonic energy began pouring from the twins. They appeared to be completely consumed by that dark influence. In response, Aaron summoned the power of the man from the dreams, releasing that brilliant energy that was especially effective against demons. But before the confrontation could begin, George and Anya appeared. Without wasting any time, Anya used the power of her piggy banks to open a gigantic portal. From the depths of that portal, a new figure emerged. It was Ignat, captain of the Black Knights of the Holy Empire. Aaron recognized the woman from Ilya's story. She looked at Charlot and Victor and remarked that, judging by their appearance, they seemed to have gone too far. Charlot asked why Countess Ignat had come to a place like this. She replied that there was no longer any hope for the two of them, but she would still give them one chance to say whatever they wished. The twins asked whether she intended to stand in their way. Ignat replied that this was their final opportunity to speak. Then her power descended upon everyone in the area. The demonic power within the twins reacted immediately and pushed back against that pressure, but Ignat merely said that their answer was disappointing. In the blink of an eye, she declared that she would grant them a pathetic death, and she was already standing beside them. She effortlessly blocked Victor's strike, kicked him away, and then finished him with a punch that drove him into the canyon wall. His head exploded from the impact. Charlotte was consumed by a beast-like fury, but within a single second, Ignat severed both of his hands. She remarked that it was truly unfortunate, because he no longer even looked human. A moment later, she crushed his head with another kick. Kuvar thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Even though she was a swordmaster, Ignat had killed both of them using nothing but her bare hands. At that moment, Anya approached while carrying the captain's sword, and promised that she would clean it, along with her shoes. Ignat then asked George what he thought of that old-fashioned way of speaking, and whether he believed she could blend in with the other nobles of the Holy Kingdom. George replied that she had become quite good at it. But Aaron asked how she had managed to do that so effortlessly. He said he was not trying to insult her. He was simply curious. He wanted to know how someone could possess enough conviction to kill another person without showing even the slightest hesitation. To him, murder was not something a human being should wish to do. He admitted that it was something he himself could not do. Ignat then approached Aaron Ferreira, making it clear that she knew exactly who he was. She declared that, from that day onward, she was summoning him as a member of the Black Knights, an order directly subordinate to the Holy Kingdom of Arvilius. Kuvar was shocked, both because Ignat knew Aaron and because she was trying to recruit him. However, without hesitation, Aaron refused. Ignat asked what displeased him. She said that the Holy Kingdom was far better than he imagined. She tried to list its virtues, but admitted that she had never been particularly good with words. Even so, Aaron apologized and replied that no matter how hard she tried to persuade him, he would not join her order. Ignat stared at him. It was not only Aaron who felt that overwhelming pressure, but everyone present. She was clearly irritated, yet she sighed and said that she accepted his answer. She then explained that she had heard about a man with a piece of iron in his heart. Not just an ordinary piece of iron, but steel so refined that even the arrogant Vulcanus had been impressed by it. She said it was impossible not to desire someone like that in her organization. However, after seeing him in person, she concluded that he had not yet become the master of that steel within himself. Once again, she declared that she was appointing him as a member of the Black Knights. It was not an invitation. It was an order. Aaron refused once more. Then Ignat said that he had no choice. She asked whether he intended to bring chaos to the continent by continuing to be ruled by a power he could not control. Before he could answer, Ruru stepped in. She said that he had already made it clear that he was not interested, calling Ignat a damned witch. She declared that Eren was growing stronger every day and would certainly overcome it. Ignat seemed pleased to see a talking cat, especially a black one. Ruru, on the other hand, became frightened, hid behind Eren, and told the captain to go back to her own country. Eren then explained that he was doing his very best. Ignat, however, did not believe him. Because of that, he stated that he would prove it. He would show that he was capable of controlling the iron within his heart. She asked exactly how he intended to prove that. Eren replied that he had once faced a knight of the Holy Kingdom named Hill Burnett. His fighting spirit had been as fierce as that of the demonoids. At the time, he had not realized it, but that pressure had stimulated the stake within his heart. If Countess Ignat could release a fighting spirit of that level, he would prove that he would not be dominated by it. Ignat then asked if he was challenging her to a duel. Eren formally replied that he, Eren Ferreira, apprentice of the 27th generation of the Kronos Swordsmanship Academy, was requesting a duel against Captain Ignat of the Holy Kingdom. Everyone fell silent, but Ruru immediately cheered, saying that Eren could do it. Kuvar, meanwhile, pointed out that Ignat had slain countless demonoids throughout her life. It was highly likely that her fighting spirit was as powerful as theirs, perhaps even too powerful for Eren to withstand. Because of that, he wondered whether the boy had any sort of plan. As he gripped his sword, Eren realized that he had been feeling strange since earlier. An unusual anger burned within him. Perhaps it was because of Ignat's past with Ilya. Perhaps not. Even he did not understand the reason. Ignat asked whether he had finished his preparations and warned him that the duel would begin the moment they released their energies. She drew her sword. The instant she released her energy, Eren nearly collapsed. He endured it by using his radiant power. Ignat herself had not known that he was capable of controlling such a power. She was then surprised when she saw him close his eyes. Holding his sword, Eren began to meditate. He needed to use that emotion. He could feel it clearly. All of that anger and nervousness were being transformed into strength to hammer the steel stake lodged within his heart. The flame inside him was being used for that very purpose. At last, he finished hammering the stake and shaped it into the form of a gigantic sword. Yes, he could overcome it. His radiant power burst forth completely. Even Ignat became excited at the sight. Ready for the duel, Eren charged forward. His vertical and horizontal strikes were effortlessly avoided by Ignat, who moved with grace and agility. Even so, he continued attacking with relentless, heavy blows. Kuvar observed that Ignat had not used her sword even once. When Eren advanced with another downward strike, she finally responded. With ease, she countered with a powerful blow of her own. The boy's arms were forced upward, and a sharp pain shot through his body. Even so, he managed to reposition his sword and block the next sequence of attacks. Despite his defense, however, he was thrown backward. Still, he managed to regain his balance, but Ignat was already right beside him. She asked where he was looking, and the next strike was so powerful that it knocked the sword from his hands. Even then, while falling and nearly unconscious, he managed to grab it again and attack with only one hand. Despite that, his strike still carried astonishing power. Ignat remarked that he truly was a stubborn little bastard. Then, instead of using her sword, she drove a punch straight into his stomach. The blow sent Eren crashing to the ground, rolling several meters away before finally coming to a stop. When it was all over, George asked whether she intended to take him away. Ignat replied that he had in fact proven himself. She said that she had made a promise, and that Eren was a truly interesting man. After all, he had tried to defeat her using every ounce of his strength. Eren remained unconscious for quite some time. When he finally woke up, he was already back at the inn. As he opened his eyes, he saw Ruru and Kuvar beside him, but he also found Ignat watching him sleep. That was far too strange. She replied that she was going to take care of a few things now that he was awake. Immediately afterward, she began lifting his shirt. Ruru instantly demanded to know what that perverted witch was doing. Ignat replied that calling her a witch was quite offensive and explained that she was using holy magic to heal the injuries she herself had caused. Thanks to that, he would no longer have any trouble moving around. Taking the opportunity, Eren asked only one question. He wanted to know what the path of her sword was. Ignat replied that it was quite an unusual question. She remarked that he was an apprentice of Kronos, wasn't he? It sounded like something old Ian would say, far more profound than the sort of question a boy his age would normally ask. She then explained that her path of the sword was the path that would one day become the path of a king. Kuvar asked if she was suggesting a rebellion. Ignat told him not to jump to conclusions and said that she would explain everything, but first asked him to hand her that pouch. She then took out the necklace and pointed out that the orc knew very well that they were living in an era of peace. She explained that this was because her kingdom prohibited wars between nations. 150 years ago, 400 years ago, or even further back, archdemons had roamed the continent freely, spreading all kinds of chaos. Whenever wars broke out, the consequences were always disastrous. Even in the present era, however, the world was not truly peaceful. She admitted that she did not know how to save everyone who suffered, nor how to prevent cursed artifacts like that one from continuing to appear throughout the human world. After purifying the necklace with holy magic, she returned it to Kuvar and asked whether it would not be worthwhile to build, with one's own hands, at least one nation filled with freedom in a world like this. She explained that this very thought had been what started everything. She also assured them that there was nothing to worry about, as she intended to achieve her goal through peaceful means alone. Then she looked at Ruru and said that there was nothing wrong with enjoying enjoying the happiness she had now, but that she needed to work a little harder to protect the people she loved. Finally, she turned her attention to Aaron Ferreira and asked whom he trusted. She explained that she trusted herself and possessed her own convictions. It was precisely because of those convictions that she could walk her path without the slightest shadow of doubt. Before leaving, she said that she would make the same offer when they met again, not because of the stake in his heart, but because of Aaron himself. Moments later, she leaped through the window and vanished into the darkness of the night. Once they were alone again, Aaron commented to his companions that Ignet had killed Victor and Charlot. At that moment, he felt that what she had done was right. The conviction behind each of her actions made it seem completely natural. On the other hand, he had hesitated. He was angry at Ignet for acting as though such things were ordinary, but he was also angry at himself for being unable to do the same. Deep down, he realized that he envied her. Later, Kovar drove the carriage while Aaron and Ruru traveled alongside him. During the journey, Aaron remained immersed in his mental training. Within his mind, he continued forging that gigantic sword, hammering the steel stake with the embers of his own heart. He had not noticed any major changes since the last time. His fire seemed weaker now, as though the flame was slowly burning out. Even so, he continued hammering without stopping. Sometime later, Kovar announced that it was already time for dinner. Only then did Aaron realize how much time he had spent training mentally. Kovar asked whether he had made any progress. Aaron replied that there was nothing visible yet, but that it was fine. Ruru was completely passed out as well. Watching the little cat, Aaron commented that she simply would not wake up. Kovar asked whether all mystics trained like that. Aaron replied that it depended on the individual, but that this approach worked best for Ruru. After all, she was a little cat. The orc realized that Ignet's words had affected Ruru in some way. Because of that, he suggested that only the two of them go eat. Later, they enjoyed a delicious meal prepared by Kovar. Late that night, Aaron returned to training with his sword. As he watched him, Kovar realized just how remarkable the boy was. He devoted himself to training without wasting a single second. He had already known that Aaron was sincere, but now he also saw him as a genuinely upright young man. The journey continued without incident. They would arrive in Lathian the following day. When night fell, the group stopped at an inn to rest. Aaron spent some time alone, lost in thought, until he heard a familiar voice. Turning his head, he realized that it was Judith and Bart, seated at a nearby table. Surprised, Judith looked at him and asked if he was really Aaron, and it was. Bart asked what he was doing there, but Kovar told them to stop and demanded to know what they were trying to do to Aaron. Ruru was also very concerned, while Judith asked if she was a talking cat. Kovar could tell that the two of them were strong, extremely strong in fact. Aaron explained that they were his friends and fellow academy students. The two then introduced themselves to Kovar and Ruru, and Aaron introduced them as his masters. Kovar, the orc spiritist and seer, and Ruru, a master of mystical arts. Kovar apologized for the misunderstanding, explaining that they had recently gone through some difficult situations. Judith then remarked that Aaron had grown much taller, but immediately grabbed him by the neck and called him a bastard. She said he had promised to come back, yet never contacted them again. She had even thought he was dead, the damn idiot. Ruru asked if she was really sure she was his friend, and Bart wanted to know what the hell had happened to him. Aaron simply replied that it was a long story. Judith said they could save that for later, and suggested they have a sparring match first. They found a secluded arena, a place that was no longer in use. Standing across from Aaron, Judith asked where his sword was. Aaron replied that his sword was always ready, and summoned it using mystical arts. Bart was completely stunned. Ruru said that was exactly why she was a master of mystical arts. It was she who had taught him. Judith commented that he certainly had not been sitting around doing nothing during those 5 years. Then she charged forward at an even greater speed than she had possessed back at the academy. Her power was intense and ferocious, but when their swords collided, she sensed Aaron's calmness. He blocked her attack using almost exactly the same amount of force she had put into it. Bart immediately realized that Aaron was using both Judith's fencing style and his own at the same time. Judith asked what the hell he had been doing all this time. Aaron replied that she herself had said they should save the long stories for later. Bart then declared that he could not hold himself back any longer, and that they would all fight him at once. Even with both of them attacking at high speed, Aaron managed to dodge and block their strikes, redirecting the attacks with his sword. Bart admitted that it was making him nervous. It was incredible that Aaron had learned that technique after seeing it only once. Aaron replied that he would explain everything later while blocking another strike from Judith, who cut in between them. A moment later, one of his aerial attacks split the arena in half. But it was not a 2-against-1 fight. At that point, it was everyone against everyone. Bart charged at Judith, and Aaron took advantage of the opening to strike at both of them. Bart had to quickly jump out of the path of the giant sword. Every one of Aaron's blows carried devastating force. Bart commented that he still had that same absurd strength as always. Kovar watched in amazement because the battle was far from over, and all three of them seemed to be having the time of their lives. After fighting for a long time and finally growing tired, Judith admitted that Aaron was far better than she had expected. He replied that the two of them were incredibly strong as well. Bart said that it was not over yet, and that they were only stopping for the day. Judith complained that she had only just started having fun, but Aaron pointed out that the sun was already setting. She then asked him to show them that move, the one he had used during the final test. Aaron closed his eyes and focused for only a few moments. Bart and Judith found that strange because the first time he had performed it, he had needed much longer to prepare the attack. Within seconds, he unleashed the vertical slash that tore a massive rift through the arena. The two remarked that it was still insane, but now it seemed much faster and more refined. Judith said that he had gone back to training himself to exhaustion once again. Aaron, however, replied that it actually had not been that long since he had first managed to perform that technique. On the way back, Bart commented that he had returned to the fencing academy. Aaron confirmed that he had stopped by and explained that Lance and the director had told him about the visit. Meanwhile, Ruru was talking with Judith. She said that, from what she had seen earlier, Judith was very strong, and because of that, she wanted to give her a gift. She then handed her a ruby. Judith immediately refused, saying that she could not accept something so valuable, but Ruru replied that she had plenty of them, and began pulling an absurd number of rubies out of her bag. Bart asked what was going on, since Judith normally never turned down expensive things. She replied that black cats were bad luck, and that she was afraid of ending up cursed. The moment she heard that, Ruru burst into tears, ran away, and went to seek comfort from Aaron. Judith hurriedly tried to explain herself, saying that she had not meant it that way. Later, at an inn, only the three friends from the academy were gathered around the table. Bart commented that those two seemed like good people, the orc and the cat. Judith then slammed her hand on the table and told Aaron to spit it out already. Aaron replied that he did not even know where to begin. Maybe he should start with what had happened before he had even enrolled in the academy. So he told them everything. He spoke about the dream of the man who spent all his time swinging a sword. He told them about his training, the hardships he had endured, and finally explained the advice he had received from the director, which had led him to begin his journey. After hearing the entire story, Judith commented that he had really been through a lot. She admitted that his story had been a little irritating at first, because she had assumed he was just another one of those naturally gifted people who always seemed to appear around her. She remembered how bewildered she had been when she first met him at the fencing academy, when she learned that it was not just willpower, but also the help of that man from his dreams. She had even felt a little cheated, but thinking about it more carefully, that only meant Aaron had worked his ass off every single day. All that time, he had been fighting alone against a man who did nothing but endlessly swing his sword. In the end, Judith concluded that he had truly worked hard. He had spent years facing that man, and had continued moving forward on his own. It was impossible not to acknowledge how much he had struggled to reach where he was. Aaron thanked her for that. Then Bart commented that he had raised Judith properly, hadn't he? After all that time, he had helped shape her into a decent person. The old Judith would never have said something like that. She immediately asked if he had gone insane. Aaron noticed that Bart seemed much more relaxed than before as well. Bart then asked why Aaron did not join them on their journey, since they were also traveling the world. Aaron replied that he personally had no problem with it, but he still wondered whether everyone would get along. That worried him a little. Yet later that same night, everyone was already getting drunk together. Now this was living. As always, Judith and Bart started arguing over which of them was better. Before long, Judith was completely drunk, crying in Ruru's lap and apologizing, saying that she had never meant to say those things about her. Meanwhile, Ruru was practically being crushed by the hug and was begging Aaron for help. At that moment, he realized he had nothing to worry about. When Aaron mentioned that they were considering going to Lathion, Judith immediately told them not to even think about it. According to her, the place was awful. Nobody accepted duels there. Even the fencing academy had refused to receive them. All the famous people in the city were arrogant and would not even show up to meet them. The whole thing had been ridiculous. Kuvar asked whether they had shown proof that they belonged to Kronos' 27th generation. Judith replied that they had. Even so, people had made excuses and refused their challenges. Kuvar then explained that it was probably because of that very reason. Society had enormous expectations for the 27th generation, to the point of calling them the Golden Generation. For the fencing academy, accepting a duel against them was risky, because the institution's reputation would suffer greatly if they lost. Judith replied that it was simply cowardice. Unsure where to go next, Aaron heard Bart suggest Partisan. He had heard that it was a promising city where many free-spirited swordsmen gathered. Kuvar immediately agreed and said it would indeed be a good destination. A week later, after several excellent meals prepared by Kuvar, countless campsites organized by him, and a smooth journey, Judith and Aaron decided to duel right after eating to help settle their food. During the fight, Judith commented that he was already blocking her attacks with ease, so he must have gotten used to them. With that, she decided to summon the red aura. Ruru asked if that was an aura sword. Bart replied that it was not. Not yet. She was only releasing a small amount of aura. It was different from the aura sword of a true swordmaster. It was as if her aura had not yet taken on a definitive form. She was still practicing, but even that was enough to pressure her opponents. He explained that he had noticed this difference after learning how to use aura himself. Aaron, on the other hand, had already mastered both aura manifestation and the precise control of its application. Because of that, in his opinion, the person most likely to become a swordmaster among the three of them was, without a doubt, Aaron. Even so, Aaron ended up losing that duel. He admitted his defeat, and Judith celebrated, saying that she now had 9 victories and only 1 loss against him. Aaron thought that, to some extent, he had already expected that outcome. He was still far too weak. Beating them was still extremely difficult. After the duel, Bart said that now they could fight using words. He began by analyzing Judith. During the second day of sparring, she had stepped to the side when Aaron did something different and attacked first. She confirmed that she had indeed done that. Bart explained that she tended to move to the side whenever she became frustrated, regained her composure composure and then launched a counterattack. It was a recurring pattern in her swordsmanship. Judith admitted he was right and said she needed to pay more attention to that. Then Bart asked whether Aaron had noticed it. He explained that this was a swordsmanship discussion. They reviewed their own duels and analyzed each other's patterns, mistakes, and strengths. Aaron replied that he would not be able to participate in that conversation right away. For now, he would simply listen. Even so, he realized just how much his friends had improved. It was incredible. He decided that he needed to work even harder. That night, Aaron moved away from the others to train alone. When Judith noticed, she said that she would be leaving as well. Shortly afterward, Bart stood up, apologized, and said that he would do the same. Kuvar looked confused and asked if they were not even going to have dinner. Bart replied that whenever Aaron made that expression, he would end up showing absurd growth shortly afterward. Judith did not want to be left behind, so she was going to train as well. Then Bart asked Kuvar whether he had ever seen that happen before. Kuvar replied that he had. Those moments when Aaron became completely absorbed in his own thoughts. Bart laughed and commented that the guy really never changed. As he swung his sword alone, Aaron thought that the headmaster had been right. Simply imitating someone else was insignificant. What truly mattered was understanding the core of swordsmanship. He had the vertical cut swordsmanship of the man from his dreams. He had the great sword style he had learned at Kronos. He could also absorb details from Judith's and Bart's swordsmanship. By combining all of that, he would be able to refine his own path. The next morning, during another duel, Judith immediately realized that he had become stronger once again. She complained, saying that it was cheating. Bart replied that life was like that. He had learned that after meeting Ilya 5 years ago, and now he was learning it all over again. Kuvar watched everything in silence and thought that Aaron was truly incredible. Once again, he had narrowed the gap between himself and his friends. Using his clairvoyance, Kuvar also noticed something interesting. An intense fire-like energy surrounded Judith's body. People with a disposition like hers simply could not stand losing. Because of that, Judith's task would be to learn how to control the fire energy she carried within herself. 2 days later, Kuvar was even more impressed by everyone's progress. Judith once again surpassed her own limits, and impressed Aaron so much that she managed to subdue him with her sword. When she won, she celebrated excitedly. Kuvar realized that the move she had just used was a direct reference to one of Aaron's techniques. The circumstances that allowed such a move to work existed for only an extremely brief moment, something that could be considered pure innate talent. Judith then asked what they thought, and Aaron replied that it had been amazing. He truly had not imagined that she would be able to do something like that. As he watched the two of them, Kuvar concluded that it was not merely talent, it was their devotion to winning. They could not be compared to anyone else, because they were constantly pushing each other to grow. Excited, Judith declared that they were going to crush those guys from Partizan. Meanwhile, Ruru thought that the three of them still did not seem to realize just how far they had progressed. In any case, they would find out as soon as they arrived in the city. After some time, the group finally arrived in Partizan, the promising city of the continent's western region. The streets were filled with swordsmen moving back and forth. Seeing that, Kuvar commented that there was surely a mercenary agency somewhere around there. He and Ruru headed to an inn, while the three friends went to visit the Hira Swordsmanship Academy. When they arrived, Bart knocked on the door and reminded the others that they would keep the fact that they were from Kronos a secret. An instructor welcomed them and commented that they looked far too young to be swordsmen. Before he could even ask where they came from, another person appeared. It was the academy's director himself, Hira. The three introduced themselves and thanked him for his hospitality. Just by observing them, Hira realized that they were not ordinary swordsmen. Because of that, he decided not to leave them with instructor Kent. Instead, he asked if they had come to duel. Since the first floor was being used by apprentices, he suggested they follow him to a private training room. There, he himself would be their opponent. Instructor Kent was completely shocked by the decision. Judith, on the other hand, found it interesting. To everyone's surprise, Aaron was the first to volunteer to face him. Before the duel began, Hira explained that it would be a problem if anyone got hurt during the match. Therefore, they would use wooden swords. As soon as Kent signaled the start of the duel, Hira rushed forward, intending to test Aaron's true strength. However, with a single movement, Aaron struck the director on the head with his sword. The poor man could not even react or dodge and collapsed to the ground unconscious. Alarmed, Judith commented that he had killed the director, but Aaron replied that he had not killed anyone. Later, back in the office, Aaron apologized to Director Hira, but he replied that there was no need. The fight had been fair. He then asked which academy they were from. When the three revealed that they belonged to the 27th generation of Kronos, Hira answered that it was exactly what he had expected. There was no one else like them. At first, he thought the three had come there to look down on him, but after the duel, he realized he had been mistaken. They were probably just searching for strong people to train with. In fact, the answer to his doubts had become clear during the fight. Everyone from the 27th generation seemed unaware of just how strong they really were. Hira then decided to explain something important. He asked what level swordsmen normally aimed to reach. Many people would answer that it was the level of master swordsman, but reality was different. Most dreamed only of becoming specialists, since that was already an extremely difficult and realistic goal for the vast majority of swordsmen. According to him, all the academy directors in Partizan were specialists. Even so, almost none of them would be able to face the three. To be more specific, only 4 or 5 directors could duel them. Even then, they would probably lose just as he had. For that reason, the three should should be proud of themselves. However, Hira noticed that Judith looked disappointed. She genuinely wanted to face someone strong. That was when he revealed that there was only one person in Partizan capable of providing that challenge. Immediately, Judith asked who it was and whether he was a master. Hira told her to be patient and explained that he was not exactly a master, but he was more famous than many of them. There were around 100 publicly known master swordsmen, and that man was considered the next person likely to join their ranks, the 101st. His name was Jet Frost. Hira explained that Jet Frost would be holding guided duels at his mansion in 2 days. As soon as she heard that, Judith decided that was where they would go. When they finally arrived at the location, they found an enormous crowd. Seeing that, Hira commented that there were far too many people this time. According to him, that lazy Jet could simply accept challengers as they arrived, but instead he preferred turning everything into a grand event. Not understanding, Judith asked why he had accompanied the group there. Startled by the sudden question, Hira replied that Jet was much stronger than he was, and that dueling such a man was also a valuable learning opportunity for him. Curious, Bart asked if they were friends. Hira replied that they were. The two had been friends for nearly 10 years. In fact, he had already tried to arrange a private duel, but Jet had refused. Shortly afterward, an employee appeared to receive all the participants. His name was Glenn, Jet Frost's butler. He explained that there were more candidates than expected, and that only those who passed a test would be granted a guided duel. The test was simple. All they had to do was strike a measuring device and score at least 5,000 points. Aaron immediately liked the idea when he realized it was a magical measuring device. He remembered that the first time he had used something similar, he had scored 10,000 points. Upon hearing that, Hira became nervous. 10,000 points was not something a person should mention so casually. The participants began taking the test. Most managed a little over 5,000 or 6,000 points and celebrated enthusiastically. Then it was Hira's turn. Glenn recognized him immediately, and the director managed to score 12,000 points, surpassing his own previous record. When it was Aaron's turn, he summoned his sword through mystical arts. Seeing that, Glenn asked if it was a magic sword. Aaron explained that it was created through mystical arts, and asked if there was any problem with that. He also clarified that the sword had no special powers. It was simply extremely durable. After thinking for a moment, Glenn decided to provide a normal sword with the same shape to avoid any discussion about unfair advantage. Later, using the ordinary sword, Aaron struck the measuring device and reached an impressive 18,000 points. Next, Judith and Bart did the same. Judith scored 16,581 points, while Bart reached 16,601. The results left everyone around completely shocked by the three of them. Bart asked if they couldn't let him win just once against Aaron. The boy replied that the gap between them wasn't even that big. Then Bart commented that Judith seemed dissatisfied. She replied that she only failed to get a better score because she missed the mark in the middle. After falling behind, she once again thought she was the weakest of the three. Later, Glenn explained that since many participants had passed, the next matches would be in a 3 versus 1 format. 3 people would enter at a time, and he asked for everyone's understanding. In the end, only the 3 friends and director Hira remained. Glenn then announced that Hira would have a special duel this time. The director replied that at least he was receiving friend treatment. The 3 friends were the last to participate. Before the duel began, Bart had an idea and whispered something into Hira's ear. The director told him not to worry. Shortly after, he was already dueling his old friend Jet. Hira could barely lift his sword and was trembling from exhaustion. He admitted that he truly was no match for his friend. Jet replied that it would be strange to defeat him so easily. Even after losing, Hira thanked him for the duel and said it had been very helpful. Jet replied that it was natural, since he had been helping him all these years. Then Hira commented that only one group remained. Jet said he just wanted to finish quickly and rest. However, Hira explained that the challengers had made a proposal. If they lost, they would do anything Jet wanted for a month. But if they won, they wanted him to personally train them for the same period. Jet found the idea interesting and said that if they lost, he would make the 3 of them clean the mansion and even give Glenn a day off. Hira replied that that sounded perfect. Later, when Jet learned who the challengers were, he was shocked. He asked why neither Glenn nor Hira had said that the 3 were specialists. Glenn replied that he hadn't informed him because Hira had ratted him out, revealing that it was Sir Jet who drank the fruit wine he had been saving. Jet tried to defend himself, saying the bottle was almost empty anyway. Still, Bart thanked him for accepting the proposal. Then he introduced himself as Bart Lloyd, apprentice of the 27th generation of Kronos. Judith and Aaron also introduced themselves and said they were under his care. At that moment, Jet realized that the 3 of them were part of the famous golden generation of Kronos. As soon as the duel began, the 3 advanced at the same time. The first truly dangerous attack came from Aaron, and Jet made the mistake of blocking it. The boy's physical strength was absurd. While trying to react, he was nearly disarmed by Bart, who moved like lightning. At the same time, Judith appeared from the side, attempting a full-force strike. Fortunately, Jet was extremely fast and managed to escape the 3 of them. As he retreated, he realized they had excellent teamwork. His plan was to separate their attacks, but he barely had time to think. He had to duck to avoid a strike from Judith, use all the strength in his legs to evade a crushing attack from Aaron, and then leap away to avoid being hit by Bart. Up to that point, he had only been defending and exhausting himself. He hadn't even managed to counterattack. Watching from afar, Glenn commented that the 3 were really giving the master a hard time. Hira replied that seeing Jet in that situation, the bet had had already been worth it. Meanwhile, Jet realized that if things continued like this, he would really end up becoming the mentor of those 3 kids. He had no intention of allowing that, so he released his aura, which fell over their bodies like a massive weight. Recognizing their skill, he decided he would fight seriously from that point on. Bart noticed that even approaching had become difficult. Still, Judith managed to advance. In response, Jet threw his sword toward her. She blocked it, but in that instant it disappeared. Now, lighter without his weapon, he moved quickly and drew a second hidden sword. When he appeared in front of Bart, the boy couldn't even react, especially after meeting Jet Frost's intimidating gaze. A thrust stopped just centimeters from his chest. Jet declared that he was defeated. One had already fallen. Using the reflection of the blade, he noticed Eren attacking from behind. He turned his body and landed a kick that sent the boy flying. Judith tried to take advantage of the opening, but Jet jumped and appeared behind her, defeating her as well. He then declared that now there were 2 down. With both of them defeated, he took the opportunity to comment on their performance. He said Bart's swordsmanship was impressive for someone so young and praised his technique, but stated that he still lacked the insight to predict certain movements. Bart replied that the attack was not something that could be blocked. Jet agreed and explained that he had truly committed to that strike. About Judith, he commented that her attacks were too simple. It seemed she had forgotten to use her own body's momentum, limiting herself to merely cutting with the sword. According to him, this completely restricted the weapon's true potential. In the end, only Eren remained standing. Jet said he would let the boy attack first. Since his strikes were extremely heavy, he asked him to use his strongest attack. Hearing that, Bart and Judith started laughing, asking if he was really telling Eren to go all out from the start. Not even Hira understood their reaction. Eren asked if it was really fine, because the hall might end up damaged. Jet replied that training halls broke from time to time, and it would be fine. Then Eren said he would go all out. For a fraction of a second, he closed his eyes and focused his mind. Immediately after, an overwhelming aura exploded around him. For the first time, Jet felt fear. A cold sweat ran down his face. Without wasting the opportunity, Eren gathered all the strength of the flame in his heart and rushed forward to attack. However, before the blow could even come down, Jet raised his hand and surrendered. He declared that he had lost and begged Eren to lower his sword. Later, the 3 said they would be under his care from that moment on. Jet wasn't very pleased with the situation, but Hira seemed extremely proud. The next day, the real training began. In an enclosed courtyard, the 3 found a magic circle drawn on the ground and another on the wall. There were also 2 wooden platforms, one filled with stones and the other empty. Jet explained that this would be their training ground for the next month. By activating the magic circle, their bodies immediately became much heavier. It was gravity magic. He then explained that aura efficiency improved when the body was strengthened, and that aura capacity could also grow by overcoming extreme hardship like this. Their task was simple: move all the stones from one side to the other under increased gravity. They had until noon to finish. If they failed, he would assume they lacked the will to learn and would fail them. 3 hours later, Jet returned already expecting the task to be completed. However, to his surprise, the 3 were still carrying stones. He genuinely did not expect them to fail something so simple. It seemed he had overestimated them. Here is the revised passage. But Glenn told his master that, in fact, that was already the 3rd time. They had finished the task before 11 o'clock. However, instead of sitting down to rest, they chose to keep training. Hearing this, Jet commented that that was bad. The 3 were getting too enthusiastic. Then he wondered just how far they would be able to go. On the 2nd day of training, they underwent extremely intense physical conditioning. On the 5th day, they had to carry heavy weights over long distances. Still, Jet noticed that none of them showed any signs of giving up. At the inn, already lying down to sleep, Ruru asked Eren if they had only done physical training again. She wanted to know if they weren't fighting anymore. Eren replied that he was sure Jet had his reasons for it. Ruru complained, saying he must be a fraud. Meanwhile, Eren reflected on Jet's title, the 101st strongest swordsman. Jet himself thought he was not worthy of that title. He knew it. The eyes of those kids had not been shaped by talent alone. There would come a time for him too, a moment when he would have eyes as burning as theirs. The next morning, Jet announced that he would begin guiding each of them in swordsmanship based on their individual traits. The first was Eren. After quickly defeating him in a duel, Jet explained that he was excellent overall, but overly passive. He said Eren seemed trapped in the idea that he would always be slower than his opponents. He asked if Eren truly believed he would be dragged around from start to finish by someone like Judith, who had such refined footwork. He then explained that, although Eren was slower than her, that did not mean he should act only reactively. On the contrary, he needed to keep occupying space, as if expanding his own territory. He should fill the battlefield with his presence, and force his opponents to move according to his will. While explaining, Jet slowly walked toward Eren, wrapped in his overwhelming aura. He said that an opponent who cannot escape or counterattack will inevitably run out of options. Then he pressed Eren's sword, forcing him to step back to demonstrate the concept in practice. Eren sincerely thanked him for the advice. A few days later, he was facing Judith in a supervised training session led by Jet. After observing them for a while, the master told them to stop. He said Judith had already pushed herself enough for the day. She immediately replied that he was talking nonsense. According to her, they had barely started, and she was convinced she would win this time. With his sharp gaze, Jet said he had advice only for her. He asked her to come to his private office and dismissed Eren and Bart, telling them they could go have lunch. lunch. While the two of them were eating, they heard an angry shout coming from the office. Shortly afterward, Judith stormed out, slamming the door shut. She passed by them like a hurricane, without saying a word. Curious, they went to ask Jet what had happened. The master replied that whenever he looked at those three, he was reminded of his own youth, of the time when simply holding a sword was fun. He had reached the specialist level at a very young age, and was praised as someone destined to become a great master swordsman. However, reality turned out to be cruel. The continent was filled with swordsmen even more talented than him. Over time, constant comparisons and competition consumed his passion. He stopped focusing purely on his own swordsmanship, and began to worry too much about others. Comparisons led to competition, and competition led to the desire to win. Perhaps everything would have worked out if he had managed to control those emotions in balance, but that did not happen. When someone is surrounded by geniuses, impatience only grows. Because of that, he advised Judith to free herself from comparisons, and from the constant need to compete. He wanted her to find the true origin of her sword, but the result was exactly the opposite of what he expected. Sometime later, Judith herself returned to finish hearing what he had to say. She apologized for her exaggerated reaction, and admitted that she knew he was not trying to mock her. Then she explained her point of view. She said it was true that those two bastards were better than her, and that she spent every day trying to catch up to them. However, unlike them, she did not pick up the sword because she liked it. She picked up the sword to survive. For Judith, competition and results had always been directly tied to survival. The origin of her determination was precisely competition itself. If she could defeat more talented people than herself, and keep pushing her own limits, then she would be able to endure any suffering that came her way. Upon hearing those words, Jet realized that she also carried within her the same burning flame he saw in the other two. A week later, it was time for their departure. The three of them thanked him deeply for all the training they had received during that month. Then Jet asked what their next destination would be. They replied that they had not decided yet. That was when Jet recommended they visit the Land of Trial. He explained that the Colosseum of the Land of Trial was the pride of the kingdom of Cagliard, one of the 5 great western kingdoms. It was a place famous for gathering exceptional warriors. However, according to rumors, the level of competition had increased drastically after the emergence of an extremely talented swordswoman, a swordswoman who also belonged to the 27th generation of Kronos. Her name was Ilya Lindsay, and at that moment, she was the absolute champion of the Land of Trial. And that's it for today's story. Leave a like and subscribe, because we'll definitely be making the other parts of this series.